What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty. Join my Discord if you want to chat and share your thoughts, the link is in the description. 4SP Chapter 94 Wendy joins Fairy Tail. After everyone worked together to deal with all the problems, the belatedly arrived Magic Enforcement Force of the new council, coincidentally, arrived at the scene and quickly controlled the few remaining Oración Cease members. It's said to be a few, but in fact there are only two people left at this moment. Eric, the Cobra who was defeated by Natsu, and Richard, who was corrupted by the Nirvana magic. What's even more unexpected is that the brother Richard has been searching for many years turns out to be Urza's companion Wally. The moment he learned that his brother was still alive, Richard could no longer suppress his excitement and joy and burst into tears on the spot. However, for another suspect, Jelal, although they had received intelligence that he was also involved, due to the inability to arrest him on the spot, and the strong mental pressure exerted by Raphael, the matter ultimately ended in vain. Sister Urza, Jelal, did he think of me? He saved me back then? On the way back to the guild, Wendy, who was gradually recovering, held Urza's hand tightly and asked expectantly. Jelal said that he was either building the Tower of Heaven or studying magic, and he never met you. Urza shook her head, looked down at Wendy who was becoming disappointed, and couldn't help hugging her. This poor girl, her friends who had lived together for so long disappeared one after another in front of her. Urza couldn't bear to hurt this girl, but Jelal, who had recovered his memory, did not recognize this girl at all. Speaking of Jelal, Urza's thoughts drifted to that moment. 3 hours ago, Jelal. You really don't remember anything? Looking at the people's backs gradually leaving, Urza slowly turned around, her eyes falling on the silent man who lowered his head. There was a hint of doubt in Jalal's eyes. Jelal took a deep breath, raised his head and looked at Urza and said. Actually, this was true before, but just now, when Raphael unlocked the self-discipline breaking magic for me, most of my memory has been restored. His words exploded in Urza's ears like thunder, shocking her. However, Urza quickly came to her senses, shook her head slightly, a bitter smile appeared on her lips, and then stared into the distance and said. That's good. This way, you can remember the sins you have committed. Jelal shook his head silently, then turned his head, held Urza's hand tightly, and looked at her sincerely and firmly. No, Urza, I know very well that the place where I need to atone for my sins the most is the harm I caused to you. Urza was stunned for a moment, her body trembled slightly, she slowly turned her head and her eyes met Jalal's. At that moment, she seemed to see the boy who stood in front of her and vowed to protect her when she was a child. Jalal's eyes at that time were also so firm and serious. Urza felt the warmth and strength in Jalal's palm and smiled. She knew that the righteous Jelal of her childhood was back again. Then, what are you going to do next? Urza's inquiry made Jelal fall into silence. He knew his sins and evils and wanted to make amends, but he didn't know where to start. Looking at the confused Jelal in front of her, Urza couldn't help but feel a pity in her heart. Advertisement. After hesitating for a moment, she finally plucked up the courage and said softly, otherwise, will you join Fairy Tail? Although the sound was soft, it was like a stone thrown into a lake, causing ripples. Jalal's body trembled when he heard these words, and he stared at Urza in astonishment. He never thought that Urza would make such a suggestion. This man who was once swallowed by darkness now saw a warm light in Urza's eyes. That was tolerance and acceptance of him. Jalal's eyes gradually softened, and he couldn't help but reach out his hand and gently stroke Urza's beautiful long crimson hair. Then, he shook his head with a wry smile, his eyes full of emotion. I'm actually looking forward to joining Fairy Tail. I really want to see what kind of magic that place has, which can completely free you from the shadows of many years. Jalal's words were full of longing for the future. It also revealed his deep concern for Urza. When Urza heard this, a look of joy suddenly appeared on her face. However, just a moment later, her smile disappeared without a trace, replaced by endless loneliness and disappointment. But now I can't join such a great guild. I still have many unatonable sins. The harm I caused to you, Simon and the others, and the harm I caused to the world. Jelal stared closely at the depressed Urza, his heart filled with endless love and care. Unable to suppress the surging emotions in his heart, he took a step forward without hesitation and hugged Urza forcefully into his arms. He felt her slightly trembling body, as if he could touch the pain and sadness deep in her heart. In Urza's ear, Jelal whispered softly in a low and gentle voice. Urza, please believe me. When I completely atone for the sins I have committed, I will definitely come to you immediately. No matter how time passes, no matter how far away the distance is, I will walk towards you unswervingly. So please be patient with me, okay? His words were as warm and gentle as the spring breeze, gently soothing Urza's injured heart. The moment Jelal hugged Urza, her body stiffened involuntarily, but she soon relaxed. Listening to Jalal's sincere promise, Urza's originally tense nerves gradually relaxed and her body gradually became softer. At the same time, the hard and heavy armor on her body unconsciously turned into a light and elegant uniform. Urza was silent, but slowly raised her arms, wrapping them tightly around Jalal's broad and solid back as well. At this moment, no words were needed, the tacit understanding between them had been conveyed through the hug. In this silent moment, their heartbeats seemed to merge into one. Ha ha ha, Wendy, your magic is great. I really don't get dizzy anymore, just use this magic on me every day from now on. Natsu shouted excitedly, his voice echoing in the air as if it was about to break through the sky. This sudden shout broke the peaceful atmosphere around her and jerked Urza, who was immersed in memories, back to the real world. She raised her head and glanced at the group of friends who were playing noisily, and a faint smile couldn't help but appear at the corner of her mouth. Advertisement. At this moment, Wendy was quietly nestled in Urza's warm embrace, with an innocent smile on her little face. She blinked her bright big eyes, looked at the elated Natsu, and replied softly, "No, Natsu-san, if you use this magic too many times, the effect will gradually weaken." Hearing what Wendy said, the stone hanging in Urza's heart finally fell. Seeing that Wendy seemed to have come out of the low mood just now and regained her former vitality and happiness, Raphael also smiled happily. In fact, just now, he almost couldn't help but tell Wendy the truth of the matter. However, considering that Miss Gunn had no intention of making this secret public, Raphael decided to respect his wishes. Maybe after Wendy officially joins the guild in the future, she will gradually notice the clues. After all, as a regular dragon slayer, they are always extremely sensitive to the scent of people they meet. Suddenly, Raphael seemed to recall something important. He quickly reached into his arms and fumbled around, then took out 3 keys that shone with dazzling golden light, and handed them to Lucy. "Because that angel has been defeated by me, and what she has done has a strong dark color, the contract between the 3 celestial spirits and her has also been terminated. They specifically asked me to find a celestial spirit mage with a sense of justice to take over these powers, and I think you are the most suitable candidate," Raphael explained with a smile. Lucy's eyes widened, her face full of surprise and disbelief. Raphael smiled softly and placed the 3 keys firmly in Lucy's hand. Looking at the back of Lucy happily running to celestial spirit to sign the contract, Raphael raised the corner of his mouth slightly, revealing a smile like watching a good show. "I really look forward to seeing what kind of interesting expression Lucy will show when she finds out that Scorpio is actually the boyfriend of Aquarius. That's it. We kidnapped Wendy and Carla. Ahem, and brought them to Fairy Tale." Raphael introduced Wendy in front of everyone in Fairy Tale. "Please take care of me." Wendy smiled and bowed 90 degrees to everyone. Carla, on the other hand, looked up at Tsunere. The people around who were drinking were stunned for a while, and then they suddenly became excited. Oh, what a cute little sister. Look, isn't this the mother happy? These two are so cute. Welcome to join our guild." Looking at everyone with excited faces, Natsu showing off his experience to Gray, Elfman and others, Raphael running to Mirajane for a hug, and standing next to Makarov and watching with Makarov smiling, her Urza. Wendy's heart felt warm and her face was filled with a happy smile. "Grandpa Rob and Lou, I really met the best friends and joined the best guild. You were right." Chapter 95 Gear DOS. Mirajane on the side gently pushed Raphael's big head, then leaned forward, close to Wendy and Carla, with a curious light in her eyes, a faint smile on her lips, and asked softly, "You guys look so cute. Carla and Happy look alike. Could it be that they use the same type of magic? So, Wendy, what kind of magical magic can you use?" Hearing Mirajane's question, Wendy's eyes suddenly lit up, and she looked at Mirajane with surprise on her face, her voice trembling with excitement. "Wow, it's really Sister Mirajane herself. She's many times more beautiful than the magazine photos." As she spoke, she turned her head and happily shared the joy with Carla. However, Carla's hair suddenly exploded as if a sensitive nerve had been touched. She jumped up suddenly, 3 feet high, and shouted angrily to Mirajane. "What nonsense are you talking about? I have nothing in common with that damn tomcat. Please don't confuse me with it." Faced with Carla's sudden reaction, Mirajane was not surprised or angry. Instead, she still narrowed her charming eyes and stared at the 2 little guys with a smile, secretly sighing in her heart that they were so cute. "What I use is Sky Magic, Sky Dragon Slayer Mage." Wendy turned slightly, faced everyone, put her hands behind her back, and whispered her magic. People who were still immersed in excitement suddenly became silent after hearing these words. The whole scene was extremely quiet, as if time had stopped flowing. Wendy raised her head in surprise and looked at everyone. When she saw the expressions on everyone's faces, she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed in her heart. She lowered her head silently, with a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Don't you believe it?" However, at this moment, a burst of exclamation broke the silence. The 2 uncles Macau and Wakaba exclaimed almost at the same time, staring at the petite and cute girl in front of them with excitement on their faces. "Wow, that's amazing." Macau was the first to shout. "You are actually a dragon slayer. How amazing," Wakaba immediately echoed. "And it's the same as Natsu," someone interjected. "With Gajeel, our guild now has 3 powerful dragon slayers," another person shouted excitedly. Wendy, who was originally a little depressed, was overjoyed when she heard these compliments and recognitions. She raised her head again, her eyes shining with joy, and she looked at everyone with a smile. Looking at the friends around her who were happy because of her, a bright smile bloomed on her face again. At this moment, Makarov was even more excited. He jumped up excitedly, raised his arms high, and shouted loudly, "We are going to hold a grand celebration banquet tonight." This news made everyone cheer, and the atmosphere was very warm. A group of people cheered instantly, but Natsu lost control and burned all of Lucy's clothes with a fire. Among them, only Gajeel was unhappy because he discovered that Wendy, who had just come in, was accompanied by a cat. At this time, Wendy, who was happy, suddenly turned her head and looked at the door of a room on the 2nd floor, but she only saw a room with an open door. Advertisement. It is worth mentioning that Mirajane's star power is so terrible that in just 3 days, the gold coins to rebuild the guild were collected, so after Raphael and the others came back from the crusade against Oracion Cease, the 6-story guild had been established. It has become the tallest and most eye-catching building in Magnolia Town. What happened? Carla followed Wendy's line of sight and turned her head curiously, looking at the door of the empty room, and asked Wendy with a suspicious look on her face. Wendy waved her hand gently, indicating that it was nothing serious, but there was a trace of confusion in her eyes. It's nothing, I just seemed to smell a familiar scent just now. Carla frowned and thought for a moment, then smiled and guessed. Maybe it's the smell of Raphael and the others, after all, everyone is gathered here. She thought Wendy must be too nervous and delusional. It's possible. Wendy nodded slightly in agreement, but her eyes were still hesitant and she couldn't help but take another look at the empty room. Then he turned around and merged into the joyful and festive atmosphere. At the same time, in an unnoticed corner, Mr. Gong was quietly hiding next to that secluded room. He stared at Wendy quietly, silent, as if he wanted to say something, but finally chose to leave quietly. At this moment, Raphael, who was sitting under the stage and enjoying the delicious milkshake specially prepared by Mirajane, raised his head with emotion. I happened to witness Mr. Gang's figure drifting away until he disappeared. He shook his head helplessly and sighed softly. At night, Mirajane helped the drunk Raphael to his apartment. She looked at Raphael and said angrily, "Really, if you don't know how to drink, then don't drink. You are so drunk." Raphael just discovered today that he actually can't drink. Even Saitama's strong physique can't handle the kind of drinking he drinks. But the big reason is that he feels that he will get drunk in his heart. Raphael put his hand on Mirajane's shoulder and walked in a daze. Hearing Mirajane's voice, he turned to look at Mirajane. Under the moonlight, Mirajane's skin exudes a faint luster, as if it can shine through. Her eyes were like deep lakes, shining charmingly in the moonlight. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly like butterfly wings, and her hair fluttered in the wind, as smooth as silk. Raphael was stunned and murmured, "Mira, you are so beautiful." Mirajane, who was still looking at her angrily, was stunned for a moment, and a blush suddenly appeared on her fair face. She covered her face and whispered, "Idiot," and turned around and ran away. Raphael rubbed his head and looked at Mirajane's figure running into the room under the moonlight, grinning silly. A few days later, everyone returned to their normal lives, doing tasks and catching fish. Wendy also quickly entered the big family. Only Happy, the little licking cat, was courteous to Carla every day. Although Carla just ignored her, at this time, dang, dang, dang. The entire Magnolia town rang with bells that echoed through the sky. The door of the guild was knocked open with a bang, and Warren ran in a panic. "It's bad. That man is back," except for the newly joined Juvia, Gajeel, Wendy and Lucy. Everyone looked happy, and Natsu cheered happily. "This is ringing the bell. It's Gear Doss who is back." Advertisement, Gear Doss? Wendy looked at Lucy with a puzzled look. "I don't know either, but I heard that he is the most powerful mage in Fairy Tail besides Raphael." Lucy also spread her hands and looked at Raphael, who was still drinking a milkshake. She didn't know if it was her imagination, but she always felt that Raphael was trying to be cool. Mirajane looked at the unhappy Raphael in a funny way. She knew why Raphael was unhappy. It was because he was not as strong as Gear when he returned to the guild. He was such a childish boy. Wow, Wendy looked in the direction of the door with admiration. This was the first time she knew that someone could actually ask the town to notify the return. Everything is fine. But why are these people so excited again? Didn't the celebration party just end? Carla, who prefers quietness, looked at the excited crowd speechlessly. "It's normal for everyone to be so excited," Mirajane explained to them with a smile, "because he hasn't been back for 3 years. 3 years? What have you been doing? So long?" Lucy looked at Mirajane in surprise. She couldn't imagine what it would be like not to return to the guild for so long. "Silly girl, of course it's because of work. S-class magicians not only accept S-class missions, they also have SS-class missions, 10-year missions and 100-year missions." Mirajane nodded Lucy's head and explained for her. Lucy was surprised for a moment. She didn't expect that there were so many levels of tasks. Wendy looked at Mirajane in confusion. What do 10-year missions and 100-year missions mean? Does it mean to do 10 years and 100 years? Mirajane covered her mouth and smiled, not expecting Wendy to ask such a cute question. Of course not. A 10-year mission refers to a mission that no one can complete in 10 years. The same goes for a 100-year mission, a mission that no one can complete in 100 years. And what Geardas is going to complete is a century-old mission. Wendy and Lucy covered their mouths in surprise. They didn't expect Geardas to be such a powerful being. Also, do you know why Raphael is called the strongest? Mirajane looked at their surprised expressions, smiled and asked another question. Isn't it because he took over the magical elf power? Lucy and Wendy looked at each other, and Lucy answered uncertainly. No, Raphael already had the title of strongest before this. Mirajane looked at Raphael sitting on the bar with a salty expression on his face, and a trace of pride flashed in his eyes. Because he has completed 700-year missions, and he completed them alone, and the longest time did not exceed a month. Lucy and Wendy were instantly shocked, and even Carla, who was furiously rejecting Happy, was stunned. No wonder he is the strongest. Lucy looked at Raphael in surprise, and then looked at Raphael with twitching eyes. How does he look like the strongest now? He looks like a guy who has nothing to do. Uncle. At this time, outside the town of Magnolia, a red-haired man wearing a long brown cloak slowly walked over. Advertisement Chapter 96 The Incomplete Geardas. Oh my god, it's Geardas who is back. What? Really? Lord Geardas is back. Pedestrians in the city shouted in surprise, put down what they were doing, and hurriedly ran in the same direction. Their steps were vigorous and fast, as if they had experienced such emergencies countless times. Their skilled movements made people feel distressed inexplicably. At the same time, a group of trumpets with wings were flying over the city, and they kept making loud sounds. Open black lens bracket. Magnolia City is about to enter gear death mode. Close black lens bracket. Citizens are requested to gather at the designated location as soon as possible. Close black lens bracket. Again, please hurry up. Close black lens bracket. These broadcasts echoed in every corner of the city, urging people to act faster. Seeing this scene, everyone in the guild also became busy. They moved the tables and chairs, opened the door, and made preparations to welcome Gyarados. The entire guild was filled with a tense and exciting atmosphere. Wendy and Carla stood aside, stunned by what they saw. They never thought that this man's return would cause such a huge sensation, causing the entire guild to be in a state of excitement. Lucy's eyes widened and she walked out the door with a face full of astonishment, but what she saw in front of her made her stunned. I saw the buildings outside the city moving slowly like living creatures. Accompanied by large-scale overall rotation and displacement, they opened up a wide avenue in the middle of the originally crowded street. The whole street actually cracked. Lucy screamed, her body shaking involuntarily. She danced with surprise, seeing for the first time that a city could be moved because of one person. Mira Jane was behind Lucy. Looking at Lucy's surprised look, she couldn't help but smile and said softly, "Ah Lala, there is nothing we can do about it. The magic cast by Gyarados is extremely powerful and can easily shatter any object he comes into contact with. Therefore, he must be extra careful when walking, as a slight mistake may cause him to fall into pieces." Entire residential buildings were destroyed. So, I really don't understand this Gyarados guy. Where does he get so much money to buy drinks? Every time he breaks something during a mission, the compensation amount is higher than the reward he gets. Raphael has always been confused about this problem. What makes him even more confused is that Gyarados actually has spare money to hook up with girls. Wait, picking up girls? Raphael suddenly had a flash of inspiration, clapped his hands, and thought suddenly. So it turns out that Gyarados has always been kept by a rich woman, then wouldn't I also have a chance? However, just as Raphael was immersed in his beautiful fantasy, a biting chill climbed up his spine without warning. He turned his head tremblingly and saw Mira Jane staring at him with squinted eyes and a half smile. "Why do I feel like you were having some bad idea?" Mira Jane's tone contained a hint of threat and warning. When Mira Jane said this, Raphael was so frightened that he trembled and quickly waved his hands and explained, "No. No, he. Haha. Gyarados is coming soon. Let's hurry over and greet him." As he spoke, he walked in a hurry, as if he wanted to escape the scene as soon as possible, for fear that Mira Jane would continue to ask questions. Just when Raphael had just finished speaking, a tall figure appeared in front of the guild gate without any warning. That was Gyarados. He has a brown back hair and a little stubble on his chin. He is wearing a dark green cloak, and the whole person looks particularly strong and strong. Advertisement. I'm sorry, I seem to be lost again. Gyarados muttered to himself, looking around at this extremely luxurious place, and finally shook his head helplessly. Then, he lowered his head to look at Mira Jane, and asked with suspicion. "Miss, may I ask, I remember that there should be a guild called Fairy Tale nearby, right? Do you know where it is specifically?" Mira Jane first shook her head helplessly, then sighed softly, then raised her hand and pointed at the eye-catching coat of arms hanging on the guild wall, and replied angrily. "I'm Mira, isn't this our guild?" After hearing this, Gyarados frowned, and his originally cold face instantly became serious, but then it seemed as if he had been cast by magic, and suddenly a look as cute as a husky blossom. Lovely smile. "Ah, is it Mira? Why has it changed so much? The guild has also changed a lot. Has it been renovated?" Raphael glared angrily at Gyarados' ****** hand on Mira Jane's shoulder, rushed forward, slapped his hand off, and shouted angrily, Hey, don't mess around. Touch my girlfriend, you pervert." Gyarados was turning his head dejectedly to see who was so bold, but he saw Raphael's smooth head at a glance, and he burst out laughing. "You! Shut up!" Raphael's anger was instantly ignited, and he blamed it all on Laxus. Looking at Gyarados, who was still laughing, he punched him into the ground, then pulled Mira Jane away without looking back. "Ouch, your fists are still so powerful." Gyarados emerged from the hole while rubbing the swelling on his head, shook his head and sighed. "It's no wonder you can complete the century-old mission." At this moment, Natsu rushed towards Gyarados like an excited bull, shouting as he rushed, "Gyarados, I want to fight you." "Ah, it's really troublesome, let's do it next time." Gyarados yawned lazily, and with a wave of his hand, he embedded Natsu on the ceiling like throwing garbage, causing Raphael to roar again. "Gyarados, as soon as you come back, destroy the ceiling and floor, pay for the repairs." "Ah, sorry, Gyarados scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. Lucy complained with a black line. "No, you don't care about Natsu being hit on the ceiling, but you care about the broken ceiling and floor. And the floor was broken by Raphael, right? But there are really many new faces in the guild." Gyarados looked at the newcomers in the guild with a smile, and his heart was full of emotion. "Gyarados, how is the work done?" Makarov, who was sitting at the bar, waved to Gyarados. "Oh, President, long time no see." Gyarados looked at Makarov with a silly expression and laughed heartily. Makarov shook his head helplessly. "Work. It's not finished, it can't be finished." Gyarados shook his head and looked at Makarov with a serious expression. What? Gyarados didn't complete it, such a powerful Gyarados actually. Everyone began to discuss and looked at Gyarados in disbelief. After all, he was the strongest person under Raphael. Hey, I told you not to take that mission, but you still insisted on taking it, so, did you come back intact? Advertisement. Raphael sighed and shook his head, walked up to Gyarados and asked. Ah, it should be considered intact. Gyarados scratched his head and wanted to say something, but Raphael pulled open his cloak. Seeing Gyarados' appearance, everyone gasped instantly. Gyarados' abdomen and shoulders were wrapped in a thick bandage, his left hand was hung with a thick plaster, and his left leg was completely replaced by a prosthesis. Oh my god. Gyarados did a century-long mission. Gray and Elfman were so surprised that they couldn't speak, and Wendy and Lucy covered their mouths. You guys think too simply about the 100-year mission. I'll go to your house after I prepare the potion and help you grow your broken limbs back. Raphael looked at everyone and shook his head helplessly. Ah, it's really great that you can help. Sorry, I embarrassed you. Gyarados scratched his head and looked at Makarov and Raphael embarrassedly. It's okay, I'm glad you can come back alive. I'll go to prepare the potion first. Raphael turned and left, and Makarov also shook his head and said, yes, I'm glad you can come back safely. You're also the first person who came back safely without completing the 100-year mission. Ah, I want to take a rest, I'm going back first, I'm so tired. Gyarados put on his cloak again, yawned and turned away, and then suddenly seemed to remember something, raised his head and looked at Natsu on the ceiling. Natsu, come to my house later, I have a small gift for you, ha ha ha. After saying that, he smashed the wall of the public house and walked out. At least go out through the main door, boom. Natsu broke free from the ceiling at some point, waved his hand and punched a big hole next to Gyarados and walked out. Why are you imitating him? Max on the side was numb and had no energy to complain about these two idiots. President, is Gyarados okay? Urza looked at the back of Gyarados who was going away, turned around and looked at Makarov worriedly. With Raphael here, he will be fine. After all, Raphael has received the true teachings of Polyusica. In comparison, the guy that Gyarados met during the mission is what I really care about. Makarov said with his head down in a serious expression. Urza looked at Makarov in confusion, shook his head and turned away. Makarov folded his hands and muttered to himself with a serious expression. Polyusica. 3 Dragon Slayers. The Wheel of Fate begins to turn. Chapter 97. The Terrifying Black Dragon. You guy, I've obviously told you that guy is not someone you can challenge at the moment, but you just don't believe in evil and have to give it a try. Now it's great. In Gyarados' house, Raphael leaned lazily against the door frame, jokingly teasing Gyarados who was sitting in the rocking chair. How could I think so much at that time? I thought it would be fine with my own strength, but who knew that guy didn't bother to talk to me at all. In a fit of rage, I attacked him directly, but I never expected that he would turn me into such a miserable state with just a casual breath. Gyarados lay on the chair with a helpless expression, swinging his feet and spreading his hands upward. Exactly, but there are very few people in our union who can listen to other people's advice and won't easily provoke powerful enemies. Raphael sneered slightly and then shook his head, expressing his helplessness. After a short silence, Raphael finally couldn't help but ask. Are you really going to tell Natsu about this? Aren't you worried that he will be as ignorant as you and run around to find trouble for that person? Gyarados raised his head and stared at the ceiling, as if he was deep in thought, and murmured softly. I just want to give him some hope and motivation. After all, seeing him looking for the fire dragon so persistently. And you were here, I think that guy is definitely no match for your punch. After saying that, Gyarados slowly sat up, faced Raphael, gave a thumbs up, and grinned with a bright smile. Raphael sighed helplessly, shook his head and said, Oh, it's up to you, I've almost become your nanny, here. After finishing speaking, Raphael straightened up, threw a bottle of blue potion to Gyarados, then turned around and strode out of the room. You drink half of this potion and apply the other half to your broken foot. You will be able to grow a new leg in 7 days. There may be some pain and itching, but it shouldn't be a problem for you. I am leaving. As the words fell, Raphael's figure gradually moved away. Gyarados looked at Raphael's disappearing back, with a happy smile on his face. This guy is indeed so trustworthy. He looked down at the blue potion in his hand, filled with anticipation and gratitude. At this moment, Natsu and Happy walked briskly to the door of Gyarados' house. Here we are. Natsu waved to Gyarados with a smile on his face, and then asked excitedly. I just met Raphael on the road. Has he cured you? It can't be that fast. We still have to wait 7 days. Gyarados smiled and shook his head, then warmly greeted them into the room. As soon as he entered the room, Gyarados immediately put on a curious expression, stared at Natsu closely, and asked enthusiastically. How have you and Lasana been getting along while I've been away? Is there any new progress? Advertisement, what are you talking about? We are just partners. Besides, she hasn't teamed up with me to perform a mission for a long time. Natsu tilted his head with a confused look on his face as he muttered and prepared to turn around and leave. If you called me here just to hear these boring things, then I'm going to run away. Natsu walked to the door with an unhappy face, but just when he was about to leave, what Gyarados said next made him stop, turned his head in surprise, and looked straight at Gyarados. I met a dragon while working, but unfortunately, it was not the red dragon you were looking for, but a mysterious black dragon. Natsu rushed forward with excitement on his face, stared at Gyarados closely, and asked eagerly. Where is it? Tell me quickly. Gyarados lowered his head slightly, his eyes were dull, and he said in a low voice. It's in Lingfeng Jonia. It's because of this black dragon that I failed to complete the mission successfully. Before he finished speaking, Natsu couldn't hold back his excitement. He turned around and rushed out to look for the legendary black dragon in order to find out the news about Igunner from its mouth. However, Gyarados stood up suddenly, blocked Natsu's way, and said solemnly, What will happen even if you go? Natsu was so anxious that he just wanted to get rid of Gyarados' obstruction. Of course I want to ask you about the whereabouts of Ignil. This is the only clue. Gyarados stretched out his thick and powerful hands and pressed Natsu's shoulders firmly like iron pliers. That black dragon has left there long ago. It is wandering around the entire continent and even the world. Natsu became more and more anxious and shouted at the top of his voice to Gyarados. But even so, maybe we can still find some clues? His eyes were full of expectation and desire, as if he would never give up easily as long as he found a glimmer of hope. Gyarados also roared at Natsu loudly. Enough, have you forgotten the injuries I suffered? As the voice fell, Gyarados suddenly tore off the cloak draped over himself, and then completely exposed his body covered with hideous wounds, which was horrible and scarred. See, these shocking wounds are all caused by him. In just a moment, my arms, thighs and internal organs were all severely damaged. Gyarados stared at Natsu with an angry face, and pointed his finger in a certain direction in the distance, as if there was an extremely terrifying enemy hidden there. At this moment, Natsu was completely stagnant and unable to move. Until now, he finally knew that the serious and terrible injuries on Gyarados were caused by the mysterious black dragon. Faced with such a cruel and horrifying truth, Natsu felt that his mind was blank, and he couldn't believe that everything happening in front of him was real. He stared at the horrifying huge wounds on Gyarados with his eyes wide open, but couldn't make any sound, and could only keep muttering in a low voice. No. This is impossible. Dragons. How could they hurt humans for no reason? No, this can't be true. Gyarados looked at Natsu, who was a little dazed due to extreme shock, and sighed helplessly and shook his head slowly. Perhaps the Ignil who raised you is indeed a kind dragon, but the black dragon that appeared at that time is undoubtedly a great enemy of mankind. From its eyes full of malice and indifference, I can't feel any kindness towards humans. That black dragon, maybe only Raphael can solve it, no one else can defeat it. Gyarados looked at Natsu with a serious and extremely heavy expression, and continued. Advertisement Natsu was full of astonishment, unable to accept this fact, staring at Gyarados with wide eyes and questioning. Unbeatable. In this case, what is the use of the so-called Dragon Slayer? He became more and more excited as he spoke, his voice unconsciously raised an octave, staring at Gyarados and roaring. If I use my magic, a mere black dragon is nothing. Gyarados interrupted Natsu's words directly, pointed his finger at the direction of the door, and said loudly, If you really think so in your heart, then I won't stop you. After hearing this, Natsu clenched his teeth tightly, clenched his hands into fists, and his whole body was shaking with extreme anger. Then, he turned around angrily without looking back, and rushed out of Gyarados' house as fast as an arrow, while roaring angrily, Damn it. Natsu. Happy. Seeing this, Happy was about to catch up immediately, but was stopped by Gyarados. Gyarados solemnly told Happy, You must do your best to help him. Although Raphael can subdue the black dragon, we can never always rely on Raphael's power, so we must find another dragon that is strong enough to fight it. After speaking, Gyarados raised his head, stared at Natsu's figure that was getting farther and farther away, and muttered to himself. If it is Natsu, then one day, absolutely one day, he will definitely be able to defeat this evil dragon. Happy seemed to be still a little confused about what Gyarados said, but still nodded obediently to show that he understood. Then, it turned around, flapped its wings, and flew towards the direction where Natsu left. Gyarados walked slowly to the door. He looked up at the white clouds in the sky, his eyes revealing a trace of confusion and helplessness. After returning from Gyarados, Natsu was sulking and had no interest in doing the mission. He didn't even respond to Gray's provocation. In the lively guild, Natsu made himself seem out of tune with this lively environment for the first time. What happened to Natsu? Wendy looked at Lucy with a puzzled look. Lucy also spread her hands with a puzzled look and said, Who knows him? Let's not talk about him. Did you say before that the dragon that raised you also disappeared on July 7th, X777? Wendy nodded, looked at Lucy and said, Yes, Natsu, Gajeel and my adoptive parents all disappeared on that day. Carla drank tea in confusion and said, What's going on? What happened on that day? That caused all the dragons to disappear on that day. Did they go hiking together? Lucy's answer made Wendy fall down instantly, and she looked at Lucy with twitching eyes. I didn't expect Lucy would say such strange things sometimes. Natsu lay on the chair, sighed at Wendy and the others, then turned over and stared at the ceiling in a trance. Ignil. Dad, are you okay now? Advertisement Chapter 98 Mist Gun? The Disappeared Guild? Do you feel that the weather is very bad recently? Mira Jane looked at the rain falling outside the door and looked at Raphael worriedly and said. It's true, I always feel like something is going to happen. Raphael took a sip of strawberry milkshake and frowned at the door. To be honest, his memory of his past life was getting blurry. Even though he had developed his brain, those memories seemed to have been erased by an eraser, and he could not recall them clearly no matter what. Wendy went out to look for Carla and hasn't come back for a long time. She's so worried about them. Raphael, go find her. At the same time, Wendy finally found Carla in the square after searching for a long time in the pouring rain. Finally found you, Carla, Wendy shouted excitedly. Wendy? Carla was immersed in her own thoughts. After hearing Wendy's voice, she turned to look at her in surprise. Why are you here? It's raining so heavily and you don't hold an umbrella. Be careful of catching a cold. The same goes for you, Carla. Wendy approached Carla with a smile, then knelt down and looked at her. After being silent for a while, he said to her with a serious expression, Carla, we have just joined the guild, so we must get along well with everyone. It turned out that a fierce dispute broke out between Carla and Happy. Strictly speaking, Carla hated Happy extremely and left the guild after throwing a series of hurtful words. Carla felt unhappy, turned her back to Wendy, and said angrily, Humph, I don't need that, you alone are enough. Wendy pouted after hearing this, but she was helpless in front of Carla. After all, Carla was like her own sister. At this time, the rain became more intense and visibility dropped sharply. Right in front of Carla and Wendy, a man carrying several staffs was slowly walking towards them. The man came to a halt in front of them. Who are you? Carla stood in front of Wendy, staring at the mysterious man in front of her with a wary face. Wendy, I didn't expect you to join this guild. A familiar voice came from the man's mouth, and both Wendy and Carla opened their eyes in shock. The man looked at them in silence for a while, then slowly took off his mask, revealing a face that was extremely familiar to them. Jalal. Wendy shouted in shock, because the face in front of her was clearly Jalal's face. Carla's face was full of shock and fear, and she asked him, what do you want to do? Are you going to take Wendy away? That person is not me. Impossible. No matter how you look at it, you are still Jalal. No, I'm not him. I'm Miss Gunn from Fairy Tale. Hearing this, Wendy seemed to smell some kind of scent on Mr. Gang's body. Her eyes widened and she stared at him in surprise. Her eyes gradually became moist, and tears began to well up in her eyes. You are the Jalal from 7 years ago, right? Advertisement. Wendy's eyes were filled with tears as she looked straight at him. When Carla heard Wendy's words, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her body trembled suddenly, her eyes widened, and she stared at Miss Gunn with a look of disbelief on her face. After a moment of silence, Mr. Gunn nodded slowly and said in a low voice, 7 years ago, I knew very little about this world, so I called myself Jalal at that time. After hearing this affirmative answer, Wendy's tears were like floods bursting from a dam, and she could no longer control the flow of tears. While choking, she said intermittently, I have always wanted to see you. Wow. Wendy lowered her head and kept wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes, while Miss Gang looked at her apologetically and said softly, I'm sorry, I couldn't visit you. However, before he could finish his words, suddenly, his legs softened, and his whole body seemed to have lost support, and he fell to his knees with a plop. He struggled to support the ground with his hands and tried to stand up again, but it seemed extremely difficult. Jalal. Wendy suddenly let out a scream and hurriedly rushed to Miss Gunn, trying to help him up. However, Mr. Gong grabbed Wendy's shoulder with his backhand and said anxiously, Wendy, now is not the time to talk about this. Run. I can't stop it anymore. Wah. What? Wendy looked at Mr. Gong in shock. My mission failed. Mr. Gong lowered his head. AF*CK has become extremely huge now, and I can no longer control it with my own strength. This city will be destroyed soon. Miss Gunn let go of Wendy and punched the ground hard, a look of remorse on his face. Wendy covered her mouth in horror and stared at Mr. Gong blankly. Carla on the side was also stunned and couldn't say a word. What do you mean? I have no idea what you were talking about. Wendy opened her eyes wide and stared straight at Miss Gunn, obviously not recovering from the shock. Everything will be over. Mr. Gong lowered his head and clenched his hands tightly on the ground. After all, we still cannot escape the fate of destruction. He raised his head suddenly and looked at Wendy. At least I hope I can rescue you. That'll be good. Wendy looked at Miss Gunn anxiously. What about Fairy Tale? What about the people in the guild? What will become of them? Mr. Gong was silent, and then slowly uttered a few words. They will all die. Boom. A harsh thunder sounded, and huge lightning illuminated Miss Gunn's desperate face. After hearing Mr. Gang's words, Wendy was stunned for a long time, then turned around and ran away without hesitation. Wendy. Carla anxiously wanted to stop Wendy. Don't go back, run away. If you are alone, you can still escape from this place. Miss Gunn's face was full of anxiety and he shouted at Wendy at the top of his lungs. Wendy's footsteps paused, but only for a moment, and then she ran forward even more desperately. Advertisement. Her firm and powerful voice penetrated the layers of rain and reached Miss Gunn's ears clearly. I can't escape alone. No one in Fairy Tale has ever run away from battle. Mr. Gong was stunned. He looked at the thin but extremely determined girl in front of him in disbelief. He struggled to his feet, like a wounded beast, rushed towards Wendy and blocked her way. It's too late. What if you rush back now? Miss Gunn's eyes revealed despair and helplessness. However, Wendy was not swayed by his words. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she shouted angrily towards Miss Gunn. Get out of my way. I have to go back and tell Brother Raphael. He will definitely find a way. Get out of my way quickly. Miss Gunn did not flinch and shouted at Wendy. He is indeed very powerful, but he is powerless in the face of such terrifying magic. This is impossible. The atmosphere between the two was extremely tense, as if a fierce battle was about to break out. No, Miss Gunn, is this how you view me? Raphael's voice suddenly came from the rain curtain, like a thunder exploding in everyone's ears. I saw him holding an umbrella and walking steadily towards everyone. Raphael. Brother Raphael. Mr. Gong and Wendy almost exclaimed at the same time, but their tone was completely different. Wendy's voice was full of surprise and joy. Allah. I originally just followed Myra's instructions and went out to look for Wendy and Carla who had not returned for a long time, but I heard you, Miss Gunn, belittling me here. Okay, tell me what happened. Raphael walked up to Wendy and raised the umbrella over her head, with a curious smile on his face and his eyes fixed on Mr. Gong. Brother Raphael. Please save this city and save Fairy Tale. Wendy couldn't wait to tell Raphael the whole story quickly, and held his hand tightly, staring at him with pleading eyes. Although I don't know the specific situation, I think as long as the magic is destroyed, all the problems should be solved, right? Raphael said to himself, while subconsciously touching his chin, falling into during a brief period of contemplation. Hearing what Raphael said, Mr. Gang's expression changed drastically and he hurriedly spoke to stop him. No, absolutely not. All F***CK is an important passage connecting two different worlds. If you just blindly use violence to destroy it, the final result will only lead to the complete destruction of the two worlds at the same time. As soon as Mr. Gong finished speaking, Wendy, who was standing next to her, couldn't help but show a look of despair. She was holding Raphael's hand tightly, but now it seemed as if she had lost all her strength and slowly dropped down. Obviously, even she felt helpless and powerless regarding the current predicament. Then, what if I lock it up or narrow it down? Raphael's words rang in Miss Gunn's ears like thunder. He hesitated for a while and nodded towards Raphael. If that's the case, that's okay, if you can do it. Raphael looked at Miss Gunn and smiled confidently. So, you underestimate me too much, Miss Gunn. I told you to treat the guild more often. They're stronger than you think. Mr. Gong was about to say something, but suddenly his face changed and he looked at the sky. Wendy also looked at the sky with a changed face, while Raphael still looked relaxed. So this is AF***CK, Chapter 99 Edalus? Callback? The rain has stopped. A huge hole instantly appeared in the sky above Magnolia, and a powerful suction force emanated from it. This thing. Why does it look so like a vacuum cleaner? Raphael made a good rant. Mr. Gong looked at Raphael anxiously at this time, and kept urging. Come on, Raphael. Okay, don't rush me. Raphael smiled slightly, squatted down, turned his head to look at Wendy and said, stand still. Just as he finished speaking, an extremely powerful impact suddenly spread out in all directions with the place where Raphael had just been as the center. Mr. Gong, Wendy and Carla were unprepared and were thrown away by the impact, and were knocked back 100 meters away in the blink of an eye. At the same time, like lightning, Raphael instantly arrived at the center of the hole in the sky. He narrowed his eyes slightly, stared at the world on the other side of the hole with concentration, gave a thumbs up to the figure at the hole with a smile, and then made a horizontal gesture across his neck. Immediately afterwards, his feet stepped firmly on the air as if they were on the ground, and the next moment he appeared at the edge of the cave entrance as if teleporting. He stretched out his hands and grabbed the edge of the hole without hesitation. Crack. Accompanied by a crisp sound, like the sound of glass breaking, Raphael's fingertips actually poked several small black holes into the space, just enough to accommodate his fingers. Give it to me. A roar suddenly burst out from Raphael's mouth, and at the same time he stamped his feet into the air, creating an extremely strong shockwave in midair. He held the edge of the hole tightly with both hands and used all his strength to forcefully pull the originally round hole into a long oval. With the continuous output of power, the super-large circular hole expanded to the size of two heads in the blink of an eye. Raphael reached in with both hands without hesitation, pinched the two holes tightly in the same manner, and completely sealed them. An earth-shattering, heart-stopping super catastrophe was so easily resolved by Raphael. Mr. Gong stared at what was happening in front of him in stunned silence. He had never thought that human beings could be so powerful as to be so incredible. When Raphael slowly landed on the ground, Miss Gunn had already made an important decision deep in his heart. At the same time, Carla stood aside and stared at Raphael in astonishment, and she quickly made a decision in her heart. Raphael landed smoothly on the ground, and Wendy rushed over eagerly, hugged him tightly, and shouted ecstatically. That's great, brother Raphael is so awesome. Raphael smiled and stroked Wendy's long, smooth blue hair, then raised his head and stared at Miss Gunn meaningfully. Please come with me to Edalus, please come with me to Edalus. The two voices sounded almost at the same time, but they were different in sequence. The people who made these two sounds were Mr. Gong and Carla. At this moment, Wendy looked at them both with shock on her face. Carla, Wendy, Raphael. Advertisement at this moment, Happy, Lucy, Mira-Jane and Natsu all ran towards this side. The reason for this was entirely because the huge movement Raphael made just now attracted them. What happened? Mira-Jane quickly ran to Raphael and hugged his arm, asking with confusion on her face. I actually don't understand the specific situation, but there are two understanding people here. Raphael smiled slightly, stretched out his hand and tapped Mira-Jane's nose, then turned his head and looked at Mr. Gong and Carla with a playful look. Huh? Aren't you Jelal? Why are you here? Natsu's eyes widened and he looked at Miss Gunn in disbelief. Yes. Lucy and Happy also opened their mouths wide and stared at Miss Gunn in surprise. Jer. Lol. Urza, who didn't know when she appeared, was also looking at Miss Gunn in shock. Miss Gunn covered his face with his hands, shook his head gently, then slowly stood up and said firmly, I am not the Jelal of this world. This world? Urza frowned and looked at him in confusion, She had a strange feeling in her heart, as if there was some invisible barrier between her and the Jellal in front of her. Perhaps it was telepathy or other reasons, but she suddenly realized that the Jellal in front of her was completely different from the Jellal she was familiar with. So, she forcibly restrained her inner impulse. I come from the parallel world Edalus, and so do those two cats over there. Ed Jellal pointed to Carla and Happy next to him and said solemnly. What? Me? Happy was surprised for a moment. Natsu quickly argued. Impossible, I discovered Happy. It came out of an egg. Yes, I watched Carla hatch from the egg with my own eyes. Wendy also wanted to clarify anxiously. No, Wendy, what he said is true. We all know this knowledge from birth, and it is poured into the eggs before birth. Carla lowered her head and said in a low voice, then she pointed at Happy angrily. But why don't you know? Why can you bear this name? I really envy you. By the time he got to the last half of the sentence, Carla's words were almost inaudible. Happy just looked at Carla blankly, his expression a little downcast. Happy. Lucy looked at him with some distress. You mean that Edalus did what happened just now? Raphael looked at Ed Jellal solemnly. Ed Jellal nodded. Yes, it was all done by the king of Edalus. Why? Because Edalus is a world where magic has been exhausted. Ed Jallal's words were like a bombshell, causing an uproar in everyone's hearts. Lucy's eyes widened and she asked suspiciously. Depletion. Are you talking about what I understand? Ed Jellal nodded silently, his voice low and firm. Yes, as you can see, just as the people here have exhausted their magic power, Edalus is facing the crisis of the entire world's magic power being exhausted. Their magic is not inexhaustible, but exists. Strict usage restrictions. Once exhausted, there will be no replenishment. His words struck everyone's heart like a heavy hammer, and everyone fell into deep thought. Advertisement at this time, Raphael raised his hand and pointed to the sky, where there was still a conspicuous crack. So, the one at the top is the key to solving the problem? His eyes were fixed on the crack, as if he wanted to see through it to see the secret hidden within. Ed Jellal took a deep breath and explained with a solemn expression. That is the core of King Edalus' plan, super subspace magic, F***CK. He attempts to use this powerful magic to draw from the current world magical energy and inject it into the world of Edalus, thereby enhancing the magical power there. There was a hint of worry and heaviness in his eyes, staring closely at the crack in the sky. Everyone also looked up, feeling an inexplicable awe in their hearts. Oh, speaking of which, I have felt this kind of aura in the past 6 years. Just because your aura is there, I don't care. So in fact, it is you who are madly sealing or closing this, all FCK. Raphael looked at Ed Jellal as if he had a sudden realization. Then why doesn't it work this time? Wendy walked up to Ed Jellal and treated him. Because Fairy Tail is too strong. Carla finally spoke again, looking at everyone in surprise. Fairy Tail gathered together Natsu, Urza and others, and also produced Raphael, the strongest in the world. Coupled with the recent return of Girdas, Edalus wants to do something big. Damn it, aren't those people just bandits? Natsu raised his head in anger and spit out flames. I heard the general situation clearly, then, friends, we have been bullied like this, what should we do? Raphael shook his head and stood under the crack in the sky with a ferocious expression. Of course I'll fight back, Natsu shouted angrily, pulling Lucy and standing opposite Raphael. Lucy. No. I don't really want to go. Hit me back hard. Urza stood on Raphael's side with a long sword in hand. Mira Jane didn't say anything, just stood next to Raphael silently. Add me one. Gajeel walked out of the dim street, with several scars on his face from cat scratches. Gajeel. What kind of performance art are you doing? Raphael's eyes twitched as he looked at the funny Gajeel. Brother, is your makeup really good for such a serious occasion? Don't worry about this, anyway, if you want to go, just add me. Gajeel listened for a long time. He didn't know what else was said. He only knew that Carla and Happy came from Edalus, which meant there were many cats like them there. Gajeel made a very cruel decision in his heart. He must bring a cat back, otherwise he will not eat iron in the future. Then, Raphael had not yet finished speaking. Carla interrupted him. Wait a minute, I have something to say. Everyone looked at her. Carla took a deep breath and slowly said something that shocked everyone. If that tomcat and I betray you, please don't hesitate to kill us directly. Chapter 100 Arrival. Fairy Tale from Edalus. Carla. What nonsense are you talking about? Wendy ran towards Carla anxiously, wanting to pick her up and comfort her. Her steps seemed a little flustered because of her inner urgency, as if she had lost her former grace and calmness. However, Carla stretched out her little hand and firmly stopped Wendy's move. Her eyes revealed a maturity and determination beyond her years, as if she had already made a certain decision. Carla lowered her voice and said in a serious tone, I can't disclose the specific situation now, but if we really betray everyone in the end, we will definitely do something that everyone will regret. Please stop it no matter what. At this moment, a warm and generous hand gently landed on Carla's head like a spring breeze. This hand gently stroked Carla's hair with endless care and comfort. Wendy raised her head in shock, followed the hand, and found that it was Raphael standing in front of her. His figure is like a majestic mountain peak, giving people an endless sense of security. Raphael slowly squatted down, his movements elegant and natural. He lowered his head and showed a gentle smile to Carla. That smile was like a ray of sunshine, penetrating through the layers of gloom and illuminating the softest corner of Carla's heart. He whispered in a low and firm voice, Don't be afraid, as long as I am here, you will never become like that. His words contained infinite power, making people involuntarily believe every word he said. Carla looked at Raphael blankly, with a trace of confusion and emotion in her eyes. After a moment, she turned her head and snorted coldly, as if she wanted to hide the fluctuations in her heart and said no more. Okay. If that's the case, let's go. Natsu's eyes burned with a burning fire of fighting spirit. He clenched his fists and shouted energetically, go give some color to that self-righteous king over there. Have a look. HMPH. How dare you touch our fairy tale? Beat him to pieces. Gajeel also echoed Natsu without showing any weakness, cheering together. Etc. Mistgun's voice exploded like thunder from the sky, making people's eardrums hurt. His expression was extremely solemn, as if he was about to announce an earth-shattering event. Everyone was attracted by his shouts and looked at him one after another. Mr. Gong put his hand into his arms, and after groping for a moment, his movements became cautious. Finally, as if he had found some treasure, a flash of joy flashed across his face. Then, he slowly pulled out his hand, and there were a few mysterious pink pills lying in his palm. Edalus is a world where magic factors are extremely scarce. It is very likely that your magic will not be able to be used there. And these X-balls are the key to solving your dilemma. Mr. Gang's tone was full of determination and confidence, which made people a little curious about these little pills. Everyone looked at each other with a trace of doubt in their eyes. However, they didn't hesitate too much and stretched out their hands to take the pills handed over by Miss Gunn. After taking the pill, a warm feeling instantly spreads throughout the body, making people feel warm. Without any hesitation, everyone resolutely put the pills into their mouths and swallowed them. The pill went into the throat, turned into a warm current and slid into the abdomen, and then emitted bursts of strange energy fluctuations. These fluctuations quickly penetrate into every corner of the body, blending and resonating with its own magic power. In the blink of an eye, everyone felt as if there was an inexplicable membrane covering their bodies. This membrane seemed to block out something bad, but it also seemed to allow them to do something. Advertisement at this moment, they truly understood that what Mr. Gong said was true. It's really amazing that these seemingly ordinary red pills can have such miraculous effects. But it's not surprising. After all, this is a pill that Mr. Gong has been searching for and researching for a long time before developing it. It is a pill specifically targeted at Edalus. It seems that Mr. Gong has long been prepared to let everyone in Fairy Tale fight back Edalus. Everyone looked at Miss Gunn with doubts in their eyes, but Miss Gunn did not explain this. Okay. Let's go. Raphael snapped his fingers excitedly, and then, everyone began to slowly levitate, and their bodies gradually became extremely light. They flew toward the crack at an astonishing speed, as if they were about to break through the sky. Raphael carefully opened the opening of the crack, and in an instant, a powerful suction force spurted out like a torrent. Everyone was defenseless and was instantly sucked into this powerful force. At the same time, Makarov in the Union suddenly stopped holding the wine glass in his hand. He silently stared at the sky outside the window, with an indescribable emotion in his eyes. He stood there quietly, motionless, as if time had stopped. When everyone successfully crossed the crack that originally opened disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye, as if it had never existed. At this time, the sky was gradually clearing up, the sun was shining on the earth, and everything seemed particularly peaceful. After a spin and a flash of colorful light, everyone arrived at Edalus. Wow, it's so beautiful here. Lucy looked at the breathtaking and beautiful scenery of Edalus and couldn't help but sigh, while Urza looked at the mountains in front of her in amazement. These mountains can actually be suspended in midair. In the sky, towering mountain peaks floated in an orderly manner, with majestic waterfalls flowing among them, pouring down like silver. Between the mountains, patches of lush and huge vegetation are lush and green, exuding vitality. Everything seems so novel and unique. How come the magic factor in the air is so thin? It's almost exhausted. Mira Jane closed her eyes, felt it carefully, then opened her eyes in shock and said. Indeed. Others followed suit, opening their eyes and chiming in. The X-ball medicine in your body allows you to continue to perform your magic, but you have also witnessed the situation in this world at this moment, so you must use it frugally and never squander it. Otherwise, once the magic power in your body is exhausted, it's hard to replenish it. Mr. Gong stood aside and said solemnly, guys, look, I found an interesting place. In front, Raphael was controlling the telekinesis ball to lead everyone to fly. Suddenly his eyes lit up, he pointed excitedly at a building below, and shouted to everyone. Advertisement immediately afterwards, he skillfully controlled the telekinesis ball, allowing everyone to slowly land on the ground. As for the so-called excessive consumption of magic power, come on, he doesn't need magic at all, okay? That thing is just the icing on the cake for him, it just makes him look cooler when he makes moves. After all, being handsome is a lifelong matter. So Raphael can say that he can dominate this world even without taking the pills developed by Miss Gunn, but since Miss Gunn has given them to him, it will be free if he doesn't take them. As soon as Mr. Gunn landed, he shouted to everyone. What happens next depends entirely on you. I still have my own unfinished mission to fulfill, and I must take back what belongs to me. When he said the last sentence, Mr. Gong clenched his fists tightly, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. That light contained not only hatred for the enemy, but also the unwillingness and anger deep in his heart. Everyone present was silent for a moment, and then nodded to express understanding and support. At this time, Raphael stepped forward, stared at Mr. Gong, and said firmly, go with ease, but please remember that no matter where and whenever, we are your strongest backing. Miss Gunn turned to look at Raphael, glanced at his fairy tale companions, nodded vigorously, and then turned away resolutely. He seems to have made up his mind. Mira Jane stood next to Raphael, looking at Mr. Gangs retreating back with worry. Don't worry, we should trust him. Raphael turned his head, smiled to reassure Mira Jane, and pointed to the wooden house behind everyone. Look, there's fairy tale here too. Everyone turned around hurriedly, their eyes falling on the huge green tree behind them. This giant tree towers into the clouds. Its thick trunk seems to connect the sky and the earth, and in the center of the trunk stands a closed door with a bright flag hanging on the door. The flag flutters in the wind, and the pattern drawn on the flag feels very familiar to everyone. That is the symbol of fairy tale. You can actually see fairy tale in this world. Wendy covered her mouth in shock and her eyes widened in disbelief. Ha 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 ha, I didn't expect everyone to come here, although the appearance of the guild looks a little different, but it doesn't matter at all. Natsu shouted excitedly and rushed forward impatiently, raising his foot to kick the door. However, before he could complete his move, he was knocked to the ground by Urza's quick punch. Calm down, Natsu. This is fairy tale in another world, not the one we are familiar with, Urza warned sternly. Urza is right, let's observe the situation first. Carla looked at Natsu, who was pinned to the ground with disgust, and agreed with Urza's point of view. At this moment, Raphael suddenly raised his ears alertly, as if he noticed something unusual. He waved his arms to everyone without hesitation, and in the blink of an eye, everyone disappeared into thin air like phantoms. Chapter 101: A different fairy tale, different people. Everyone hid in the dark and observed for a long time. Everyone's face showed a look of shock. They looked at each other with doubts and confusion in their hearts. The fairy tale people in Edalus in front of me are exactly the same as them, but their behavior is such a stark contrast, it's really unbelievable. Now, let's turn our attention to Edalus fairy tale. Juvia is going out to work. In this parallel world, Juvia shows Oni-san-like style. She is sexy and aloof, exuding a unique charm. Wait a minute. I want to go with you too, can you? Suddenly, Gray's voice came. Natsu looked at Gray and Edalus, and his jaw almost dropped in shock. Because the Gray here is simply a complete dog-licking image, which is completely different from the Gray in the Islandan world. And more importantly, Gray from Edalus was dressed extremely thickly, with at least more than 10 thick cotton jackets wrapped around his body. Don't be so close to me. I feel so hot when I see you. As soon as Ed Juvia saw Ed Gray dressed like this, he showed disgust on his face, hurriedly waved his hand to refuse, and turned around and left in a hurry go. Don't be like this, I'm just more afraid of the cold, what's wrong with me? Ed Gray looked at Ed Juvia's fading figure, knelt down weakly on the ground, and slowly stretched out his hand towards her. At the same time, on the other side, Ed Salusuk and Ed Dwa from Levy's team stood next to Ed Elfman with arrogant faces, looking at him with disdain. You are really embarrassed, Elfman. Did this mission fail again? Yes. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Ed Elfman lowered his head, tears welling up in his eyes, and sobbed softly. Mira, if that thing hadn't happened, would Elfman be like this? Raphael looked at Elfman, who was so weak in front of him and couldn't help but feel a little funny, so he poked him gently with his elbow. Poke Mira Jane. Mira Jane sighed helplessly, then nodded silently. Her mind couldn't help but picture her younger brother's appearance when he was a child, and she sighed secretly in her heart. It's true, she really couldn't refute this. Ed Max and Ed Wally, standing aside, were watching the show with a smile. Ed Max couldn't help but sigh. Look, our guild's strongest candidates, Dwa and Sarusuk, are scolding Elfman again. Ed Wally smiled jokingly and echoed. Haha, that's almost it. If this continues, Elfman will start crying. At this time, not far behind them, Ed Nab was shouting at the top of his lungs. Work, work. He looked very motivated, as if he was never tired, and he was simply the boss's favorite type of employee. However, Ed Macau and Ed Wakaba have not changed much, they're still the same as before. It's just that Advakarba has become extremely fat now, and his original thin figure has long since disappeared, replaced by a body of plump flesh. On the other side is Macau, who is wearing a crisp suit and transforms into a gentleman. But compared to others, these two guys seem to be more normal. Ed Macau raised the wine bottle towards Ed Kana with a smile on his face and said, Kana, come and have a drink with us occasionally. However, at this moment, Ed Kana on the side made everyone in Islandan instantly shocked. Kana from Edalus was seen wearing a decent little dress top, a fluffy long skirt, and an exquisite little foreign hat. The whole person looked elegant and charming. She folded her hands in her lap, smiling and gently rejecting Ed Macau. Really, didn't I already tell you that I don't know how to drink? Raphael, who was watching outside, couldn't help wiping the cold sweat on his forehead and secretly sighed in his heart. This world is really weird. Kana, who has always been a heavy drinker, actually said that he doesn't know how to drink. This is really incredible. This world is too scary, everyone nodded in agreement. Next, everyone saw Ed Alzak and Ed Biska stuck together, and these two guys were wearing very open clothes. Ed Ritas, who was extremely thin and had a bad temper. Ed Lasana, who was strong and protective of his brother. Advertisement Lasana. Raphael was shocked for a moment. He remembered that Lasana in this world should be dead. How is this going? Raphael's spirit fluctuated violently, and the people who had been hiding just now appeared in front of Ed Fairytale's people in an instant. Oh, there are quite a few rats approaching here? An arrogant voice slowly walked over. Everyone turned around and saw that this was a rebellious girl wearing black tights and heavy metal style. Lucy? Natsu and Happy immediately exclaimed. looking at the Lucy next to them and the Lucy in front of them, and they were instantly happy. Lucy, look at that Lucy, she's dressed up so funny. Boom. With 2 knocks, the 2 Lucys instantly gave Natsu a shock, and Natsu was instantly embedded in the floor. Looking at it this way, you and I do seem, no, we are almost twins. Lucy pinched Lucy's face and looked left and right in surprise, and then wanted to lift up Lucy's clothes. Let me see if they look the same inside. Don't want, snapped, Lucy exclaimed, pulled down her clothes forcefully, and gave Lucy a slap. Oh, Lucy vs Lucy, so exciting. Gajeel clapped his hands wildly, watching the excitement. Raphael also wanted to join in, but Mirajane's hand on his waist made him cancel the idea. Fairy Hunter Urza. The movement outside the door made everyone inside run out. As soon as they opened the door, they saw Urza, and they were instantly frightened and took dozens of steps back. Damn it, you actually used such despicable methods. Levy stood up and pointed at everyone angrily. Bring Lucy back quickly. And Natsu. Urza pointed at herself in confusion and turned to look at Raphael and others. Raphael and others directly spread their hands towards her to express that they didn't know anything. Damn it, Miss Gun is running too fast, we don't know anything. Gajeel punched his fist in anger. Ed's fairy tale and others are confronting Aslandan's fairy tale and others. There's a misunderstanding here. Lucy and Wendy stood up and waved to everyone in Ed. At this moment, a huge blue dragon-shaped creature appeared in the sky above everyone, and this dragon-shaped creature rushed towards them. No, it's not good, the real goblin hunting is really coming. Ed fairy tale everyone began to exclaim. This is a dragon. Several exclamations suddenly sounded out, including the voices of Natsu, Wendy and Gajeel. The difference was that Wendy's voice was filled with surprise, while Natsu and Gajeel's faces were filled with excitement. Advertisement Natsu stood forward, his fists igniting fire, while Gajeel's fists turned into swords and sticks, eagerly looking at the dragon that was about to rush in front of him. What? They can actually use magic. Everyone in Edala's fairy tale looked at Natsu and the others in shock, and Urza also changed into the black feather armor at this time. Ed Levy and Ed Lucy looked at each other, nodded to each other, and then Ed Levy rushed directly into the treehouse. Start activating the teleportation magic circle. The reactor begins to ignite. Everyone, come in quickly. Let's escape from the goblin hunting first. Ed Lucy quickly waved to Natsu and others who were about to attack. When she saw Urza, she paused, but thinking that the magic she just used was different from that woman, she still waved to her. Come in quickly. The teleportation magic circle is about to be activated. Raphael and the others looked at each other for a while, nodded, and decided to understand the situation first. They quickly followed Ed Lucy into the treehouse. Only Natsu and Gajeel were still stubborn and wanted to attack. As a result, 2 Lucis were forcefully pulled in one by one. The distance to the critical point of transmission. The output power has reached 40%, 43, 46. What took so long? Levy, Ed Lucy said angrily to Ed Levy. I'm working hard, can't you see what I'm doing? Ed Levy also responded angrily to Lucy. Don't be so panicked. You're useless. Julia put her hands on her hips and scolded Gray, who was covering his mouth with a horrified look on his face. Hurry up, Levy, try, and Jed urged Levy while holding on to the seats. It's so noisy, there's still 1 minute left before teleportation. They're right in front of you, 20, 19, 18. Raphael looked at the flying dragon that was so close to him and shook his head. I didn't want to take action at first. 10, 9, 8. Raphael walked to the door, looked at the clearly textured dragon tongue, and raised his fist. 6, 5, 4. Raphael narrowed his eyes and punched the flying dragon. A black and red magic circle instantly appeared in front of Raphael's fist. 3, 2. In an instant, the flying dragon turned into blood foam, flying all over the sky, and the woods and soil behind the flying dragon also disintegrated with the disintegration of the flying dragon. 1. Teleportation begins. As the flying dragon, woods and soil particles fell, the Fairy Tale Guild station in Edalis also disappeared at the same time. How can this be? Shortly after Ed Fairy Tale disappeared, a panicked sound came from deep in the forest. Chapter 102 Edalis 1. How is it possible? Such an extremely powerful and earth-shattering attack can be released so easily. How on earth is it done? In the forest, a bearded man wearing hard armor slowly walked out. At this moment, his face was full of horror, and his eyes were fixed on the traces of the attack that Raphael had just made. His whole person seemed to be frozen, and he could not recover for a long time. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically, and he secretly screamed something bad. No, I borrowed this dragon from that scary woman. If she knew that I lent the dragon to others, and let it suffered a severe injury, the consequences are simply unimaginable. Thinking of this, his face became more and more gloomy, and beads of sweat began to appear on his forehead. His heart was full of anxiety and uneasiness, and he didn't know how to face that terrible woman. He is well aware of the other party's methods and strength. If he really offends her, he may not be able to escape. However, things have happened, and the only thing he can do now is to find a way to make up for this mistake as soon as possible. After a fierce ideological struggle, he finally let out a long sigh, shook his head helplessly, and then turned around and left. His figure gradually disappeared into the dense forest, leaving only silence and the heart-stopping traces of the attack. It's better to report such a powerful and terrifying existence truthfully. The F***ck in front has been forcibly closed. Now that such a powerful king appears again, let's leave it to the king to worry about. But, did that woman have foreseen what happened today? Otherwise, why would she leave suddenly because of something? And it was when she was most passionate about hunting fairy tale. The man was talking to himself as he drifted away, leaving only debris on the ground. On the other side, Ed's fairy tale guild, who had been teleported away, was now in a vast, endless desert. This desert looks endless, and the golden sand sparkles in the sunlight, making people feel both spectacular and mysterious. But everyone in Ed's fairy tale had no intention of admiring such a beautiful scenery. They all stared at Raphael in shock. After all, they were all too familiar with that huge monster. It was the mount of fairy hunter Urza. The strength of this monster is obvious to all in fairy tale. However, such a formidable existence could not even hold on for a second before falling under the fist attack of the bald man in front of him. Everyone was stunned and speechless for a moment. Raphael turned his head, smiled and said to everyone, "It's just a basic operation, no need to make a fuss." Then he walked towards Mirajane and began to ask her for credit. "Speaking of, what is going on? Can anyone explain it to me? Also, what is goblin hunting? Why do you call Urza a goblin hunter?" Natsu looked at his friends around him with confusion. Because the occasion was not appropriate just now, he had already been holding back a lot of questions in his heart, but he had been holding back and not asking. Now that it seemed he was safer, those confusions finally flooded into his mind like a flood that broke a dam, and he couldn't hold it back any longer. And Urza and everyone else looked at Ed Fairy Tale with suspicion, especially Urza. From their tone, she realized that she seemed to have become their enemy in this world. This situation made her deeply it feels unbelievable. Ed Lucis' expression became very complicated, and she stared at Urza. Even after experiencing the escape just now, she already understood that the Urza in front of her might not be the Urza they were familiar with. And there was another example of Lucy in front of her, which made her no longer hostile to this Urza, but when she saw the exact same face, a strange and complicated emotion suddenly surged in her heart. Advertisement, I'm not sure if you really come from another world, but here, we belong to the Dark Guild. Ed Lucis' words made Urza and others instantly shocked. As for how Ed Lucy learned that they came from another world, the answer is naturally that Lucy told her. At that time, Lucy just muttered in a low voice, "I am so mature in this world." However, Ed Lucy was standing in front of her, so these words were naturally heard clearly. "What? Dark Guild? But, in our world, we are a righteous guild." Wendy looked at them in surprise, with disbelief written all over her face. She never imagined that in this world, her guild would be regarded as a dark guild. Justice Guild? Then you guys are really good. You can bathe in the sunshine comfortably. Wendy stood up, her eyes filled with envy. She stared straight at Urza and the others, as if looking through them to another world. And Wendy also looked at Wendy with envy, because she had the perfect figure that Wendy dreamed of. Why? How could this happen? Lucy stared at them in disbelief with her eyes wide open, her heart filled with doubts and confusion. Judging from the brief contact just now, Ed Fairy Tale and the others do not look like those ferocious and vicious people. Instead, the so-called fairy hunting that forced them to flee sounded more like the evil acts from the Dark Guild. It's all because of that damn bullshit king. Ed Levy yelled angrily, with anger burning in his eyes. In the world we live in, magic resources are limited. But that stupid king was worried about this matter, so he issued an order to take all the magic in the world as his own, and also forced all guilds to be disbanded. Ed Elfman lowered his head, his voice was low and sad, and he slowly told Raphael and others the ins and outs of the matter. At first, everyone worked together to resist, but in the face of the king's army coming like a tide, they fell one after another, and finally had no choice but to disband. Ed Lucy lowered her head silently, her eyes showing unconcealable grief. Tears slid down her cheeks and dropped onto the cold ground. In the end, only our guild is still struggling to support itself and is still fighting tenaciously, but we have paid a huge price for this. Adwali's voice was choked, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from the depths of his throat. By the end, he couldn't even speak a complete sentence. We lost half of our partners, and even the president was brutally killed. We tried our best to escape, but we were unable to compete with them. Now, the teleportation array is running out of times to use, and we are really at our wits' end. Ed Levy was almost mad with anger, but in the end he said these desperate words with tears in his eyes. Advertisement for a moment, the entire guild fell into a dead silence, the atmosphere was low and sad, as if shrouded in endless despair. Ah, so that's it, if that's the case, then let's fight back. Natsu's voice was like a thunder, tearing through the suffocating atmosphere of despair. HMPH, I just want to see how capable Urza from the royal army is, and see who is better, her, fairy hunter, or me, the fairy queen. Urza stared at Ed and Fairy Tale with firm eyes, patted the hard armor on her body, and roared angrily. Ha 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 ha. It looks like another good show is about to be staged. I really can't wait. Gajil's hands turned into two thick iron rods, crossing and hitting each other crazily, with a crazy smile on his face. Although I may not be the strongest, if anyone dares to offend Fairy Tale, I will definitely stand up without hesitation and teach them a lesson. Lucy clenched one hand into a fist, slammed it into the palm of her other hand, and declared confidently. No matter which world they're in, if anyone dares to hurt Fairy Tale, they will surely enter a place of eternal destruction. Mirajane had a faint smile on her lips, but these words were spoken with unparalleled coercion and domineering, as if the whole world is under her control, as if she is the master of this world. As she finished speaking, a jet-black magic power spurted out of her body, sweeping over her like a raging wave. Wherever this magic power passed, the surrounding air seemed to be ignited, becoming extremely scorching and hot, as if it was going to burn everything. On the other side, Raphael was like a calm mountain, standing steadily in front of everyone. His eyes were like two sharp arrows, looking closely at Ed Fairy Tail and everyone, with a firm and confident light shining in his eyes. Anyone who dares to insult Fairy Tail or harm Fairy Tail will die. He slowly clenched his fist, and each finger turned slightly white due to excessive exertion. There was even a low explosion sound in the air, as if the entire space was shaking because of his clenched fist. At this moment, Mira Jane and Raphael showed their incomparable strength and determination. They used practical actions to tell everyone. Anyone who dares to insult Fairy Tail will be dealt a devastating blow. Ed Fairy Tail. Everyone looked at Raphael and the others blankly like sculptures. They saw a blazing flame on the people in Islandon. The flame was like the rising sun, hot and dazzling. Everyone in Ed Fairy Tail looked at each other, the sadness in their eyes receding like a tide, replaced by a strong hope. Their savior is coming. Chapter 103 Edalis. 2. The royal capital of Edalis, this magnificent city, carries endless glory and authority. It is not only the political center of the world, but also a symbol of the highest power. Every decision made from here affects the direction and destiny of the entire world like a butterfly effect. However, at this moment, behind the closed door of the integrated staff headquarters, the atmosphere was so solemn and suffocating. Several of the most powerful beings in the world gathered together, their faces gloomy, and they seemed to be facing an unprecedented crisis. Above the conference table, the huge screen was still flickering, playing a series of heart-stopping scenes. These pictures come from the personal records of Shujboy, the captain of the 4th Demon War Force. Every frame is full of terror and despair. Urza in the Edalis world stared closely at the scene in front of her. Her beautiful face was shrouded in solemnity at this moment. There was a rare perseverance in her eyes, but more of it was uncontrollable anger. She knows very well that the crisis hidden behind these pictures will bring disaster to the entire world. In contrast, Hughes, the captain of the 3rd Demonic War Troop, seemed relatively calm. After the initial shock, he quickly regained his usual composure. He resumed his usual idleness. What are you worried about? Such a powerful attack must have used the magic items they have at the bottom of the box. There will never be another magic item of that level. Shugboy didn't agree with Hughes' statement. He felt that he vaguely saw a fist, but because the distance was too far, he could only witness the earth-shattering scene, and finally decided to remain silent. On the side, Chief of Staff Biro, who was holding a cane, knocked on the floor hard, and then said, "Okay, let's discuss this matter here. After all, Fairy Tail was once the well-deserved first guild, which is a bit the background and trump card are also normal things." At this moment, a man wearing a knight's armor and a cat face came over, with a look of disdain on his face, and sneered at the others. "Tisk, look at you cowards. Guys, just seeing a trivial magic item, they were scared to death. What a bunch of annoying guys." After hearing this, Hughes's face instantly became extremely gloomy, and an unknown fire surged from the bottom of his heart. He widened his eyes, angrily approached the cat-faced man, and replied without any sign of weakness. Hey, what do you mean? Do you really think you are the most powerful one?" Ponsalili was obviously irritated by Hughes's attitude. He turned his head sharply and stared at Hughes fiercely, with sparks of anger flashing in his eyes. He cursed unceremoniously, "Shut your stinky mouth, Bar." After saying that, he waved his fist in demonstration, then snorted coldly, turned around and left without looking back. Looking at Ponsalili's retreating back, Ed Urza put his hands on his hips and fell into deep thought. After a while, she slowly said, "It seems that he is quite dissatisfied with the recent strengthening of armaments." Shugboy nodded, agreeing with Ed Urza. He sighed and said helplessly, "But, it's actually a good thing." Ed Urza continued, "However, our country has basically completed the great cause of reunification, and there is really no need to continue to strengthen armaments. After all, the current situation is relatively stable, and we should focus more on developing the economy and to improve people's livelihood." Hughes echoed. "Having said that, there is still a small group of stubborn elements, although it is easy to eliminate them. But we cannot take it lightly and must always remain vigilant." There was a trace of relaxation and comfort in Hughes's eyes. After all, it was really easy for them to destroy a fairy tale that only had 3 melons and 2 dates left. If those little mice weren't so good at running, he would have been alone. People can completely get rid of those diehards. Advertisement. The original solemn and oppressive atmosphere in the Senate headquarters gradually dissipated, replaced by a relaxed and joyful atmosphere. After all, the magic props in this world are extremely advanced. Maybe there are some props that can achieve that amazing scene, although they may be disposable items. At the same time, in the palace deep in the royal capital, King Faust had an angry look on his face. He was smashing items around him like an out-of-control beast, and kept roaring in his mouth. Who is it? How dare you shut down the F***CK? It must be my damn son, right? Jelal." Coco, the assistant chief of staff, stood aside and looked at King Faust worriedly. She knew the seriousness of the matter. "Your Majesty, what should we do now? The last chance has been lost. We no longer have enough magic power to maintain such a huge magic circle," Coco said anxiously, with despair and helplessness in her eyes. Faust took a deep breath, tried to calm his inner turmoil, and then slowly sat back on the throne. He lowered his head, lost in thought, and time seemed to freeze at this moment. After a long time, a low and depressed voice finally came. "The matter has come to this, we can only implement the second plan." Faust slowly raised his head. His eyes were like a torch, staring at the ceiling of the royal capital, as if he wanted to look through the thick stone slabs of the palace hanging in the sky. That look was full of ruthlessness and determination, making people shudder. Eat those so-called angels. A cold voice came from the dim palace. After learning that Raphael and the others' purpose was to overthrow the rule of the royal capital, Ed Fairytale and everyone instantly cheered. This was the first time in a long time that they felt the joy they were familiar with. After all, when the whole world is unable to use magic, a few people who can cast magic suddenly appear. This feeling is as incredible as being hit by a dimensionality reduction. At this moment, Ed Levy, who had been staring at the two cats Happy and Carla for a long time, frowned and asked them, "Are you really sure that you are from another world?" Happy looked at Ed Levy with confusion, while Carla remained silent. Natsu was also very confused. He turned to look at Ed Levy and asked in confusion, "Is there any problem? The two of them did come here from above with us?" "No," Carla mentioned before that they went down from Edalus. Wendy corrected Natsu at this time. "Advertisement, I see, then that's right, they should belong to the Exit clan here." Ed Levy stared at Happy and Carla solemnly, her eyes full of vigilance and doubt. But everyone in Ed Fairytale, who was in high spirits just now, seemed to have seen the devil, and they all retreated back, with horrified expressions on their faces. Raphael frowned when he saw this. He walked forward and began to explain to everyone. "Although they are from Edalus, when we met them, they were just 2 eggs. Therefore, it can be said that they are the cats of Aslandon. Not to mention, they have joined Fairytale, and there are no bad guys in Fairytale, don't worry." After hearing Raphael's words, the mood of everyone in Ed Fairytale gradually relaxed. However, they still looked at Happy and Carla with a hint of fear. "Exit? What is that?" Happy looked at Ed Levy with a puzzled face, and a strong premonition surged in his heart. Maybe through her, he could know the secrets that had been buried deep in his heart. Thinking of this, Happy's heartbeat accelerated involuntarily, and he was so nervous that his stomach began to growl. "Exit, they are not only gods, but also angels with wings and magic. They're the only remaining race in the world that still uses magic," Ed Levy explained to Happy with a serious expression. "God? Is he so powerful?" Natsu looked at Happy with excitement, and was really happy for him. "That's right, because they have mastered a magical magic that allows them to fly, and they built a magnificent palace high in the sky, overlooking us from above." Ed Lucy raised her hand and pointed upward, and everyone squinted their eyes and looked far away, as if they had really vaguely glimpsed the outline of the mysterious palace. "I heard that the real initiator behind a series of events that happened recently is the true god of the Exit clan who is secretly manipulating them. Because of this, we feel fear when we face them. After all, they are respectfully called the existence of angels." Ed Elfman fearfully poked his head out from behind the pillar and explained in a trembling voice. "An angel." Wendy stared at Carla with confusion, but she thought that the wing magic that Carla cast did have some similarities with the legendary angel. At this moment, Carla spread her wings and flew out of the door. Carla. The one who responded the fastest was Happy, who also spread his wings and flew out. Happy, Carla. Natsu and Wendy looked at their flying figures anxiously and quickly chased after them. Natsu, Wendy, be careful, Urza also chased after her. "Does that mean there are many cats like Happy and others in the sky?" Gajeel was instantly excited and ran out quickly. In an instant, Mirajane and Raphael were left alone. Chapter 104 Edalus 3. Is it really okay not to chase them? Ed Lucy stared closely at Natsu's retreating figure, her heart filled with worry and uneasiness. Her eyes never left the familiar figure for a moment, as if he would disappear in the blink of an eye. Her brows furrowed slightly and her lips pursed slightly, revealing a worry that could not be ignored. Raphael on the side noticed the change in Ed Lucy's expression. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, revealing a faint smile. His deep eyes sparkled with light, as if he could see through everything. He gently patted Ed Lucy on the shoulder and said gently, "If you want to go, go, maybe they will need you." Ed Lucy was startled by Raphael's words. She raised her head suddenly and her eyes met Raphael's. At that moment, she saw the encouragement and understanding in Raphael's eyes, which made her originally tense nerves relax a little. However, when she realized that her thoughts could be seen through so easily, a shy blush appeared on her cheeks. She quickly lowered her head, like a shy ostrich, trying to escape Raphael's eyes that seemed to know everything. Then, she suddenly took steps and rushed out in the direction Natsu left. Her steps seemed a bit hasty and panicky, but full of firm determination. The wind whistled in her ears and ruffled her hair, but she had only one thought on her mind, to catch up with Natsu. "Hey, yeah, I have legs," the two Mirajans' voices suddenly rang out, still curling their tongues as they spoke. Their voices were soft and gentle, as if they could enchant people's souls. Admiral Jane and Mirajane looked at each other in amazement, their eyes shining with disbelief. It is worth mentioning that although the two mirrors have the same appearance, their personalities are as gentle as water. Mirajane turned her head, her eyes fell on Raphael, and said with a half-smile, "Raphael, I have not changed at all from the Mirajane in this world. Even the personality is the same." There was a hint of teasing in her tone, which seemed to be hinting at something. Raphael scratched his head, with a hesitant smile on his face. He glanced at Mirajane weakly, and then whispered, "Is there a possibility that your current personality is not really true?" Before he could finish his words, he saw a white and tender hand, like a snake, touching his waist with lightning speed. Then, the hand pinched the soft flesh of his waist with its index finger and thumb. "Ah!" Raphael screamed and his body trembled involuntarily. He turned his head and looked at Mirajane, his eyes pleading for mercy. The corners of Mirajane's mouth raised slightly, revealing a naughty smile. She gently let go of her hand, then patted Raphael's shoulder, comforting. Okay, I'm just kidding you, don't be so nervous. But what did you want to say just now? Mirajane was still staring at Raphael with a smile on her face, and her tone was calm without any fluctuation. I think you need to think carefully before giving an answer. Ha 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 ha, of course it's the same, exactly the same. Raphael is definitely not afraid of his wife, but out of respect for his wife. Yes, that's the fact. That's right, that's it, it's not a rake. Advertisement Admiral Jane covered her lips gracefully, smiling and watching the intimacy between the two, with a strange look in her eyes. After all, it would be weird for anyone to see a body that is exactly the same as their own making love to a strange man. After hearing Raphael's response, Mirajane let go of her hand with satisfaction and looked at Raphael lovingly. She knew very well that Raphael's body was extremely strong, let alone being held by her hand. Even if the entire guild fought together, it would be difficult for him to be injured. However, Raphael was willing to cooperate with her trivial actions and satisfy her occasional temper. Sister Mira, it feels so strange to see someone like you having S*X with other men. Ed Lasana put her hands on her hips and said to Ed Mirajane, and looked at Raphael unabashedly, as if she was examining the qualifications of the man in front of her to win the favor of someone like her elder sister. After watching for a while, Raphael seemed shy, but Ed Lasana just saw that this man was like a salted fish. Although his facial features were handsome, he always made people think that he was just like a passerby. Ed Lasana couldn't help it immediately, and directly pulled the two Mirajanes who were chatting next to her, and asked secretly. Sister Mira. Sister Mira from another world, how did you fall in love with your brother-in-law? Weird, how did you fall in love with him? He looks like a passerby with no characteristics. It was said to be a whisper, but the sound was as loud as talking through a loudspeaker. Raphael's forehead popped out when he heard it, and he kept comforting himself and mumbling. Children's childish words are unbridled, children's childish words are unbridled. Mirajane covered her mouth and looked at Raphael with a smile. She didn't expect that Lasana in this world could break his defenses. His angry look was quite cute. Because he is my big hero, the superhero who appeared in front of me in golden clothes at my most critical moment. Mirajane's eyes sparkled with deep and endless tenderness, as if they contained 1,000 words. Her thoughts were like a tunnel traveling through time and space, gradually drifting back to that extraordinary day 2 years ago. At that moment, Mirajane was in a desperate situation, and the people closest to her were about to lose their lives in front of her eyes. Despair washed over her like a tide, and she felt helpless and confused. However, just when she was about to collapse, a mysterious light suddenly came, like a life-saving straw, lighting up her dark world. This light is full of magical power, as if it is a redemptive hand sent by God. It rescued Mirajane from the abyss of suffering and gave her the courage and hope to face life again. As Mirajane recounted what happened that day in detail, Ed Mirajane and Ed Lasana couldn't help but look at each other with shocked expressions on their faces. Mirajane noticed their abnormal reactions, looked at them suspiciously, and asked softly, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Advertisement Ed Mirajane frowned, looked at Mirajane seriously, and then slowly said, "What a coincidence, Lasana. That is, Lasana in our world also encountered danger on the same day." Admiral Jane took a deep breath, and then told in detail the specific situation of Ed Lisana's danger. Mirajane was horrified to hear every detail. She could not imagine that another Lasana had experienced such a thrilling scene. Mirajane's eyes widened and she looked at Ed Lasana in disbelief. She never expected that the two of them would encounter danger on the same day and at the same time. What is even more surprising is that from a time perspective, Ed Lasana fell into danger earlier than Lasana in his own world. So, was your Lasana also saved by Raphael? Mirajane frowned and asked with suspicion. Oddly enough, I don't seem to have seen Raphael in this world. As she spoke, she looked around as if looking for something. At this moment, Raphael, who was hiding and eavesdropping, felt his heart tighten suddenly. Only then did he realize that there seemed to be no other self that was completely opposite to him in this world. However, he soon calmed down, began to think and understood the reason. After all, he came through time travel, and this world is not like the main god in the novel written by Z, who can create a demon copy corresponding to him. Ed Lasana gently shook her head and said that was not the case. If he saved me, I wouldn't be surprised why you fell in love with him. But in fact, my escape was purely due to luck. Even I don't know the specific situation. After hearing this, Mirajane nodded thoughtfully, but her eyes were still full of confusion. She lowered her head and thought for a moment, then raised her head and stared at Ed Lasana again, trying to find some clues from her expression. However, Ed Lasana only had confusion and helplessness on her face. Ed Lasana frowned, her expression a little solemn. She said slowly, I only remember that moment when I fell from a height and my body was on the verge of death. It could be said that it was at the last moment of my life. However, at that time, a strange feeling warmth suddenly surged through my body. It was a wonderful feeling, as if a powerful force was repairing every injury on my body. At that moment, the wounds on my body miraculously healed, as if I had never been injured. After Lasana came back, she described this strange experience to me in detail. I was deeply curious about this, so I checked a lot of information, hoping to find the cause of this phenomenon. I even took the risk and sneaked into the city's books. I went to the library and looked through the dusty ancient books and documents, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find any records about this strange phenomenon. Ed Levy also walked over at this time, her face also full of doubts. As a learned scholar, this was the first time she had encountered an unexplainable situation, and it troubled her greatly. Raphael on the side was staring at Ed Lasana intently, his brows furrowed as if he was thinking about something. He seemed to feel a familiar aura on Ed Lisana's body, but at the same time it was mixed with some unfamiliar feelings. This made him think deeply. Raphael suddenly raised his head, frowning and looking at the sky outside the window. A strong doubt and curiosity arose in his heart. Is this really the will of the universe at work? Or is the so-called God manipulating it secretly? Or is there some unknown balance at work? These questions were swirling in his mind, making him unable to calm down. Chapter 105 Edulus 4. On the other side, everyone in Fairy Tail, for some unknown reason, apparently chased each other out together, but ended up scattering abruptly. Natsu, Wendy and Lucy were together, Gajeel was alone and ran off to someone unknown, and Urza also ran off to someone unknown. As for Happy and Carla, since they can fly, they may be flying to the palace in the sky at full speed. Ah, where did Happy and the others go? Why did they disappear all of a sudden? Natsu walked on the desert with a depressed look on his face, feeling extremely sad that he could not catch up with Happy. Lucy, hurry up and summon the flying celestial spirit. We can sit on it and fly in the air like Happy, so we will definitely find it. Natsu turned his head and looked at the celestial spirit key on Lucy's waist. Suddenly he approached Lucy and looked at her expectantly. I don't want it, Lucy categorically refused, regardless of the fact that I don't have that kind of celestial spirit at all. I have emphasized it countless times. Celestial spirit is a companion, not a tool. Yes, it's a partner. That's why I asked you to summon it, just like Happy. Natsu scratched his head and looked at Lucy with confusion. He naturally knew in his heart that celestial spirit was his partner, otherwise how could he not get motion sick? Lucy. So, according to your standards, as long as you don't get dizzy when you sit on it, it's a partner, and it's just a means of transportation that makes you dizzy, right? Without saying anything, Lucy raised her hand and gave Natsu a shudder. At this moment, she didn't know how to explain it. That's not the case. Okay, brother Natsu, sister Lucy, let's go find Happy and Carla. Seeing that the two of them were getting more and more noisy and seemed likely to continue to entangle, Wendy hurriedly stood up and shouted to stop. If they were allowed to continue their mischief, Carla would probably be gone by the time they stopped, and her name might even have to be changed to Dong Liang Liang. Oh! Natsu suddenly screamed in surprise. The sound was deafening, as if it was going to break through the sky. Hearing this scream, Carla and Lucy quickly turned to look at Natsu, secretly wondering, did Natsu discover something new? It's a frog, and it's a frog I've never seen before, Natsu shouted again excitedly, his eyes shining brightly, as if he had discovered some rare treasure. I saw him rushing towards Edulus Frog without hesitation, and vowed to shout, wait for Lucy, I will catch it and give it to you right away. Lucy looked at Natsu's appearance, and black lines suddenly appeared on her head. She yelled at Natsu. I don't want it, how can anyone give someone a frog as a gift? However, Natsu ignored Lucy. He smiled, turned around and continued to catch the frog with great interest. Lucy looked at Natsu who was showing off speechlessly. The corners of her eyes twitched and she decided not to pay attention to this guy who was behaving strangely. She took Wendy's hand and turned around to leave. Let's go, let's leave this fool alone, Lucy said as she walked quickly. But at this moment, an accident happened. Lucy suddenly felt that she had hit a large and soft object, and her body involuntarily took a few steps back. Advertisement Wendy trembled and said to Lucy. Sister Lucy. I think we may have to deal with some uninvited guests first before we can leave here smoothly. Lucy's eyes widened with horror. She stared in disbelief at the very familiar thighs and belly in front of her, and a creepy thought suddenly passed through her mind. Her body began to tremble involuntarily, as if enveloped by an invisible fear. She slowly raised her head, and what she saw was a giant frog that was so huge that it was beyond imagination. Ah! Natsu! Lucy let out a high-pitched scream, her voice full of fear and despair. She rolled towards Natsu, grabbed Wendy tightly, and hid behind Natsu, her body shaking continuously. When Natsu saw this scene, he didn't have the slightest fear in his heart. On the contrary, he felt extremely excited, gearing up and eager to try. Oh! This frog must be easy to catch. Look at me knocking it to the ground with one punch. He clenched his fists tightly and concentrated all his strength on his arms, preparing to give the frog that was rushing towards them a fatal blow. Natsu's eyes were firm and confident. He believed that his strength could easily defeat this frog. Natsu's fist began to burst into flames, and he was about to rush forward and hit the giant frog. However, at this critical moment, a figure suddenly appeared from behind the big frog. Everyone took a closer look and saw that the figure was holding a whip that was flashing with electricity. He had a strong figure and jumped up like a shining meteor. Taste how powerful I am. The man shouted loudly, his voice shook the whole place, and his momentum was like a rainbow. Before he finished speaking, the lightning whip in his hand struck out as fast as a dragon coming out of the sea. With a sharp sound of wind and dazzling lightning, it hit the frog's face with lightning speed and accuracy. In an instant, powerful force surged like an overwhelming force, knocking the frog to the ground. The figure gracefully did a backflip in the air, and then landed firmly on the ground. Her movements were smooth and seamless, like a peerless master. After landing, she stared seriously at the big frog lying on the ground, her eyes shining with perseverance, revealing an indomitable determination. Wow, it's the scary version of Lucy, Natsu exclaimed. Yes, it's the scary version of Lucy, Wendy agreed. Really, it's a super scary version of me. Lucy looked at Aya Lucy and exclaimed. Everyone shouted in surprise. It turns out that this person is Ed Lucy. She quickly turned her head and complained angrily to Natsu and others. Don't add the word, horrible, to me everyone. And you, aren't we all the same? Ha 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 ha, you are indeed Lucy. This ability to complain really hasn't changed at all. Natsu looked at Ed Lucy happily, then kept turning his head to compare the Lucy next to him with Ed Lucy. Boom. Boom. Don't look at girls like that. The two Lucys gave Natsu two blasts at the same time, and roared at Natsu in unison. Ah. Suddenly Double Lucy feels even scarier. Seeing Natsu's miserable state, Wendy immediately took a trembling step back. Advertisement, by the way. Why did you come here, and didn't you say you couldn't use magic? What was that whip you just did? Lucy looked at Ed Lucy suspiciously, as if she was trying to decipher every subtle expression on her face. Her brows were furrowed into a mess, and her eyes shone with curiosity and confusion. She threw out a series of questions like a barrage, speaking so fast, as if she wanted to pour out all the doubts at once. Because. This area is very dangerous, how should I put it? Ed Lucy turned her head, scratching her head unconsciously, and answered hesitantly, with an embarrassed look on her face. An awkward look. She squirmed coyly, as if trying to find the right words to explain her intentions. Finally, Ed Lucy took a deep breath and spoke very fast. Although you can use magic, magic is scarce in this world, and I don't think you will be able to use it many times. In order to use your magic, use it in key places. Normally you should use magic props, just like the whip I just used. She raised the whip in her hand and waved it towards Natsu and the others. Lucy nodded. From what she had learned before, in this world, the use of magic does need to be treated with caution. After all, magic power is not inexhaustible. If you squander it casually, you may not be able to cast powerful magic at critical moments. Then she turned her head again, and after holding it in for a long time, she squeezed out a few words through her teeth. I'm not worried about you. Natsu and Wendy couldn't help laughing when they saw this. They knew that Ed and Lucy were actually worried about them, but they were just not good at expressing it. Natsu stepped forward, patted Ed Lucy hard on the shoulder, laughed and said, It's Lucy, she's always so duplicitous. What the hell kind of conclusion are you talking about? The two Lucys complained to Natsu in unison. They all found Natsu's conclusion a bit puzzling, but they couldn't refute his statement. After all, Ed Lucy was indeed worried about them, but the way of expressing it was a little strange. Wendy stood aside, her eyes twitching crazily, looking at the two Lucys with black lines on her head. She quietly took a step back again. Double Lucy, double the complaints, and twice as scary. Okay. Let's go quickly. First we will take you to the city to buy magic props, and then we will look for traces of our friends. Ed Lucy took a deep breath, turned around and led the way. Natsu and the others looked at each other, and quickly followed Ed Lucy's footsteps towards the nearest city. In our world, if you go out into the wild without any weapons, you are committing suicide. Ed Lucy's words gradually faded away, and the figures of Natsu and others also disappeared into the desert. The frog that fell on the side suddenly stood upright again, looking at the direction Natsu and others were going, with a humane smile on his face. He raised his head toward the sky and cooed regularly, then turned around and jumped away in the other direction. Chapter 106 Edulus, 5. Why is this place so dilapidated? Under the guidance of Ed Lucy, Natsu and others entered the ruined city of Edulus. They thought the city would be a scene of luxury and prosperity, but what they saw completely exceeded their expectations. Looking around, all that comes into view is decay and desolation. Trash piled up on the ground, exuding a disgusting stench, as if it were a ruin forgotten by time. The dilapidated houses are crumbling, like candles in the wind, and seem to collapse at any time, giving people an unbearable sense of depression. The sealed houses and the walls covered with various wanted posters add to the eerie atmosphere. These seals and wanted notices are like scars on the city, silently telling stories of what happened in the past. In fact, this city once had a glorious past. Ed Lucy walked in front, with a hint of emotion in her voice. Her steps seemed a little heavy, as if she was carrying the history of the entire city. Her eyes gradually blurred, as if she saw the glory of the past through the present. The city at that time may have been brightly lit, bustling with people, and full of vitality. However, with the passage of time, all this has ceased to exist. Today, Edulus is nothing but desolation and silence. Ed Lucy's eyes reveal endless sadness and complex emotions, which are the nostalgia for the lost good times, but also the helplessness and pain of reality. She knew that the city had lost too much and could never go back to what it was before. Ever since the royal army began hunting down guild members, this place has become a place filled with fierce battles and arrests. A new round of conflict may break out at any moment, and the tense atmosphere fills the air, making it suffocating. Ed Lucy clenched her fists, and the back of her originally delicate and white hands turned sickly pale due to excessive exertion, and her eyes were burning with angry flames. Her voice was filled with sorrow and anger, telling of endless pain. It is precisely because of these never-ending battles that the once prosperous and vibrant city has turned into such a messy and miserable scene. Her words were filled with resentment towards the royal army and deep regret for the destruction the city had suffered. Natsu and the others listened quietly, feeling a sense of sadness deep in their hearts, as if they could personally feel the unspeakable despair. They knew that what Ed Lucy said was true, and what they saw before them was the best proof. The buildings on both sides of the street were dilapidated, and the walls were covered with traces of magic bombing and swords. The streets were filled with rubble and rubble. The bustling crowds of the past have long disappeared. Natsu looked around at the ruins with a solemn expression, feeling an indescribable heaviness in his heart. He stood there silently, as if the whole world had frozen. Not long ago, he happened to pass by a guild that was tightly sealed. Through the broken window next to him, Natsu could clearly see the scene inside: chaos, mess all over the ground, and even shocking stains of blood. It is not difficult to imagine how horrific and cruel a capture operation took place here. Ed Lucy on the side was silent for a long time, and finally could only shake her head helplessly and let out a deep sigh. Originally, I naively thought that they would stop their actions after they completed the arrest of the guild. Ed Lucy's voice was full of disappointment and helplessness, but who would have thought that they would actually order a strict ban on all magic-related transactions? Act and confiscate all magic props. Her tone became more and more excited. What's even more outrageous is that those families who were found to have magic props hidden in their homes were all labeled as members of the Dark Guild and were ruthlessly taken away. Speaking of this, Ed Lucy's eyes flashed with anger and pain. Advertisement. As for the ending of the Dark Guild, you all saw it with your own eyes just now. Her voice was low and sad, as if she was trying to control the grief in her heart. Everyone nodded, expressing their shock and indignation at this tragic scene. Lucy looked at Ed Lucy in astonishment. Her beautiful face was distorted by shock. Her big eyes were round and she asked in disbelief. You mean, they're all dead? How is this possible? Her voice trembled slightly, as fragile as a broken leaf in the wind, as if it could be blown away by a breeze. Obviously, Lucy simply couldn't accept this cruel fact. Ed Lucy stopped. She stared ahead silently, her eyes filled with endless sadness and helplessness. After a while, she nodded slowly and heavily in affirmation. At this time, Ed Lucy was recalling her father, the once strong and brave man. Just because he had money, those people arrested him for no reason and charged him with being a member of the Dark Guild. These people not only took away his precious life, but also confiscated all his property. If her father hadn't tried his best, used all the magic props to cause an explosion, and hid her in the tunnel in advance, Ed Lucy would have died together with her father. Father. Ed Lucy raised her head and looked up at the flawless white clouds in the sky. Tears fell down her cheeks, blurring her vision. She seemed to see her father's figure, wearing that familiar gray robe, smiling and nodding towards her. So, we're here. Suddenly, two warm palms fell gently on Ed Lucy's shoulders like a spring breeze, followed by a firm and serious word. Ed Lucy was stunned for a moment, then slowly turned around, her eyes falling on the owners of those two hands, Natsu and Lucy. Their eyes were full of determination and perseverance, as if telling her that no matter how many difficulties and obstacles lay ahead, they would move forward with her without hesitation. Wendy, who was standing aside, also stared at her with firm eyes, seeming to be silently supporting her. Ed Lucy's originally frowning brows unfurled like spring flowers at this moment, and a hearty smile suddenly bloomed on her face, as bright and dazzling as the warm spring sun. That smile contained trust and gratitude to her partners, and also revealed the rekindled fire of hope deep in her heart. Ha ha ha. Yes, you are here. You are finally here. This dark era is about to become a thing of the past. Ed Lucy wiped the tears of excitement from the corners of her eyes, turned around and pointed to the entrance of a deep tunnel, with unconcealable excitement in her voice. We are here. Below this tunnel is the legendary magic black market. We can buy some necessary props here for use on the journey to the kingdom. Advertisement. The black market. Wendy laughed happily, with a hint of relief in her voice. The existence of a black market means that hope is not completely lost. Despite this turbulent era, there are still some brave people who are willing to risk their lives to provide self-protection for civilians. In this land shrouded in darkness, black market, a word that used to be a bad word in the past, is like a bright light at this moment, bringing a touch of warmth and comfort to people. It's a black market. I'm looking forward to it a little bit. In fact, she was still a little envious of Ed Lucy's whip. The whip, full of magical power, is flexible and powerful, and every time it is waved it seems to trigger wind and thunder. Lucy couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to have such a whip. What are you waiting for? Let's go down quickly. Natsu's voice interrupted Lucy's thoughts. He looked excited, as if he couldn't wait to explore this mysterious black market. Ed Lucy led the way, her steps brisk and firm. She knew this place well after having been in the black market for many years. Lucy held Wendy's little hand and followed Natsu into this black market full of unknowns and dangers. The real entrance to the black market is hidden deep in a narrow alley at the innermost corner. The surrounding area is dark and silent, with only the occasional footsteps and whispers breaking the tranquility. Lucy, who was a little excited at first, grabbed Natsu's clothes with some fear, while Wendy on the side also hugged Lucy's hand with some fear. As they go deeper, the full picture of the black market gradually unfolds before their eyes. It is full of all kinds of strange products and strange atmosphere, as if it is a magical kingdom independent of the real world. Lucy's eyes couldn't help but light up. She looked at everything around her curiously, as if she wanted to imprint every detail of the world in her heart. Wow, it's so amazing. Natsu, on the other hand, was as excited as a child, looking around, exclaiming and cheering from time to time. Wendy couldn't help but want to rush up and take a look. Ed Lucy turned around and looked at them with a smile. Next, let's choose the magic props you want. Chapter 107. Edulus, 6. Ha 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 ha, I didn't expect you to write novels. Natsu and his group, who had just finished shopping, were sitting in a dilapidated tavern drinking tea and taking a break. At this moment, Natsu and Wendy are concentrating on studying the magic props they just bought, while Ed and Lucy are talking happily. Since the two have the same appearance, they have many common topics. However, when Ed Lucy learned that Lucy was writing a novel, she immediately danced with excitement and kept slapping the table, letting out bursts of hearty laughter. Lucy was startled by Ed Lucy's reaction. Her face turned red and she quickly covered Ed Lucy's mouth with her hands. But Natsu was absent-mindedly playing with his magic props and said casually, "What's so weird about this? I've known about it for a long time, and I watch it every night." Before he finished speaking, there was a boom sound. Natsu put his head in his hands and squatted on the ground. The magic item he was holding just now also fell to the ground. "I've told you how many times, don't break into my room. Damn it, Natsu," Lucy yelled at Natsu angrily. Ed Lucy, who was watching the show, suddenly felt someone filming her. She quickly turned around and saw that it was Wendy. "I saw Wendy twisting the magic prop she just bought and asking in confusion, 'How'd I use this I just bought? I've been twisting it for a long time and there's no reaction.'" "Hey, don't show your magic in front of people." Ed Lucy covered her face and looked at Wendy helplessly. "These guys didn't listen to what I said at all. Fairy Tale is indeed here. Catch them." At this moment, a group of soldiers armed with spears and wearing heavy armor instantly surrounded Natsu and the others, with the leader shouting orders. "Ah, I just wanted to try the power of the new magic, now that you just delivered it." Natsu became excited instantly, with blazing fire in his eyes, and pointed at the soldiers with the hilt of the magic fire-breathing flame sword he just bought. Then he raised the hilt of the sword high, roared loudly, and twitched the hilt hard. The hilt instantly ignited a torch that reached into the sky. Then Natsu waved with all his strength, and the torch swept towards the soldiers. The soldier didn't dodge at all, he just stood there and turned on his shield magic to block Natsu's attack. Natsu's jaw dropped instantly. "Advertisement, damn it. Do it again." Natsu raised the hilt of the sword again in displeasure, and pulled the hilt frantically again, but this time only a line of white smoke appeared from the sword, and he farted. "You idiot. Didn't I tell you a long time ago that magic has limitations? There is a limit to the number of times it can be used. How could you be so stupid and use up all the magic at once?" Ed Lucy's voice suddenly became sharp, full of anger and disappointment. Her eyes were wide and staring at Natsu as if they were about to burst into flames. Ed Lucy felt like crying. The small treasury she had worked so hard to save was almost emptied by 2/3 in order to buy magic items for Natsu and others. Originally, she had hoped that these props could be recycled and reused after they arrived at the royal capital, but now Natsu was so wasteful, squandering all the magic in one go. What a loser. Anyone who marries Natsu will be really unlucky for 8 lifetimes. Ed Lucy cursed Natsu secretly in her mind while looking at the battlefield anxiously. Boo! At this moment, Wendy on the side couldn't help but become nervous. She frantically turned the capsule in her hand. Seeing that the enemy was about to pounce, Wendy's heart beat faster and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Finally, in extreme anxiety, she hurriedly pulled out the capsule. However, something unexpected happened. With a confused look on her face, Wendy was instantly blown into the sky by the tornado in the capsule, along with Ed, Lucy and others. But those soldiers, their shoes miraculously turned into nails at this moment, standing firmly on the ground. After spinning in the sky for a while, Wendy and the others slowly landed not far away. Everyone's pupils turned into circles due to the strong dizziness, and they couldn't tell the difference between east, west and north. "Ah, the magic here is really hard to use. It's so troublesome," Natsu complained while spinning around. "That's right, it's really difficult to use." Wendy cast a spell to restore her state, and with a flash of soft light, she recovered from her dizzy state in an instant. Then one by one they came forward to restore Natsu and the 2 Lucys. "They're over there, come on." Everyone in Fairy Tale finally woke up and stared angrily at the soldiers rushing towards them, their hearts filled with resentment and anger. If it weren't for these damn guys, how could they have suffered so terribly? "It's better to use your own magic. Try this, Fire Dragon's Roar." Advertisement. Natsu took a deep breath, puffed his mouth slightly, and quickly clasped his hands into a cylinder shape. Immediately afterwards, a hot and violent flame spurted out from his mouth, like a fire dragon rising into the sky. In an instant, the soldiers in front were knocked away by the sudden flames and were in a state of panic. What? How dare they use magic? Come on, catch them. However, from the alley on the other side, the soldier captain's roar of shock and anger came. Following his order, more soldiers poured out in a steady stream. They held weapons and looked fierce, approaching Fairy Tale step by step. Facing the enemy's siege, Wendy was not afraid. Her eyes widened, and she instantly sucked in a lot of surrounding air into her body, and then her mouth suddenly puffed up, like a fully inflated balloon. The next moment, she opened her mouth, and a powerful air cannon roared out, rushing straight towards the soldiers in front. There was a roar, and the soldiers were knocked away one after another. Wendy also involuntarily took several steps back due to the recoil of the blow. Lucy on the side originally wanted to use the power of the whip, a magic prop she had just bought, but thinking of the tragic situation of Natsu and Wendy just now, she silently moved her hand from the whip to the key on her waist. "Come on. Open the Aries door." Lucy reached out and took out the Aries key, and a bell rang. "Enter Aries, down with them." Aries looked at Lucy in embarrassment for a moment, and said with a look of embarrassment, "But I don't have as much power as Loki and the others." Lucy smiled and nodded to her. "I believe you can do it." Aries waved his hands excitedly. Okay, I'll try it, wool bomb." Aries waved towards the soldiers, and several large balls of soft cotton instantly blocked the soldiers. The soldiers happily stopped chasing while holding the big cotton balls. Aries looked at the scene ahead in disbelief. Is this okay? Let's leave now, otherwise the magic power will be as insufficient as the props. Everyone followed Ed Lucis' footsteps and quickly left the city. Chapter 108 Edalus, 7, Sika City. This city is much better than the previous one. It seems that the war was not as severe as the previous one. Although some buildings are showing signs of cracking, at least there are still some pedestrians walking around on the streets. Natsu and his group were resting in a hotel at this time. Wow! Look, everyone, we are exactly the same on the inside. Ed Lucy rushed out of the shower room wearing a bath towel and wanted to lift up her bath towel to show Natsu and Wendy, who were slumped on the sofa. Hey, don't come out like this, don't be so generous. Lucy rushed out to stop Ed Lucy's impulse, grabbing her hand tightly to prevent her from continuing. Lucy. Natsu is still here, Wendy blushed, her body steaming like a steam engine. I don't mind, he can watch it if he wants to, Ed Lucy said nonchalantly with her hands on her hips. No, I mind, Lucy yelled at Ed Lucy like a hair blast. Lala, it's okay, we are all friends, it's okay to take a look. Natsu, do you want to take a look? Ed Lucy looked at Natsu with a wicked smile and tried to take off the bath towel. Advertisement Lucy quickly grabbed her hand and shook her head wildly. No, I mind. Natsu looked at the two Lucys blankly and suddenly burst into laughter. The noisy Lucys stopped immediately and all turned their heads to look at Natsu. Ed Lucy bent down and looked at Natsu. What are you laughing at? Is it funny? Lucy on the side raised her head and said proudly. You're not laughing at her, she doesn't have Ed. Lucy, I have a figure, right? Natsu couldn't help but laugh and complained about the two Lucys. Can you please stop taking a shower with me? The two Lucys were instantly petrified because they actually felt that what Natsu said was particularly correct. But you are indeed exactly the same, unlike me. Wendy looked at the Lucys with envy, turned her head and thought of Ed. Wendy fell on the table in despair. It's okay Wendy, you are still young now. When you grow up, you can be like her. Lucy walked forward and touched Wendy's head to comfort her. Advertisement Ed Lucy thought for a while, then raised his head and looked at Lucy. This little girl is right. We are indeed two alike. Do you have a celestial spirit that can cut your hair? If I cut my hair short, I can tell the difference between us. Lucy was stunned for a while and nodded. Yes, but are you sure you want to cut your hair short? Ed Lucy looked at Lucy with a puzzled look on her face. Huh? Do you people from Iceland care about the length of your hair? Lucy shook her head. In short, girls usually mind having their long hair cut short. Girls. Ed Lucy was stunned for a moment, shook her head, lowered her head and chuckled. That's right, but... Ed Lucy walked to the window, looked at the sky outside the window and said sadly. In this world, at this time, just living is already trying your best. It's really stupid to think about men and women again. Wendy stared blankly at the woman in front of her who was filled with sadness. But the people in the guild looked very happy. Of course you have to be happy. If you don't work hard to be happy, your heart will have collapsed a long time ago, and even in such an environment, there will be people who need us, so. Ed Lucy turned her head and looked at Natsu and the others with a smile. The sadness in her eyes was instantly replaced by determination. So even if we fall into darkness, we must maintain the guild. This is everyone's wish. Natsu smiled and looked at Ed Lucy. We are the same, we must protect Fairy Tale no matter what, we must protect it. Lucy and Wendy also looked at her with smiles, and Ed Lucy nodded vigorously. Yeah. Let's protect Fairy Tale together. No matter which world Fairy Tale is in. Protect it forever and ever. Chapter 109 Edalus, 8. Then. The rest is up to you. Keep going forward and you'll get to the royal capital in about 3 days. I'll go back to get reinforcements first. Lucy, P.S. From another world. In the early morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone on the earth, Natsu and his team saw the note left by Ed Lucy. Lucy stared at the note with an unhappy face, and kept mumbling. Really, what is the other me doing? We obviously promised to save the world together, but now we are abandoned, it's really annoying. Wendy looked at Lucy with a wry smile and tried to defend Ed Lucy. There is nothing we can do about it. She is not like us who can use magic at any time. After hearing Wendy's words, Lucy, who was still angry, instantly became stiff. Only then did she realize that although Ed Lucy looked exactly like her and even gave people the impression of a trustworthy big sister, she was actually just an ordinary human being. Thinking of this, Lucy's inner dissatisfaction gradually dissipated, replaced by Lucy's deep worry about Ed. That's true. But leaving a note and leaving quietly like this is really unpleasant. More importantly, she doesn't have magical abilities, and there are people hunting down Fairy Tale in this world along the way. Members, I am really worried about her safety. Natsu on the side rubbed his eyes and tried to cheer up, then walked to Lucy and patted her shoulder gently, smiling and comforting her. Don't worry, she is another you. We should believe in her ability. Besides, this place is not too far from the guild she belongs to. What's more, there's Raphael in the guild, so she will be safe. Lucy looked out the window worriedly, seeming to be staring at the retreating figure. The Fairy Tale Guild in Edalus was filled with a strong aroma of wine and a cheerful atmosphere. People sat around, holding wine glasses in their hands, with happy smiles on their faces. They communicated with each other, laughing one after another, as if they had forgotten all their worries. As Ed Lucy said, even if the world is full of dangers and challenges, as long as the Fairy Tale Guild remains, it will be a warm haven for everyone. Mira Jane watched the laughter of everyone at Ed Fairy Tale, and couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion in her heart. She turned around, smiled and said to Raphael. No matter which world we are in, Fairy Tale will always be the happiest and happiest guild. After hearing this, Raphael smiled in agreement and nodded gently. He was full of admiration for these people, because they never felt hopeless when facing endless pursuits, invincible powerful enemies, and enemies several or even dozens of times their size. Instead, they remain optimistic and enjoy the good times in life. In this guild, everyone has unwavering faith and an unyielding spirit. They deeply understand that difficulties are only temporary, while happiness is the eternal theme. Therefore, they resolutely chose to use laughter and mellow wine to relieve the pressure in life, and use the power of unity and love to overcome all difficulties and obstacles. Sure enough, this is the great spirit of Fairy Tale. No matter how powerful and terrifying the enemy is, you must never give up or give up easily. However, at this moment, the closed door of the guild was suddenly pushed open without any warning. Everyone who had been drinking and chatting leisurely just now suddenly stood up alertly and stared at the door with burning eyes. Advertisement, however, when they saw that the person who walked in was Lucy, they immediately sat back down with relief and continued to drink to their heart's content. Mirajane walked forward with light steps, gently took Ed Luce's arm, with a gentle smile on her lips, and asked softly, "Why are you back so soon? They have found their partners." Ed Lucy shook her head slowly, stared at everyone in the guild firmly, and then used all her strength to shout loudly, "Everyone! When I come back this time, I hope everyone can come forward and fight with us." They fight together. Ed Luce's words were like thunder, exploding in everyone's ears, causing everyone to freeze in place in shock. They stood up one after another and looked at Ed Lucy with puzzled faces, really unable to understand why she acted like this. "That's enough, Lucy. What nonsense are you talking about? You will only make everyone die in vain." Ed Levy couldn't bear it anymore and stood up suddenly, glaring at Ed Lucy, his heart full of anger. She never expected that Ed Lucy would say such words. Although the people from Otherworld seemed extremely powerful, especially the bald man, he had the terrifying power to crush the goblin hunter's mount with one punch. However, no one can be sure how many more times they can launch this attack. After all, they are few in number and have limited power. What they faced was a huge kingdom army that was as vast as the ocean and as vast as smoke and clouds. Ed Levy's anger spread quickly like a plague, infecting everyone in Ed Fairy Tale. They stood up one after another and expressed strong dissatisfaction and blame for Ed Lucy. "Yes, there is such a huge disparity in strength between the enemy and us. If you rush forward like this, you will die in vain. We are not afraid of dying, but we are afraid of dying worthless. Besides, we are already the last flame of hope. If we attack with all our strength this time, the consequences will be disastrous." Ed Lucy looked at the noisy discussions and shouted anxiously, "Don't you want to change the world? Isn't their appearance an excellent opportunity? Do we really want to take this great opportunity to change the world? Give it up?" Everyone's discussion gradually weakened, but Ed Luce's roar became more intense. "Our chances are running out. Can we just sit back and wait for death, watching the royal army attack our guild one day? Aren't you tired of this life of hiding and being on tenterhooks?" As Ed Luce's questioning sounded, everyone fell into silence, and they all looked at her blankly. Ed Luce's gaze was like a torch, scanning across everyone's face. "Nab, in order to maintain the normal operation of our guild and to take care of everyone in the guild, you work tirelessly around every day, looking for jobs and accepting various tasks. Even those tasks that you don't want to do at all, you have to grit your teeth and persevere. Done. Don't you feel exhausted on days like this? Don't you ever long for the day when you can freely choose the tasks you like, or if there is no suitable task, just wait until the task that satisfies you comes? Going to take over?" Nab silently looked down at his calloused and scarred hands, as well as his worn-out shoes that he had no time to replace, and sighed deeply. Advertisement, Gray. Don't you want to walk out of the house unscrupulously and enjoy the embrace of the sun? Are you willing to be on tenterhooks all the time, for fear of being discovered by others and can only bask in the sun secretly for a while? Do you plan to stay wrapped in those heavy clothes for the rest of your life? Cotton jackets, can you never take them off and feel the true freedom and warmth? Ed Gray lowered his head silently, his heart filled with longing. If possible, he wished he could bathe in the sunshine without any scruples and feel the warmth and comfort. "And you, Levy," Ed Luce's eyes turned to the other side, "I know you love reading. After everyone goes to sleep at night, you still have to get up quietly and immerse yourself in the sea of books with the help of dim light. But don't you feel exhausted from such a life? Now there is such an excellent place, the opportunity is right in front of you, which allows you to get rid of those mechanical operations you don't like and have a lot of time to enjoy the pleasure of reading. Are you going to give up this opportunity easily?" Ed Levy listened to Ed Luce's question and wanted to retort, but he swallowed the words when they reached his lips. She knew in her heart that Ed Lucy was right, these were the real pursuits deep in her heart. Ed Lucy looked at the silent crowd and gave her last shout. "So everyone, for us to be able to return to the true happiness we had before, and for us to realize our dreams, let's fight with them. They need us too." Ed Lucy bent over, holding her knees with her hands, breathing heavily. She was no longer angry, but felt extremely disappointed at everyone's reaction. Everyone in Ed Fairy Tale looked at each other and were silent for a long time. "I really don't want to continue doing the mission anymore. I'm too tired and don't have time to take a good rest. I don't want to worry about basking in the sun either. I want to be a real man. We want to prove to the world that we are really strong and not a substitute." Everyone began to speak out their dreams and visions for the future, and their eyes began to become firm. Fairy Tale. Never admit defeat. War. Everyone shouted together, and the momentum seemed to be enough to knock off the roof of the entire treehouse. Ed Levy stepped forward and stretched out his hand to Ed Lucy, who looked up at her. Come on, let's change the world together. Even if it costs our lives. Ed Lucy smiled happily at Ed Levy, reached out to grab her hand, and nodded vigorously. Well, even if it costs your life. Chapter 110 Edilus 9. No matter which world fairy tale comes from, we are each other's partners. Don't worry, Mirajan and Raphael, we will definitely not let anything happen to anyone. Mirajan was moved by the deep friendship between Ed Lucy and Ed Fairy Tale. She stepped forward without hesitation and became the real light of hope in everyone's hearts. At this moment, a powerful wave of magic burst out from Mirajan. In the blink of an eye, she successfully receives Satan's soul and transforms into Mirajan, a demon who is both evil and charming. She spread out her huge wings and soared in the air, exuding a terrifying aura. Is this the magic you have? Ed Levy stared at Mirajan's terrifying but powerful figure in stunned silence. He was completely shocked and froze in place. Otherworld's sister, looks really powerful. Ed Lysina was also shocked from ear to ear, extremely surprised by Mirajan's strength. Mirajan slowly restrained the fluctuations of magic power emanating from herself, with a confident and calm smile on her face. She walked step by step in front of the many onlookers, and said with firm eyes and confidence. There is more than one person as powerful as me in our organization, the Urza you just recognized by mistake is one of them. As for the other remaining members, such as Natsu and the others, although their overall strength is relatively I'm a little inferior, but I'm actually on par with you. By the way, I almost forgot to tell you, there is a strong one among us, the real king. As Mirajan spoke, she turned her head to look at Raphael aside. At this moment, the corner of Raphael's mouth slightly raised, revealing a faint smile, and then he moved slightly to stand next to Mirajan. The next moment, Raphael waved his arms carelessly, and the fairy tale members who were standing on the ground flew into the air one after another like light and agile birds. This caught everyone present off guard and couldn't help but let out bursts of exclamation. So don't worry, just fight bravely. Your world will be changed by your own hands. Mirajan's voice was as loud as a bell, echoing in everyone's ears. Her eyes were firm and confident, as if she had seen the dawn of victory. The shocking display just now ignited a real fire of hope in the hearts of Edilus fairy tale members. Their originally dull eyes became brighter at this moment, full of expectations and confidence for the future. If they were forced to go to the battlefield before, then now they have infinite longing and desire, and want to fight for it and work hard for it from the bottom of their hearts. They know that only through their unremitting efforts can they create their own beautiful future. At this moment, they are no longer afraid of difficulties and failure. Because they believe that as long as they are united, nothing can stop them from moving forward. They want to use their own hands to write their own legendary story. At the same time, Natsu, Lucy and Wendy on the other side had just walked out of the noisy and bustling city and were walking towards the city gate. Lucy is so excited. Wendy couldn't help but sigh as she looked at Lucy, who was holding a book beside her with a happy face and humming a tune. Advertisement. Of course, I found a super rare book. It records the development of the entire world in detail. Don't you want to know more about it? Lucy turned her head happily, looking at Wendy and Natsu expectantly, and raised high the book she was holding tightly in her hand. However, Natsu seemed a little impatient. He looked at Lucy indifferently and refused without hesitation. Sorry, I'm not very interested in this. Lucy had long been accustomed to Natsu's uninteresting response. She had no time to care about this man with low emotional intelligence. Instead, she turned to Wendy with interest and continued to talk. Look here, it says, in 100 years ago, there was a mysterious race called the Transcendents. Hearing this, Wendy showed an awkward smile and waved her hand helplessly towards Lucy. Well, actually, I'm not particularly interested. At this moment, a huge, black shadow that covered the sky suddenly enveloped the three Natsu people. This sudden change caught them off guard. They quickly looked up and saw an extremely large spacecraft slowly descending from the sky. Get out of the way. Accompanied by a sharp shout, a group of well-equipped and well-trained Royal Army troops walked quickly with neat and powerful steps, and drove away those who were still staying in place. Natsu and the three realized that something was wrong, so they quickly found a place to hide. What is this doing? Why is such a huge spaceship landing here? Where is it going to go? Lucy couldn't suppress her inner curiosity and cautiously poked her head out of the corner to look around. Don't worry so much, let's listen carefully and see what happened over there first. With quick eyes and quick hands, Natsu pulled Lucy back and made a silencing gesture towards her. At this time, there was a loud and noisy sound coming from the spaceship ahead. However, due to the distance and the chaos of the scene, Natsu and Lucy spent a lot of effort lying next to the wall and eavesdropping for a long time, but still found nothing. Seeing the funny looks of the two of them, Wendy on the side finally couldn't help laughing. Shish. Natsu and Lucy seemed to have a telepathic connection, and they both put their fingers to their mouths to make a shushing gesture to Wendy. Wendy showed a helpless smile, her hands flashed with magic light, and then she gently pressed her hands against Natsu and Lucy. Lucy's back, so that they could barely hear some sounds clearly. Quote. Everyone, hurry up, we must succeed this time. Take down the angel. Advertisement. The voice became clearer and clearer, but before they could finish speaking, a huge spaceship slowly took off in front of their eyes. The roar of the spacecraft almost covered up the sound just now, but Natsu and Lucy remained alert, eyes fixed on the direction of the spacecraft. Angel, why does it feel so familiar? Natsu turned his head, folded his hands on his chest, and lowered his head in thought. He stroked his chin and frowned, as if he was remembering something. Yes, I remember it too. It seems that the scary version of Levi said something about angels. Wendy also frowned, trying to remember the previous conversation. She closed her eyes and tried to search her mind for clues about the angel. Ah, correct. Lucis' shout was like a sudden stone, breaking the original tranquility, causing Natsu and Wendy, who were immersed in deep thought, to suddenly wake up. At the same time, the soldiers of the royal army who had not yet left were also attracted by the sudden sound. They turned their heads and locked eyes with them. Who? How dare you stay here? The soldiers of the royal army quickly adjusted their formations and surrounded Lucy, Natsu and Wendy as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Their eyes revealed vigilance and hostility, as if they were ready to attack at any moment. It's Lucy and Natsu from Fairy Tail. Catch them quickly. The leader recognized them and quickly directed everyone to go forward and catch them all. After all, they are literally carved out of the same mold as they are in this world. They are exactly the same. They are probably the kind that even their own mother would not recognize when she comes. The soldiers of the royal army slowly narrowed the encirclement, because they had also heard of Fairy Tail. These people are not very powerful in magic, but they are good at running away. Basically, it is difficult to catch them again if they run away. However, Lucy and others were not frightened. Instead, they looked at the soldiers with determination in their eyes. Natsu, in particular, stood up angrily like an enraged fire dragon, ready to fight the soldiers. HMPH. Now that you have discovered it, we have to deal with you first. Natsu roared angrily, igniting blazing flames in his hands, preparing to attack the royal army soldiers. At the same time, Wendy's mouth was slowly opening wide, and Lucy also took out the strongest Leo key, preparing to beat them down and break out. At this moment, a magical four-wheeled vehicle suddenly rushed into everyone's sight. It streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning, instantly knocking away the royal army soldiers. Immediately afterwards, the four-wheeled vehicle made a beautiful drift and stopped in front of Natsu and others. This is Fairy Tail's logo. Lucy looked at the logo on the four-wheeler and opened her mouth in surprise. She couldn't believe her eyes. This symbol was all too familiar to her. At this moment, the door of the four-wheeler suddenly opened, and a familiar voice came from the cab. Get in the car quickly. I heard what Lucy said. This voice nourished everyone's emotions like dew after a long drought. Heart. Natsu, Wendy and Lucy were overjoyed and quickly got into the car like arrows. As the figures of the three people completely disappeared into the four-wheeled vehicle accelerated instantly like an arrow leaving the string and quickly left the scene. Only the soldiers of the royal army who were left behind were left behind. They watched helplessly as the four-wheeled vehicle disappeared from sight, and they could only helplessly follow it. Their hearts were full of doubts and helplessness, and they didn't understand what the purpose of these magicians from Fairy Tail was, and why they suddenly appeared here. Chapter 111 Edalus 10. Wow. I finally escaped from them. Lucy took a deep breath, as if she had just experienced a terrible chase. Her body was trembling slightly. She leaned on her seat, staring at the enemy who was far behind her, feeling an indescribable feeling of gratitude in her heart. Thank you, Wendy said softly to the person driving in front of her with a warm smile on her face. However, at this moment, Natsu was in an awkward situation. Because he was in such a hurry when he got into the car, Wendy didn't even have time to apply magic to him, so he was now on the verge of wanting to vomit but not wanting to vomit, and he looked very uncomfortable. Ah, brother Natsu, let me help you. Wendy finally noticed Natsu's miserable condition and hurriedly stretched out her hand to put on him. As she moved, bursts of blue light appeared on her hands, as if containing endless healing power. Ouch, I feel much better. Natsu's expression gradually relaxed and his body no longer felt so uncomfortable. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. Boom. The car seemed to have passed through a big pothole, and Natsu suddenly jumped up like a spring, but because he stood up too hard, his head hit the roof of the car directly, making a dull impact. The pain made him immediately lie down on the chair, moaning continuously. Hey, hey, hey. Be careful. Don't crash my car. After hearing the sound, the person in front slowly turned his head, stared at Natsu sharply, and yelled in a stern tone. You guy, why are you so noisy? Only then did Lucy and Wendy notice the appearance of the person in front of them. This person has the same cherry blossom colored hair as Natsu, wears a pair of goggles on his head, and the lower half of his face is exactly the same as Natsu. Could it be? Lucy looked at the man in front of her in shock, and combined with the Fairy Tail logo, she already had the answer in her mind. Haha, that's right. The fastest man in Fairy Tail, Natsu, who is called Fireball by everyone, is right here. The man pushed up his goggles handsomely and grinned confidently at Lucy and the others. A smile. Natsu. It's really the Natsu of this world. Lucy shouted excitedly. Natsu, who was lying on the ground pretending to be dead, suddenly came to life as if he had been given a shot of blood. He quickly put his face close to Natsu's. In front of me, I pinched the left side and the right side happily. Wow, it's true. He looks exactly like me. He's just carved from the same mold. Natsu shouted excitedly, dancing around as if he had discovered a new world. Natsu reached out and slapped Natsu away, shouting loudly, Don't touch me. And I'm driving now, you guy. Sit down and sit still. For the first time, I truly feel the magic of this world. The Natsu of this world doesn't get carsick, and he even drives so fast. Lucy looked at the scene in front of her, turned her head in disgust with Wendy. Lucy looked at Ed Natsu and remembered the miserable situation Natsu was in when he first got in the car. She immediately covered her mouth and laughed. She recalled that Natsu's face was pale and he looked like he was about to vomit, but now he was so energetic, which really made people laugh. Huh, you actually get carsick in my other self. You are too inferior. Being able to drive and speed is so romantic and refreshing. Ed Natsu suddenly looked at Natsu with disdain. He couldn't understand why someone would get carsick. Isn't it a great feeling to ride freely? What are you talking about? Transportation is the greatest evil. Natsu retorted that he found it a torture to sit motionless in the car and endure the bumps and shakes. You guy, you don't understand the pain of motion sickness at all. I'd say you're the B*****************. D. What a wonderful thing it is to drive. Go to hell, you motion sick person. Natsu instantly reached out and grabbed Ed Natsu's collar. Ed Natsu was not to be outdone and grabbed Natsu's collar. A faction fight was about to begin. It's as fierce as the fight between the sweet tofu brain party and the salty tofu brain party. Boom. Advertisement. Boom. There were two explosions, and a big bag came out of Natsu and Ed Natsu's head, and there seemed to be smoke coming from their heads. Lucy raised her red hands and shouted loudly, "Now is not the time to do this. Two idiots." Hiss, it hurts just as much when Lucy from Otherworld hits someone. Yes, it hurts. It hurts so much. The two people who were at a stalemate just now became brothers because of Lucy's fist. No matter which world Natsu is in, he's an idiot. Lucy covered her head helplessly and looked at the two of them speechlessly. Wendy on the side looked at the scene in front of her with great interest. She had a lot of gossip in her heart. At this moment, Ed Natsu's expression changed, he turned around and suddenly stepped on the brakes. The wheels made a sharp friction sound with the ground. At the same time, the car body began to slide sideways. With the friction sound of the tires and the ground, the vehicle began to drift. During the drifting process, strong friction is generated between the brake pads and the brake disc, making a harsh metallic friction sound. The vehicle continued to slide forward under the influence of inertia. The tires drew a black mark on the ground, and the sound of friction with the ground was endless. Finally, the vehicle came to a steady stop, leaving only the sounds of braking and drifting echoing in the air. Lucy and others in the car were instantly caught off guard by Ed Natsu's operation, and they stumbled around in the car and collided with each other. The worst thing is that Natsu, who had no motion sickness in the first place, got motion sickness again due to this. What's even worse is that Wendy's magic time limit has expired. The combination of the two, Natsu is about to ascend to heaven. Ouch, what are you doing, stopping the car so suddenly? Lucy covered her dizzy and painful head and looked at Ed Natsu dissatisfied. Ed Natsu looked at everyone with a solemn face. I don't know what fuel your cars over there use, but the cars here use magic materials as fuel. You should also understand the magic of this world. It's limited, right? So, with the fuel of this car, I can only send you here. What? Only then did Lucy notice that this magic four-wheeled vehicle did not have an SE plug, which meant that the vehicle's fuel did not use the driver's magic power, but it was surrounded by a desolate desert. Natsu, whose soul was about to ascend to heaven, felt the car stop, and instantly ran out of Ed Natsu's car like an arrow that had left the string. When he stepped on the ground again, he was instantly resurrected and cheered. Ed Natsu was lying at the window looking at Natsu, with a smile on his face. I didn't expect the other me to be quite reasonable. Then he looked back at Lucy and Wendy, who had not gotten out of the car for a long time, turned around and pressed a button on the control panel. The car shook violently, and Lucy and Wendy were instantly shaken out of the car. Ah, this is too much, really. Wendy and Lucy complained unhappily to Ed Natsu while rubbing their butts. Humph, you are free to start a fight with the royal army, but don't involve us. It's already difficult for us to survive. If you don't succeed and leave, what should we do? Ed Natsu looked at Lucy and the others expressionlessly, with a trace of sadness in his eyes. If Lucy, it was the Lucy I know who asked me to help you, I would have no choice but to help you, but this does not mean that I will fall into this vortex of struggle. I just want to drive well. Edalus turned his head and was about to close the car door and leave. At this moment, a big hand grabbed him instantly. It was Natsu. Advertisement. Don't walk so fast. I still have something to ask you. Natsu looked at him curiously while forcefully pulling him out of the car. Nothing else, I just want to ask you why you don't get motion sickness. Natsu approached Ed Natsu's face and looked at him with confusion on his face and asked. Lucy. Just for this. Yuawu. I'm sorry, I don't know either. Ed Natsu, who was arrogant, confident, and arrogant just now, suddenly turned into a little girl who looked at Natsu pitifully like an aggrieved little girl. Are you, really, that me just now? Natsu was instantly shocked by Ed Natsu's dead appearance and broke out in cold sweat, while Lucy and Wendy were still petrified. Yes, people often will say that as soon as I get in the car, I become a different person. I'm scared, woo. Ed Natsu spoke intermittently while sobbing, and burst into tears at the end. Natsu was sweating profusely and looked at Ed Natsu in front of him. He felt helpless with the other person in front of him. Natsu, it feels like looking in the mirror. Lucy teased Natsu, and she once again felt the magic of this world. It's a pity that I didn't bring a camera, otherwise I could have taken a picture of Ed Natsu like this and showed it to the other people in the guild. Anyway, they don't know that there are two Natsu, and then they will, quack quack. A perverted smile gradually appeared on Lucy's face. Wendy immediately stayed away from her, and Ed Natsu was so unbearable that he dug a hole and buried himself. Lucy came back to her senses in an instant and looked at the two of them awkwardly. Natsu on the side complained to Lucy contemptuously. Lucy, you are so perverted, you scared the other me. Lucy, who knew she was in the wrong, rarely responded to Natsu. Then, that, you can look forward. The royal capital has arrived. Lucy, of this world, just let me send you here, so. Edna slowly got out of the hole, looked at everyone and said weakly while pointing forward. Everyone quickly walked to the edge and lowered their heads to see the huge and prosperous royal capital below. Oh, it's already here. You should have told me earlier. Natsu shouted happily to Edilus, which scared Ed. Natsu shrank his neck and apologized repeatedly. Let's go. Go to the capital to see what conspiracy they have. Natsu punched his fists in high spirits. Ed Natsu knelt on the ground and looked up at him in confusion. Do you really want to go to war with the royal army? Why, you can't win. Natsu paused, turned to look at him with a smile, shook his head and said. Can't you win? I don't believe it. Can you win? You won't know until you fight. As for why, to seek justice for fairy tales partners. Ed Natsu raised his head and looked at Natsu blankly, saying nothing for a long time. Looking at their retreating figures, he slowly lowered his head, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and the tears in his eyes continued to fall to the ground, while he murmured in his mouth. Partner. Chapter 112 Edilus 11. Gajiel. Everyone in Natsu who entered the capital was shocked to the extreme by the prosperity of the capital, and they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. When major towns in the outside world were devastated by war, the prosperity of the royal capital seemed extremely ironic. At this moment, Lucy's sharp eyes caught a figure from behind, which looked particularly like Gajiel. Although he is wearing a flawless white suit, no matter which angle you look at, you can definitely conclude that the person must be Gajiel. Lucy couldn't wait to pull Natsu and Wendy and chase the figure without hesitation. The man in the white suit who looked exactly like Gajiel in front seemed to have noticed someone calling his name. However, what was unexpected was that his first reaction was not to turn around to confirm the situation, but to run away without hesitation. Natsu and Lucy held onto Wendy tightly, trying their best to chase the man. Unfortunately, there was an endless stream of pedestrians on the road, making their journey extremely difficult. In the end, they could only watch helplessly as the man gradually disappeared into the crowd, as if he had evaporated without a trace. Lucy, are you really sure that the person just now was Gajiel? Wendy gasped and asked Lucy. She was out of breath from running all the way, and she didn't even have time to see the man's face clearly. I'm not 100% sure, but it feels so similar. Maybe he is Gajiel in this world, right? Lucy racked her brains and tried to recall the scene just now, her tone filled with indescribable uncertainty. She silently considered the various possibilities, trying to find a logical interpretation. Forget it. Don't worry about him. We'd better go find Happy first. Natsu shook his head and turned away resolutely. Lucy frowned and stared ahead, her face full of suspicion. After a moment of hesitation, she pulled Wendy and hurriedly chased after her. And just now, when Lucy caught a glimpse of the man who looked very similar to Gajiel, he quickly flashed into a dark and deep alley like a ghost. After confirming that no one was following him, he breathed a sigh of relief and leaned against the cold wall to rest for a while. Oh, you and I look alike. Can you tell me where there are cats around here? Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the alley next to Ed Gajiel. Ed Gajiel's nerves were tense for a moment, and he put on a highly alert posture as if facing a powerful enemy, staring at the figure in front of him with burning eyes. However, just a second later, he was so stunned that he could hardly close his mouth. You are, me. Ed Gajiel never expected that there would be someone who looked exactly like him, it was like looking in the mirror. He stared at the other person in disbelief with his eyes wide open, as if he had seen an incredible vision. This sudden shock left him completely confused. Advertisement. Nothing to be surprised about. I am you and you are me. It's normal to look the same. The person opposite said calmly, as if he was not surprised by all this. His tone was relaxed and natural, as if this was a normal thing. Gajiel muttered nonchalantly. He was currently thinking about how to find a cat. After all, among the dragon slayers in the guild, he is the only one who doesn't have a cat of his own. This statement, could it be Otherworld? Otherworld peers. Ed Gajiel's reaction was quick, and it didn't take long for him to guess Gajiel's origin. He immediately stared at Gajiel excitedly, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. What is your purpose of coming here? Do you want to overthrow the regime of this kingdom? I can't wait any longer. Gajiel was very tired of this self, who suddenly became extremely excited. He frowned, pushed Ed Gajiel aside unceremoniously, then turned around to leave, leaving behind a sentence. I told you, I'm just looking for a cat. It's the kind of cat that can fly and talk. Although I don't know exactly what the cat you are talking about is, but if it can fly and talk, then it should be a transcendent family. Ed Gajiel's words were like thunder, exploding in Gajiel's mind. Gajiel, who was walking forward, suddenly stopped as if being stopped by an invisible force. He turned around, his face full of doubts and expectations, and asked with a slightly trembling voice, the transcendent. Ed Gaudiel smiled slightly and nodded gently in affirmation. Then, he carefully observed the surrounding environment from left to right, then lowered his voice and stared at Gaudiel and suggested, "Why don't we change places? There are many people here and it is not a good place to talk about this kind of thing." Gaudiel stared at Ed Gaudiel closely, as if trying to see a clue from his expression. After a long time, he finally nodded slowly, his heart full of curiosity and expectation. Later, he followed Ed Gaudiel to a slightly old retro tavern. As soon as Gaudiel sat down, but before his butt was firmly seated, he couldn't wait to look at Ed. Gaudiel's lips were slightly open, as if he had 1,000 words to express. However, before he could speak, a glass of fragrant wine was gently pushed in front of him by Ed Gaudiel. "Don't be impatient yet, come on, let's have a glass of wine before we talk." Ed Gaudiel shook his glass and said with a smile to Gaudiel. Gaudiel looked at Ed Gaudiel depressedly, feeling speechless for a while, but he still picked up the wine glass and drank the wine in one gulp. "You've sat down and drank. You should say something now." Gaudiel looked at Ed Gaudiel with an unhappy expression. He didn't expect that the guy in front of him who looked exactly like him would be so showy. "Ha ha ha. Okay. But before that, please allow me to tell you a little story." Ed Gaudiel slowly poured himself another glass of wine, and then began to slowly tell Gaudiel. Advertisement. This world was originally a world full of magic power, and people lived happily in this world. But one day, a superior god appeared. She said that the world was about to fall into the greatest crisis, that is, the depletion of magic power, and the whole world began to lose its magic power. Exhausted. At the beginning, the king did not listen to the so-called prophecy of God, but later, the magic power in this world became increasingly rare and began to dry up. The king began to believe it, and he went to seek what the god would do. Quote. Ed Gaudiel slowly took a sip of wine to moisten his throat, looked at Gaudiel who was attracted by his words, smiled slightly, and continued to talk. The god's method was to plunder the magic power from other worlds to replenish this world. The king believed it and did so. When he tasted the magic power again, the king began to go crazy and continued to extract magic power from that world again and again. Quote. And it became more and more fierce. Until 2 days ago, the king planned to put all the magic power extracted before into it once and for all, and directly launched a big wave, but it seemed to be destroyed by people in that world. After his desperate attempt failed, like a drowning man grabbing the last straw, he turned his attention to the existence known as the tribe of gods. He attempted to turn them all into magic crystals, and once again launched a ruthless attack on another world. Magic plunder. Gaudiel's mind froze in an instant. He seemed to roughly understand what Ed Gaudiel was talking about, but how did this relate to the transcendent and the cat he dreamed of? Could it be? Gaudiel's heart moved, as if he had captured some key information. He raised his head suddenly and stared at Ed Gaudiel. Ed Gaudiel raised the corners of his mouth slightly, revealing an imperceptible smile. He nodded slightly in agreement, then picked up the wine glass again, took a sip, and then spoke slowly. "Yes, as you expected, that god is the queen of the Transcendent clan, and the cat you have been looking for is them. They are the only race in this world that can use magic. So, what exactly do you want?" Gaudiel finally understood the hiding place of the cat he had longed for, but instead of feeling happy, he was replaced by a deep worry. From Ed Gaudiel's words, he keenly sensed an ominous sign. Those cats seemed to be facing the fate of turning into crystal. "What do I want to do? Shouldn't you be clear about me in another world?" Ed Gaudiel drank the last sip of wine, stood up and stretched out his elbows to look at Gaudiel. Gaudiel looked at Ed Gaudiel with a grin, stood up and touched Ed Gaudiel's elbow directly. "Ah, let's make a scene." Chapter 113 Edilus 12. "Carla, where are you going?" Happy yelled breathlessly. He had been chasing Carla for a long time, but he still couldn't catch up with her. He followed Carla closely, shouting anxiously, not even knowing when the scenery and companions around him would disappear. "Stop following me, Tomcat. I want to fly to that palace in the sky." Carla suddenly turned back and looked at Happy impatiently. There was a hint of coldness and helplessness in her eyes, as if she was disappointed that Happy knew nothing about him. Happy was stunned. He looked at Carla's back, his heart filled with confusion and grievance. He didn't know what he did wrong, why Carla always accused him of not knowing anything. He tried to catch up with Carla to find out. "Why, Carla, you keep saying that I don't know anything, what should I know?" Happy shouted, a hint of crying in his voice. Carla didn't look back and just replied calmly, "You don't need to know that much, Tomcat. There are some things that you can't understand." Happy was even more puzzled. He looked at Carla's retreating back, feeling full of confusion and loss. He didn't know what to do, so he could only silently follow Carla and continue to follow her footsteps. Just like that, Happy and Carla flew in the open sky one after another, and the towns in the sky gradually became clear. Happy doesn't know why Carla goes there or what secrets she hides. But he knew that no matter what happened, he would always be by Carla's side until she was willing to tell him the truth. As soon as they landed in front of the town gate, a group of soldiers wearing armor and holding spears immediately surrounded them. The soldiers looked serious and yelled, "Who are you? How dare you break into this place?" Carla stood up without fear, facing these two tall, cat-shaped armored men wearing steel helmets. A trace of determination and indifference flashed in her eyes. She took a deep breath and said calmly, "We are warriors returning from Aslanton. We need to see the queen, and we have important things to report to her." The two soldiers looked at each other, obviously a little surprised by their identities. One of them asked tentatively, "Are you really the warriors who came back from Aslanden? Please wait a moment, I will go and inform the queen." After saying that, he turned around and spread his wings to fly deep into the town. Happy looked at Carla with confusion and asked, "Why do they call us warriors? Did we do something?" Carla didn't look back and just replied coldly, "You don't need to know these things now. You don't know anything anyway, so you might as well keep going like this." Happy was a little aggrieved by Carla's attitude. He lowered his head and played with his fingers silently. Carla, on the other hand, continued to observe the surrounding situation vigilantly to ensure that there was no threat. Not long after, two figures walked slowly from the gate. Wearing gorgeous clothes, they walked over majestically. One of them praised loudly as he walked, "Are you the warriors who completed the Aslanton mission? It's amazing. Her Majesty the Queen will definitely reward you heavily." Advertisement. Happy recognized one of them at a glance, and he shouted in shock, "One night. Why are you here? And you also turned into a cat." The cat known as Yiya turned around, looked at Happy and said speechlessly, "What are you surprised about? Aren't you a transcendent yourself? What's so strange about turning into a cat?" At this time, another black cat that kept waving its arms also came over. He said to Nichia with a smile, Okay, Captain Nichia, this is their first time coming to Edalis. They will definitely be surprised to see the transcendent." Nichia nodded, put on a handsome pose and said, "So that's it. I thought they were used to it." The black cat walked up to Carla and Happy, introduced himself with a smile. "I am Nadi, the Minister of State of Exdalia. That over there is Nichia, the commander of the Exdalia Guards Division. It's really hard work for you to be able to complete Aslanden's mission and return safely." Quote. Mission. Happy blinked, his face full of doubts and confusion. He looked at the serious Nichia in front of him, and his doubts became more and more serious. He always thought that his encounter with Natsu was purely coincidental, but now it seems that things are not that simple. Could it be that all this was carefully arranged? Nichia didn't seem to notice Happy's inner fluctuations. He turned and walked forward, while beckoning Happy and others to follow. His steps were firm and powerful, as if something important was waiting for them. "I don't have time to explain to you. Without further ado, let's go quickly. Her Royal Highness is waiting." Nichia's voice echoed in Happy's ears, making him shiver. Her Majesty the Queen. This title made Happy even more confused. What kind of queen were they going to see? Happy frowned and looked at Nichia and Nadi walking in front, feeling full of uneasiness. He turned to look at Carla beside him and found that she had her head lowered and her face looked ugly. She seemed to be worried about what was about to happen. Happy walked quickly in front of Carla, turned his head slightly, and whispered to her, "Don't be afraid, Carla, let's wait and see the situation first to see what the so-called queen is going to do. Don't worry, I will protect you." Quote. Carla still lowered her head and did not respond to Happy's words. Her mood was very complicated. She knew what the so-called mission was, but she didn't know it clearly enough. It was more like small fragments, but the queen, she knew who it was. Happy saw that Carla didn't respond and didn't force it. He walked in front silently, always alert to the movements around him. He knows that the next road may be full of unknowns and dangers, but they must face it bravely, in order to find the truth and to protect themselves and Carla. As soon as he entered the city, Happy was deeply shocked by the gorgeous and unfamiliar sight in front of him. His eyes widened and he could hardly believe what his eyes were seeing. In this city, cats of various shapes and colors are everywhere. They stroll leisurely, play together, or sit quietly in the corner enjoying the sunshine. Everywhere is filled with a harmonious and happy atmosphere, as if this is a paradise for all cats. Happy couldn't help but open his mouth wide and exclaimed, "Yes, it's the country of cats." His voice was full of surprise and excitement, as if he had discovered some great secret. Nadi heard Happy's exclamation, looked back at him, smiled and shook his head. "It's not that we are not cats, but transcendents. We are the beings who lead mankind and stand above mankind." Happy had a puzzled expression on his face after hearing Nadi's words. He scratched his head, looked at Nadi and asked, "Beyond, does it mean transcending humans?" Nadi nodded and looked at the huge and gorgeous palace in front of him. The walls of the palace are inlaid with various gems, shining brightly. The roof is carved with exquisite patterns, showing its nobility and majesty. Advertisement. Nadi took a deep breath and then said slowly, "This is the kingdom of the transcendent, Exdalia. It is located above the human kingdom and is a more advanced and mysterious existence." Happy followed Nadi's gaze and saw the huge palace standing in the distance, as if it was an unscalable peak. He felt his heartbeat speed up, and a strong sense of shock surged into his heart. He had thought that the rebuilt fairy tale guild was already very large, but he did not expect that there was such a huge existence in this world. "Let's go." Nichia's voice interrupted Happy's thoughts. He turned to Happy and Carla and gestured, then led them towards the palace. Happy and Carla followed closely, walking briskly, following Nichia into the mysterious and magnificent kingdom of the transcendent. On the way, Nadi was still giving a detailed explanation to Happy. His words were full of derogation and disdain for human beings, while also revealing his deep admiration for the queen. Perhaps because they were the first to complete the task and come up successfully, or perhaps because they showed certain qualities, Nadi and Nichia showed unusual kindness to them. Nadi lowered his head slightly, looked into Happy's curious and puzzled eyes, and spoke slowly. "Humans, this kind of creature, are really inferior and stupid. If no one manages them, they will spread everywhere like pests and destroy the balance of the world. Therefore, Our existence is to manage them well and ensure the stability of the world. Order. Nichia nodded in agreement, with an expression of disgust on his face. Yes, their smell is really bad. Every time I get close to them, I feel sick to death. And our queen, she shoulders the important responsibility of managing mankind and works hard every day. Nadi continued. For those disobedient, redundant, and useless humans, Her Majesty the Queen will mercilessly eliminate them. And the way to eliminate them is. He smiled slightly and uttered the cruel word, kill. After Happy heard this, he was instantly shocked. He asked with a trembling voice as he stared at Nadi's calm and cold face with wide eyes. Why do you do this? Human beings are also lives. How can we arbitrarily deprive them of their lives? Nadi turned his head, looked at Happy's puzzled eyes, and said calmly. Why else? Because the magic power in this world is constantly disappearing. Her Majesty the Queen is doing this just to restore the magic power to normal and maintain the balance of the world. And, he added, not only the humans in this world, the Queen also manages the humans in the world of Aslandan. Her power is extremely powerful, and she can decide the life and death of humans, because she is the real god. Quote. After hearing Nadi's words, Happy's face became even more ugly. He clutched the tiny cat paw tightly, as if trying to draw strength from it. He asked in a low voice, why can she decide the life and death of human beings? Human beings also have their own will and rights. Seeing this, Nichia replied seriously, because the Queen has this ability and this power. In the Queen's eyes, humans are just the objects of her management. She can decide their life and death at will, just like we can trample to death at will. Just like an ant. After hearing this, Happy looked at them in shock. Unexpectedly, to them, humans were like ants. Happy remained silent for a long time. 5 SP Chapter 114 Edilus. 13. What exactly is our mission? Carla, who had been silent for a long time, spoke. She slowly raised her head, her eyes that once shone with lively light were now full of doubts and confusion. Her eyes focused on Nadi and Nichia standing in front of them, as if looking for some kind of answer. From the moment I was born, there was always a task lingering in my mind. It was like an endless melody, constantly urging me to move forward. However, at some point not long ago, the mission in my mind suddenly changed. I just want to ask, what kind of mission do we have? What does this mission mean? Carla's voice revealed deep confusion and anxiety. Carla turned her head and looked at Happy beside her. Her eyes were full of helplessness and sadness, as if she was about to reveal a cruel secret. Happy looked at Carla with a confused look on his face. He couldn't understand Carla's mood at the moment. Carla took a deep breath, as if she had made up her mind. She spoke slowly, her voice low and heavy. The moment I was born, I accepted an order. That order was to obliterate the Dragon Slayer, Wendy, who was selected in Her Majesty the Queen's human management plan. Happy was stunned when he heard this. He looked at Carla in disbelief, as if he had heard a ridiculous joke. However, when he saw Carla's serious and sad eyes, he knew that this was not a joke. He clenched his fist suddenly and roared at Carla. What's going on, Carla? What's going on with erasing Wendy? Why did you do that? Answer me, Carla. Suddenly, Happy seemed to be hit in the heart by an invisible force. He realized something, and his inner uneasiness spread instantly. His face instantly became as pale as paper, as if all the blood had been drained away, and the fear and despair in his eyes were like a strong wind in the night, raging crazily. He covered his head in pain, his hands shaking, as if to resist the pain that was about to tear his soul apart. He looked at Carla with pleading eyes, and his voice was filled with endless trembling. If your mission is to kill Wendy, then my mission is to kill Natsu. Carla looked at Happy's miserable look and sighed deeply. She looked at Happy unhappy and helplessly. Happy, you know nothing. Sometimes I really think you are very happy. Happy seemed to turn a deaf ear to Carla's cries. He was still trapped in his own pain and confusion. He covered his head in pain, his face turned pale, and his body weakly knelt on the ground, as if he was bearing some unspeakable pressure. Advertisement. His voice was trembling with tears, and every word was full of despair and helplessness. My mission. I actually received an order to kill Natsu. How is this possible? Why is this happening? His eyes were filled with tears, as if he couldn't believe this cruel fact. Carla looked at Happy's painful and desperate look, and her heart was filled with anger and confusion. She bit her lip and yelled at Happy. That's enough. You stupid Tom, cheer up. We have never done anything like that, and we have no intention of going on that ridiculous mission. Her voice echoed in the empty space, breaking the eerie silence. She stared closely at Nadi and Nichia in front of her with a determined light in her eyes. After hearing Carla's words, Nadi and Nichia looked at each other, obviously caught off guard by this sudden situation. They discussed in whispers, trying to find out the cause of this strange phenomenon. Nichia looked at Nadi in confusion and asked in a low voice, what's going on? How come their memories are confused? Nadi frowned, thought for a while, and then said uncertainly, maybe it's a side effect of command override. After all, they haven't lived here since they were young, so they don't know these things. Carla listened to their whispers, and the anger in her heart surged even more. She pointed at them angrily and yelled. Give me an explanation. What exactly did you do? Why do you say we have completed the mission? Give me an answer. Her voice was full of anger and dissatisfaction, seeming to tear the entire space apart. Nadi and Nichia were shocked by her momentum and were speechless for a moment. The entire space fell into a brief silence, with only Carla's breathing echoing in the air. She stared closely at Nadi and Nichia, waiting for their explanation. Happy was still kneeling on the ground, covering his head in pain, as if he was trapped in endless darkness. Nadi walked forward slowly and said, "Then, let me explain it to you." He waved his hands up and down while explaining with a smile. 6 years ago, in order to comply with Her Majesty the Queen's human management plan, we released 100 transcendents into Aslandon, in order to make them remember the plan to eliminate the Dragon Slayer, so we implanted this mission into their minds. Happy put down the hand covering his head and looked at Nadi with an angry look. Nadi just smiled softly and continued. But the current situation has changed. Because humans have created a kind of magic called F***CK, and the magic power of Dragon Slayer seems to be converted into a special kind of magic power. Your plan has changed. Nadi moved closer to Carla and Happy, and the smile on his face became even bigger. Then bring Dragon Slayer to this world. What we want is the magic of dragons. Natsu and others on the other side were heading towards the location of the news about their companions with high hopes, but they did not expect that this turned out to be a carefully laid trap. As soon as they stepped into this area, a powerful wave of magic came quietly, binding them tightly. Except for Lucy, who was thrown out by Natsu with quick eyes and hands and was able to escape, Natsu and Wendy were both bound by a mysterious magic limiter and could not move. Advertisement: those who caught them were Urza and others from this world, and their faces were full of ridicule and disdain at the moment. HMPH, the people of Fairy Tail are indeed a bunch of mindless idiots. Hughes looked at the tied-up Natsu and Wendy with a sneer on his lips. Hearing the news that there were companions here, he stepped in without hesitation. Trap, so stupid, ha 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 ha. His laughter echoed in the empty field, full of mockery and contempt. Natsu and Wendy listened to his words with anger and unwillingness in their hearts. They obviously came here to find their missing companions, but they didn't expect to be in such a situation. Shujboy also looked at them coldly, with a trace of complicated emotions flashing in his eyes. Although he also mocked Natsu and the others, there was an uneasy premonition quietly spreading in his heart. Because the strong person he knew, Lucy, seemed to have never appeared yet. This made him start to wonder whether this trap could really catch all the targets as they hoped. Natsu and Wendy struggled, trying to break free, but the power of the magic limiter was extremely powerful, preventing them from moving at all. Their eyes were full of unwillingness and anger, and they could not accept that they were subdued so easily. At this moment, Barrow walked forward, holding a cane and looking at Natsu and others with cold eyes. "Okay, don't waste time," he said calmly. "Put them in prison first, and then deal with them when the king comes back." The soldiers immediately came forward and escorted Natsu and Wendy. They were taken to a dark, damp prison and thrown into a small cell. "Sir, the Lucy who escaped." A soldier seemed to be worried and said, but before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Barrow waving his hand. "That guy is not important," Barrow said coldly. "She will be found and eliminated by us sooner or later. The most important thing now is to keep a close eye on these people and not let them have any chance to escape." The soldiers nodded respectfully and exited the cell. Natsu and Wendy were held alone in a cell, surrounded by darkness, with only a weak light illuminating their faces. They looked at each other, their eyes full of determination. "We will definitely find a way to escape." Natsu gritted his teeth and said, "We can't just be trapped here." Wendy also nodded in agreement. They know that only by escaping can they have a chance to find their missing companions and reveal the truth about the world. However, escaping this cell is not an easy task. They need to find keys or break locks while avoiding patrolling soldiers and magical traps. But no matter what, they will make every effort to fight to the end for freedom and the safety of their companions. The door to the Fairy Tail Guild in Edelus was instantly knocked open, and Lucy's figure stumbled in, shouting. Natsu and Wendy were taken away. Then Lucy immediately fainted in F chapter 115 Edelus 14. Lucy. After Mirajane and Ed Lucy heard this exclamation, their expressions changed drastically, and they hurriedly ran in the direction of Lucy and hugged her tightly. Mirajane raised her head anxiously, her eyes full of anxiety and worry, and looked straight at Raphael. Raphael's expression looked extremely solemn. He quickly quickened his pace, came closer, and began to check Lucy's condition with all his concentration. He carefully reached out his hand and gently stroked Lucy's forehead, then put his fingers on her wrist, holding his breath and feeling the changes in her body with his heart. After a long period of silent waiting, he finally let out a deep breath of relief. Thank God, she just fainted due to exhaustion due to long-term fatigue and running around. She is not serious. After a short rest, she will wake up. At this time, we should put her on the bed first and let her rest peacefully for a while. Raphael said softly. Then let her sleep in my room. Ed Lucy made a decision immediately, picked up Lucy without hesitation, turned around and walked into her room resolutely. Lucy's body was as light as a feather. When Lucy held her, she seemed not to feel any weight. She carefully placed Lucy on the bed and gently covered her with the quilt. Looking at Lucy's haggard and peaceful face, Ed Lucy couldn't help but feel pity in her heart. Lucy. She must have been running here without stopping for a moment. It was so hard for her. Raphael, do you remember what Lucy said just now? Mirajane looked at Lucy worriedly, thinking constantly in her mind. Echoing the words Lucy said before she passed out. She turned her head and stared at Raphael with worried eyes. Raphael nodded silently, his brows furrowed tightly, his expression unusually heavy. His eyes always stayed on Lucy, as if he wanted to find some answers on her face. However, Lucy closed her eyes tightly at this moment and breathed steadily, as if she had entered a deep dream. Natsu and Wendy were actually captured. Logically speaking, with Mist Gun's pills, we can become the only people in the world who can use magic. Their strength will not be so bad. Mirajane murmured to herself, with a hint of doubt and confusion in her voice. As she spoke, she fell into deep thought. Raphael paced back and forth in the room anxiously. His steps seemed a bit messy, as if the thoughts in his heart were as chaotic as his steps. He stopped and stared into the distance outside the window, with a deep worry in his eyes. Is the enemy too powerful? Or are there other reasons that led to their failure? Raphael said to himself. His brows furrowed deeper and deeper. Ed Lucy, who had just placed Lucy properly, walked out of the room and heard Raphael muttering to himself full of doubts. After hesitating for a moment, he cautiously said, could it be that they accidentally fell into some trap? Raphael's footsteps paused for a moment, but soon he continued to pace, and shook his head in denial. It's unlikely. Natsu was aware of each of our situations, and besides, everyone was still together before this. He has no reason. Wait. Halfway through his words, Raphael seemed to suddenly think of something, and a ray of light burst out in his eyes. He suddenly raised his head, looking straight at Mirajane with blazing eyes. Mirajane looked at him and immediately understood what he meant, as if they had a tacit understanding. Advertisement. The two of them widened their eyes almost at the same time and shouted in unison. It's Happy and Carla and the others. Yes, it makes sense if you think about it this way. After all, they were chasing Happy and Carla in the first place. Mirajane stared at Raphael as if she suddenly understood. She was secretly wondering, what words should she say to make Natsu lose his mind and fall into the trap desperately? At this moment, a thought flashed through her mind. That was his friends. Natsu regards his partners as important as family members, and Happy happens to be the family member with whom he has spent the longest time and has the closest relationship. It can be said that he is a relative in the true sense. Raphael's expression became extremely heavy, and he slowly nodded to express his agreement with Mirajane's point of view. However, within a moment, his face was once again shrouded in doubt. But, why did you only capture Natsu and Wendy? Is it because you sensed the magic power in them? However, just relying on the magic power of the two of them should not be enough, right? At this time, Ed Elfman, who had been silent next to him, cautiously said, is it possible that the two of them have something in common, or have some special properties that would make the royal army do whatever it takes? Do you want to catch them too? Although his voice was not loud, it caught the attention of others. Everyone fell into deep thought and began to think about this possibility. So that's it, it's actually a dragon. Mirajane and Raphael thought of the answer almost at the same time and shouted out in unison. Dragon? The fairy tale people in Edelus looked at them with confusion, because in the world of Edelus, there is no such creature as dragon. Even if there is, they're just ordinary humans with the same name. Yes, Natsu and Wendy are both dragon slayers. The magic they master is created to destroy dragons. They can make their bodies attack like dragons, and even transform themselves into dragons. Mirajane explained the unique abilities of their world to the fairy tale people in Edelus in detail, but Raphael on the side looked solemn. It seems that I have to do it myself. I originally planned to let them get training through this battle, but the current situation is obvious. If I don't help, then Natsu and Wendy may be drained of all their magic power, he thought to himself. Raphael's cold eyes looked towards the direction of the capital, as if he wanted to penetrate the distant distance and see the enemy hidden in it. His eyes flashed with raging anger, as if warning those self-righteous guys. Advertisement. He turned to Mirajane and said, I'll leave this place to you. When Lucy wakes up, find her and find out what's going on. I'm going to let the arrogant people in this world know what a real fairy tale is. His voice was filled with an unwavering determination, as if announcing his mission. Wait a minute, Raphael, let's go too. Ed Lucy's crisp and pleasant voice came from behind Raphael, and Raphael turned around and looked at her. He saw that her eyes were looking at him firmly, and behind her, the fairy tale people of Edelus were looking at him with the same firm expression. Take us with you. We can't stand this life of being chased and hiding anymore. Ed Levy strode forward and expressed their request to Raphael in a firm tone. She knew very well that this might be the last chance, and she had to seize it. Yes, take us with you. We really can't stand this kind of life. We want to avenge the president. Avenge those comrades who died heroically. Drag that damned king down hard and let him taste our power. Everyone in Fairy Tale echoed excitedly. They no longer had any fear in their hearts. They just wanted to give it a try and seek justice for their past experiences. Anger and hatred filled everyone's heart, and they were eager to use actions to wash away the grievances and shame. Raphael slowly scanned everyone in Fairy Tale, and after a long silence, he slowly uttered a few words from his mouth. This may cost your life. Have you really decided to go? In fact, he didn't want to say these words, but he was worried that these people made such a decision just on impulse. Although he had the ability to ensure that they would not be harmed, doing so would also make him exhausted. Everyone in the fairy tale of Ed smiled at each other, and then shouted in unison. We are not afraid, we are going. Lucy of Ed walked forward slowly, and said with a firm look in her eyes, if we talk about death, I have died once before. We who are still alive now are all ghosts waiting for revenge. Raphael looked at Lucy of Ed and other members of Fairy Tale who were so determined, and a relieved smile appeared on his face. Very good. Then let's overthrow them together. Levy of Ed immediately screamed excitedly. Great, I will start the teleportation magic circle right now. I have long wanted to try whether I can teleport directly to the capital. Her voice was full of anticipation and excitement, as if she had seen the moment when she successfully teleported to the capital. As she spoke, she walked briskly towards the teleportation magic circle, and couldn't wait to start this exciting attempt. The other Fairy Tale of Ed were also infected by her enthusiasm and cheered. Mira Jane walked to Raphael, gently took his arm, and her face was filled with a proud smile. She said gently, "No matter which world they're in, the members of Fairy Tail are warriors who never give up and are not afraid of death." Raphael smiled and nodded in agreement. He knew deeply that the spirit of Fairy Tail is to never give up and move forward courageously. This spirit is not only reflected in battle, but also runs through all aspects of their lives. Yes, this is the real charm of Fairy Tail. Raphael responded with emotion. His eyes swept over the passionate companions around him, and a strong sense of pride surged in his heart. In this world full of challenges and unknowns, the members of Fairy Tail always maintain firm beliefs and fearless courage. They interpret the spirit of Fairy Tail with practical actions and continue to create their own legendary stories. Chapter 116 Edilus, 15. What are you talking about? Carla raised her head suddenly, her eyes widened, and the shocked expression on her face seemed to be frozen. Her body was shaking uncontrollably from shock, and her hands gripped the ground tightly, as if trying to find some support. In the end, she knelt down weakly on the ground and looked at Nadi with empty eyes, seemingly unable to accept the facts in front of her. Happy on the side was also shocked. He stared at Nadi with wide eyes and let out a low roar in his throat. He could not understand what Nadi said, nor could he accept this cruel reality. He shook his head desperately, trying to get it all out of his mind. Nadi looked at the two people who almost collapsed and shook his head slightly, with a helpless smile on his face. He sighed and said, "Alas, it seems that the effect of the long-distance coverage command is still not satisfactory. But it doesn't matter, the mission was finally completed successfully." Although his voice was calm, it revealed a coldness and ruthlessness. He didn't feel the slightest guilt or discomfort for the two suffering, but instead seemed very satisfied with his success. "You hid so well from the Dragon Slayers and successfully won their trust. Because of this, when they heard your name, they would not hesitate to jump into the trap. You did a great job," Nadi continued, a satisfied smile on his face. Nietzsche also cast approving glances at Happy and Carla, as if confirming the results of their work. However, there was no warmth or sympathy in their eyes. At this time, Happy's voice was filled with a hint of despair and hoarseness. He raised his head tremblingly, looked at Nadi and asked, "The magic of the dragon. Then what will happen to Natsu and the others?" His voice was full of pain and worry, as if he had foreseen the dire consequences. However, Nadi only frowned slightly and then said lightly, "I don't know. Let's leave the next thing to the humans below. All we need to do is obey the order and bring them to this world and to the royal capital. Although you failed to do the last step, overall, the mission has been accomplished." His tone was cold and heartless, as if he didn't care about the fate of Natsu and the others. In his eyes, these people were just tools to complete tasks and have no value or significance. Carla's despair deepened as she listened to Nadi's words. She found herself being used as a tool to complete her mission. She could not accept this fact, nor could she forgive her ignorance and stupidity. No, we decided to come to Edilus ourselves," Carla whispered, with a hint of trembling and unwillingness in her voice. She tried to find a trace of her own thoughts in it, trying to prove that her existence was not meaningless. However, Nadi just shook his head, with a mocking smile on his lips. "No, you just followed the order." Advertisement. His words were like an extremely sharp knife, piercing deeply into Carla's soft heart. She felt an unprecedented pain, as if the whole world collapsed at this moment, and all the colors and sounds disappeared instantly. At that moment, Carla finally understood that all her efforts and persistence had been in vain. She once thought that she was an independent individual with her own thoughts and emotions, but now she discovered that she was just a puppet controlled by others, and all her actions and emotions were based on other people's orders and arrangements. "No, this is impossible. I obviously like Wendy so much, I want to do my best to protect her." Carla covered her ears, unwilling to believe this cruel fact. Her eyes were filled with tears, and the crystal tears kept rolling down, wetting her cheeks. Carla's heart was filled with pain and doubts. She began to doubt her feelings, and even her feelings for Wendy became vague. She didn't know if she really liked Wendy or if she just had feelings for her out of order and arrangement. At this moment, Happy also felt unprecedented anger and grief. He clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and trembled all over, staring at Nadi and Nietzsche. Tears kept welling up in his eyes, but he tried not to let them fall. "Everything you said is wrong. We were just ordered, our feelings are real," Happy retorted loudly. Nadi and Nietzsche looked at them indifferently, with a mocking smile on their lips. "Huh, how naive. Do you think your feelings are real? That's just your illusion. All your actions and emotions are based on our orders and arrangements. In other words, you don't have your own at all. Thoughts and emotions." Hearing this, Happy couldn't bear it anymore. He angrily rushed to Nadi and Nietzsche, spreading his hands to protect Carla behind him. "Stop being so arrogant here. We are not your puppets. We are individuals with our own thoughts and emotions," Happy roared loudly. Carla looked at Happy in front of her, her heart full of emotion and admiration. She saw Happy's firm eyes and straight spine, as if at this moment, he became extremely majestic and strong. "Happy." Carla cried out in sobs. She covered her mouth, not wanting the tears to continue to flow. "We are the wizards of Fairy Tail. We have our own beliefs and pursuits. We will not be manipulated by anyone." Happy continued to roar loudly, his voice full of firmness and strength. Snap. With a crisp sound, Happy used all his strength to grab Carla's hand tightly, then turned around and ran out without hesitation, shouting at the same time, "Carla! Follow me. No matter what, I will save them out." Carla on the side had no reaction to what happened. She could only watch herself being pulled by Happy and running with him. Her eyes were full of astonishment and confusion, as if she couldn't believe what was happening in front of her. Happy didn't care about anything else at all. There was only one firm belief in his heart to rescue the trapped people. His face was full of anger, and he rushed forward without hesitation, repeating the same sentence over and over again. I will definitely save them. With a roar, Happy spread his small wings, took Carla into the air without hesitation, and flew straight into the distance. At this moment, Nadi and Nichia stared at Happy and Carla in amazement, and it took them a long time to come back to their senses. Anxiety and worry appeared on their faces, and they hurriedly shouted loudly. Advertisement, Fallen Angel. These are fallen angels. They have been corrupted by Ascalante. Guards, catch them for me, never let them escape. At the same time, Happy, who was flying rapidly downwards and wanted to save Natsu and Wendy, suddenly felt a strong killing intent from behind. He hurriedly looked back and found that a large number of soldiers were chasing them and trying to stop them. Damn it. Carla. Hold me tight. Happy was anxious, stretched out his hands and hugged Carla tightly in his arms, as if guarding a rare treasure, and then tried his best to cast the wing magic, and instantly disappeared in front of the soldiers. After flying for a long time, Happy finally found that the enemy behind him had disappeared. He looked down at Carla in his arms, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. We are safe. However, before Happy finished speaking, the wings behind him were like a deflated ball, and they dissipated directly. After a long flight in the burst just now, Happy's physical strength was finally overdrawn. He slowly closed his eyes and fell straight down from midair holding Carla. Happy. Carla screamed Happy's name in horror. She wanted to open her wings to hold Happy, but the emotions just now were like surging waves, making her still soft and unable to exert any strength. With Carla's exclamation, Happy and Carla fell into the straw pile in the blink of an eye. At the moment when he was about to touch the straw pile, Happy's eyes widened instantly, and he turned his body in the air with all his strength, using his body as a human cushion for Carla. Bang! With a loud bang, the wooden cart with the straw pile was instantly smashed into pieces like fragile porcelain by the force of the two people falling down. Happy. Carla quickly got off Happy's body and shouted to Happy frantically, Happy, answer me, are you okay, Happy? Seeing that Happy didn't move, Carla sat weakly aside, covering her mouth and silently shed tears. Oh, Carla, you are so noisy, I just want to have a good rest. At this moment, Happy's voice suddenly sounded like a heavenly sound. He covered his head and slowly climbed up, subconsciously complaining to Carla. Bang! Carla was instantly happy like a happy little deer, but when she heard Happy's complaints, her face instantly turned black, raised her hand and gave Happy a slap, then hugged Happy directly, and said with a crying voice. Happy, I'm so glad you're okay. Happy, still covering his head, was stunned for a moment, and a smile appeared on his face, but this smile became more and more perverted as time went on. What are you two doing in my field? Chapter 117 Edalus 16. You are the fallen angels that the guards are chasing. A roar, like thunder, made people's ears buzz. Looking closely, it turned out to be a middle-aged cat uncle holding a hoe, with a beard on his face arranged in a circle, staring at Happy and Carla fiercely. His eyes revealed a kind of majesty and anger, as if he wanted to eat Happy and Carla alive. He saw the hoe in his hand waving like a storm, with a sharp sound of wind, swinging it violently towards Happy and Carla. At the same time, he kept roaring, get out now. Although the hoe did not really touch Happy, the mighty momentum was enough to terrify Happy and Carla. They retreated again and again, their hearts filled with fear and anxiety. At this moment, the shouts of the guards came from afar. The queen just found them falling in this area, search them quickly. The sound was like thunder, and Happy and Carla's nerves immediately tensed up, turning around to run away. However, they were still a step slower. The uncle holding the hoe appeared in front of them like lightning, blocking their way. He glared and roared angrily. Get out of my field first, and then go to my house. His voice was like a bell, echoing in the air, deafening, and making people tremble. Love, I'll leave right away. Huh? Happy, who has always been kind-hearted, nodded in agreement, but when he heard the last sentence, he was stunned on the spot. Why are you still standing there? Come into my house. Seeing that the soldiers of the guards were coming, the round-bearded uncle hurriedly drove them back home. After Happy and Carla entered his house, the round-bearded uncle quickly closed the door and put his ear to it. After listening carefully to the noise outside for a while, he breathed a sigh of relief. He turned around, folded his hands in front of his chest, and sat on the stool with a serious face. At this time, a sumptuous dinner had already been placed on the table. Although it was not exquisite, every dish was Happy's favorite. At this time, an aunt came in with the last steaming and fragrant dish. There was a gentle smile on her face, like a flower blooming in spring. She carefully placed the plate on the table, then looked at Happy with loving eyes and said softly, hash plus hash equals, children, what you have experienced is so sad, but you are really brave, you are great. Happy stared at the food on the table with joy, his eyes flashing with gratitude. He raised his head and said to the aunt sincerely, Uncle, Aunt, thank you for letting us hide here. Happy's dusty and embarrassed little face now bloomed with the most innocent and lovely smile. This smile was like the warm spring sun breaking through the clouds, blooming with thousands of feet of light, instantly illuminating the hearts of the two. Tears welled up in the aunt's eyes. She turned around quickly and walked into the kitchen to get wine. The uncle's expression also became unnatural. He hurriedly slapped the table with his hands, the sound was as loud as thunder, and he shouted to Happy, don't eat quickly. Happy was so scared that he trembled all over, immediately picked up the bowl and chopsticks, and ate the meal voraciously. At this moment, Carla raised her head, with a hint of doubt and hesitation in her eyes, staring straight at the serious uncle. She struggled for a while, and finally mustered up the courage to ask softly, "Great, what does it mean?" The aunt calmed down a little in the kitchen, then walked out of the kitchen with the wine and gently placed it in front of the uncle. She smiled at Carla and explained in a soft tone. "Advertisement, my husband. Because he couldn't accept some of the decisions of Her Majesty the Queen, he was expelled from the kingdom a long time ago and came to this place. Don't mention the past again." The uncle kept slapping the table and loudly stopped the aunt from speaking, but the aunt just smiled and nodded, without being angry or dissatisfied. Then, the uncle turned to look at Happy, revealing a hint of severity in his eyes. Take a shower after eating. Happy, with food in his mouth, shouted indistinctly, "Love. Put on my clothes. Love. Rest well after eating. Love." In this way, a dinner ended in a noisy atmosphere. Happy and Carla also stayed at the uncle and aunt's house for one night. Strangely enough, although this night was a bit noisy, Happy felt that this was the most comfortable night he had slept, as if he had returned to his own home, relaxed and comfortable. The next morning, the sun shone on the corridor, and Happy and Carla sat there early, looking into the distance. Happy's eyes were full of confusion, as if lost in endless thoughts, while Carla still lowered her head, sadness surging like a tide. However, at this moment, Happy did not notice an interesting detail: he and Carla were wearing couple clothes. For some reason, the aunt's house had all kinds of clothes, all sizes were available, and the two of them could always find the one that fit perfectly. The auntie standing behind them quietly observed the two confused children with a warm smile on her face. She walked forward gently, knelt down, and asked softly, "What are you worried about? Tell Mom. Auntie, maybe I can help you find the answer." Carla was silent, seemingly immersed in her own world. Happy raised his little hands high and said seriously, "Our good friend was captured and taken to the capital. We must save him." His tone was firm, revealing his dedication to friendship. The aunt smiled slightly, nodded to show her understanding, and then asked curiously, "King Capital, are you going to save mankind?" Her question was like a key, opening up the inner conversation between Happy and Carla. Happy nodded, then lowered his head instantly as if he remembered something sad, and his voice became lower. "Auntie, you will definitely think this is strange. After all, in this city, humans are very low-level existences." But the aunt smiled and shook her head, stretched out her hand to gently touch Happy's head, and said softly, "No, kid, I think this is really great." Happy and Carla couldn't believe what they heard. They looked at the aunt in surprise, while the aunt continued to smile and stretched out her other hand to gently stroke Carla's head. Friends are a very great relationship. Whether they are human beings or transcendent beings, although their appearance and living habits may be different, the mutual love and care between them is the same. The aunt's eyes were full of love and understanding, as if she could see through Happy and Carla's inner worries and confusions. Mood. Carla kept repeating these two words in her mouth, as if she wanted to chew them up, and then lowered her head in disappointment again. "My heart has never belonged to me. It has always been manipulated by some kind of force. Even now, I am not sure whether my feelings for Wendy are true or false." "Carla, those words you just said are your true words. Like this kind of emotion comes from deep in your heart. Who can control it at will? You are yourself." Advertisement. Happy suddenly stood up excitedly and shouted to Carla loudly. Carla looked at Happy in shock. She had never seen him look so excited. At this moment, Happy's face showed an unprecedented seriousness and determination, and he stared directly at Carla, making her feel a little dazed. Time seemed to freeze at this moment, and only the two of them were left in the whole world. The aunt sat down next to Carla with a smile on her face. Her eyes were full of love and encouragement, and she stared at Carla with a smile. "Although you may feel a little confused at this moment, I firmly believe that you will eventually find your heart's desire. In fact, you already have it. It's just waiting for you to discover it yourself. Please firmly believe in the sincere and warm love in your heart. More importantly, there is such an extraordinary person beside you. The knight is with you, isn't he?" After hearing the aunt's last words, Happy's heart seemed to be hit by something, and a surge of joy surged into his heart. He couldn't help but look at Carla with joy. A shy blush appeared on his face, and his body twisted involuntarily. Carla also stared at the gentle and kind face of her aunt, and her originally downcast, bitter face suddenly blossomed into a smile as bright as the sun, like a blooming flower. "Auntie, you are really unique. Other transcendents think that they are angels, so they are superior to humans and disdainful of them." The aunt smiled and shook her head, looking forward, her thoughts drifting into memories. "Actually, I thought this way a long time ago, but Her Majesty the Queen took away my child for that so-called plan, and I could only watch helplessly from the side. From that moment on, I knew that I was not a god or an angel at all. Just an ordinary parent who can't even protect his own child. I didn't even get to take a look at what he looked like after he was born." The aunt's voice deepened. Carla and Happy looked at her worriedly, then she shook her head, raised her head and continued to look at them with a smile, her eyes lingering on Happy for a long time. "So we don't care about transcendence in humans. Humans at least have the ability to protect their children, but there is really nothing we can do. Okay. I told you not to remember the past anymore." The uncle's unique loud voice came from behind the three of them. He walked quickly to Happy and shouted loudly, "Don't always look sad. You are still young and alive, so you should feel happy. Like." The uncle crossed his hands and looked at Happy unhappily. If you are always so timid, even if you can achieve something, you won't be able to achieve it. Happy nodded firmly, no longer confused in his eyes, and said to Carla seriously. That's right. We can't continue to be afraid and uneasy. We must move forward bravely, rescue our partners. Carla also nodded firmly towards Happy at this time, thanked her uncle and aunt together with Happy, and then spread her wings with Happy and flew towards the royal capital. The flying method is exactly the same as yours. The aunt looked at their flying backs and said happily to the uncle, tears finally flowing out of her eyes. Ka, it's obvious. It's absolutely the same, the uncle shouted out equally loudly, with tears in his eyes. He has grown up and become a kind, brave and good boy who thinks about his friends. Ka. Love. Chapter 118 Edalus, 17. Happy and Carla were soaring in the vast sky of the royal capital, looking down at this prosperous and huge city, their hearts filled with confusion and helplessness. The royal capital is so large, with criss-crossing streets and row upon row of buildings. In which corner are the two dragon slayers they're looking for locked up? Carla suddenly stopped her wings, hovered in the air for a moment, then turned around and flew towards the palace. She already had an idea in her mind, and although she wasn't sure whether it would succeed, it was still much better than searching aimlessly. Follow me, Happy, I have a way, Carla shouted, with a hint of determination in her voice. Happy looked at her confused, but still flapped his wings and chased after her. He knew Carla always came up with some wonderful ideas, and maybe this time was no exception. They came to the corridor of the palace, where people were coming and going, including nobles and officials in gorgeous clothes. Happy and Carla tried to keep a low profile and avoid attracting unnecessary attention. Just then, they saw Ed Urza. She had just finished a meeting and was thinking deeply about something. Happy recognized her at a glance and was about to call her, but Carla covered his mouth. Stop talking. Don't expose our identities, Carla whispered in Happy's ear. Happy nodded with a shy blush on his face. Carla turned to look at Ed Urza, with a majestic expression on her face. She flew in front of Ed Urza and shouted loudly. That woman, raise your head. Ed Urza was awakened by the clear female voice. When she looked up, she saw two cats flying in the air staring at her. She was shocked and quickly knelt down to salute. See you, Lord Transcendent. When Happy saw Ed Urza's appearance, he had a more accurate understanding of the dominance and intimidation of the Transcendent. This was a sign of his accumulated prestige. Carla continued to maintain a majestic tone and said, Tell me, where are the two dragon slayers? Ed Urza raised her head and looked at Carla hesitantly. She knew that these two dragon slayers were important prisoners in the palace, but she also knew that the power of these transcendents was not something she could compete with. She struggled in her heart and finally chose to remain silent. Carla's eyes widened when she saw this, with a hint of anger in her tone. Human, don't be too presumptuous. Do you know who I am? Ed Urza stood up and looked at Carla doubtfully. She didn't know the origin of this transcendent who suddenly appeared, but her majesty and momentum prevented her from showing any signs of neglect. Advertisement. Carla took a deep breath, and then said loudly, I am the daughter of Queen Shakot, the princess of Exdalia, Carla. As soon as she finished speaking, the entire corridor fell into silence. Ed Urza was so shocked that she knelt down and kowtowed again, and said in panic, Yes, I'm very sorry. Carla looked at Ed Urza's reaction and couldn't help feeling a little proud. She knew that her identity held an important position in the capital, which was also the key to her ability to find the Dragon Slayer. She decided to continue using her identity to interrogate Ed Urza until she found the whereabouts of Natsu and the others. Happy was silently supporting her, knowing that Carla would be able to find a way. So, where are those two Dragon Slayers? With her noble posture, Carla looked down at Ed Urza who was kneeling on the ground. Her voice was full of the majesty and contempt of a king. Her sharp eyes were fixed on Ed Urza, as if she wanted to see through the secrets of her heart. Ed Urza knelt on the ground, her body trembling slightly. She hesitated, clasping her hands as if weighing the consequences of telling the truth. Finally, she plucked up the courage, raised her head, and said with a slightly trembling voice, In the dungeon of Sita, where they are imprisoned. Carla frowned when she heard this, and a trace of anger flashed in her eyes. She folded her arms and stared at Ed Urza in the sky, her voice cold and firm. Then, release them immediately. Her order was like a cold sword, pointing straight into Ed Urza's heart. Ed Urza lowered her head, was silent for a while, and then spoke slowly. Your Highness, I'm sorry, I don't have the right to release them. This is the king's order, and I can't disobey it. Her voice was full of helplessness and guilt. Carla's eyes widened in anger. She looked at Ed Urza and roared loudly. Stop talking nonsense. I am the princess, and I have the right to order you, release them quickly. Her voice echoed in the air, full of majestic and unquestionable. At this moment, there was the sound of rapid footsteps, and Ponsalili led a group of soldiers and ran over. They ran and roared loudly. Urza, are you crazy? Those two transcendents are the fallen sky. They have been expelled from Exdalia. How dare you help them? Carla and Happy were shocked when they heard this. They quickly turned around and flew away, their hearts filled with uneasiness and worry. Ed Urza punched the floor angrily and roared. You two bastards! Wait for me. Her voice was full of anger and unwillingness. Carla, aren't you a princess? What are you afraid of? Happy's voice was full of doubts and confusion. He flew upward crazily and turned to look at Carla beside him. His eyes flashed with worry and doubt about Carla, as if he didn't understand why she seemed so nervous and scared. Carla took a deep breath and tried to calm down her emotions. She looked at Happy and said with a serious face, It's useless, Happy. In this world, once you are labeled as a fallen heaven, it means you have been completely betrayed. No matter what your status is, I can't change this cruel fact. Even if I am a princess, I can't change this rule at will. Advertisement Happy had a look of astonishment on his face after hearing Carla's words. He could not understand the cruelty and ruthlessness of this world, nor could he imagine that Carla, as a princess, would have to face such a dilemma. He held Carla's hand tightly, wanting to give her some comfort and support. At this moment, a large sound of flapping wings suddenly came from the sky. Happy and Carla quickly looked up and saw a group of Transcendent Corps wearing black armor approaching them quickly. Their eyes were cold and firm, and the weapons in their hands shone with cold light. It was obvious that they were coming with bad intentions. I saw them. Chase them. Catch them. Nietzsche of the guards saw Happy and Carla flying and quickly ordered the soldiers to speed up the pursuit. His voice was full of coldness and cruelty, as if he wanted to put Happy and Carla to death. Carla's face instantly turned pale. She pulled Happy around in the air and flew quickly toward the building below. She knew that this time things were beyond her control, and she had to find a way to deal with this sudden crisis as soon as possible. At this moment, deep in the palace, King Faust was sitting on a gorgeous throne, with a sly smile on his lips. With a wave of his hand, a series of orders came down. Start the ETD plan. Following his order, the organs in the palace began to activate, and a conspiracy against the Transcendents was quietly unfolding. Carla and Happy didn't know this. They were running away from their pursuers. Carla's heart was full of tension and uneasiness, and she knew that things had become very difficult this time. She must find a way to deal with this crisis as soon as possible, otherwise she and Happy will face great danger. At this moment, a large number of soldiers appeared on the castle. They slowly raised the flag of the royal capital, one after another. As the flag was raised, 3 giant cannons appeared on the city wall, splitting into 3 directions and facing Happy and Carla. Codename ETD. Activate. Following the commander's order, 3 giant cannons lit up instantly. They were actually 3 huge spotlights, but the light they emitted seemed to have a different kind of power. Happy and Carla felt a huge sense of oppression. Seeing that the light was about to hit them, they hugged each other and trembled. But to their surprise, the real target of those 3 rays of light was actually the Beander Legion chasing them. The light shone on them, and the Beander soldiers roared. Nietzsche looked at the palace in disbelief, and roared loudly. Damn it. Human beings. Her Majesty the Queen will not let you go. Before he finished speaking, the Beander Legion instantly turned into a huge cat-shaped magic crystal. Chapter 119 Edalus, 18. No. No problem? If you attack them, will they die faster? As the cat-shaped crystals transformed by the Beander Legion fell one after another, the soldiers all whispered to each other, and everyone's face showed deep fear. After all, they had long been feared by the Transcendent Majesty. However, at this moment, an old but loud voice came from above everyone's heads. There are no so-called gods in this world. We humans are the only ones struggling with limited magic power, while those idle Transcendents can possess endless magic power. Why? The soldiers looked up in confusion and found that the person speaking was actually their king, Faust. The soldiers stared blankly at their king. Although they were full of fear of the Transcendent in their hearts, for some reason, they resonated strongly with the king's words at this moment. Faust's eyes swept across every soldier, and there was a kind of determination in his eyes. He knew very well that now was the time to break tradition and authority, and he needed to do it in one go. We can no longer be oppressed by the Transcendent. Faust raised his arms and shouted passionately, we have the right to pursue freedom and equality. We have had enough of being ruled. Today, we no longer desire to be ruled. The era of being ruled should become history. King Faust stood on a high place, gazing deeply and meaningfully at the soldiers in front of him. His voice was passionate and surging, as if it could penetrate everyone's heart. My dear soldiers, do you know why we are fighting? The soldiers began to stir, exchanging glances with hope in their eyes. The fear that originally enveloped my heart was gradually replaced by courage. Faust continued. We are not fighting for the illusory glory, nor for the unreachable wealth. We are fighting for freedom, to get rid of the bondage, to pull the high and self-righteous gods from their thrones. His tone became more and more passionate, and finally he almost shouted. Let us rise up and resist. Launch the operation code named ETD, the Angel Total Destruction Operation Plan. Faust's expression instantly became ferocious and twisted, and he roared hysterically, as if he wanted to vent all the anger and unwillingness in his heart. The soldiers below were ignited by his words. They raised their fists and shouted in unison. Resist! 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 Amid the frantic shouting, Hugh seemed extraordinarily calm. He stood quietly among the crowd, with his arms crossed and imperceptible smile hanging on his lips. Hughes shook his head slightly and murmured softly, things are going to be serious now. There was a kind of anticipation and excitement in his eyes, as if he had already foreseen the coming of this war. His expression was relaxed, as if he was confident about what was going to happen next. Judging from his appearance, he seemed to have been looking forward to this plan for a long time and was fully prepared. The matter has come to this, there is no other way, just resist with all your strength. Sugarboy spread his hands and smiled helplessly and shook his head, but his tone was firm. Advertisement It can be heard from his words that he also seems to be in favor of resisting and using the Transcendent. Perhaps deep down in his heart, he is also eager to change the status quo through his own efforts, and never flinches even in the face of difficulties and challenges. Among them, only one person's face became extremely ugly, and that was Ponsalili. Although he is tall and strong, he is still a member of the Transcendent family after all. Ponsalili raised his head and stared at the figure of King Faust, murmuring to himself, "No wonder. Is the real purpose of strengthening military supplies actually like this?" He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists tightly, as if he wanted to crush something. At the same time, at the other end of the dungeon, Happy and Carla had quietly entered the interior and slowly walked down the stairs. Suddenly, a claw-like long-handled claw pierced Happy and Carla like lightning at an astonishing speed. Ed Urza then appeared in front of them. Her face was as cold as ice, and her eyes revealed incomparable indifference, staring at the two of them. "That's it. Don't even think about taking another step forward." Ed Urza's voice was bone-chilling, as if it could freeze people. Before they finished speaking, the weapon inserted in front of them burst out with brilliant and dazzling light. Happy and Carla had no time to react and were instantly knocked away by this powerful explosive force. Happy and Carla were seriously injured in an instant. They raised their heads weakly and stared at the woman in front of them. "Hey, you were hit by my magic and still survived. You are worthy of being a transcendent." Ed Urza showed a sarcastic smile and stared at them. Ah! Suddenly, a soft and feeble female voice came from behind Urza. The voice was full of endless pain. "Wendy. It's Wendy. What did you do to her?" Carla listened to the voice with a face full of astonishment. Her body trembled involuntarily, her eyes fixed on Ed Urza with disbelief, and then she roared at Ed Urza angrily. A disdainful sneer appeared at the corner of Urza's mouth, and his sarcastic eyes were like looking at two lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Then he slowly walked towards them step by step, and said at the same time, "We just extracted the magic power needed for the code ETD. Now it's time for you to embark on the road to death." Suddenly, Happy got the strength from nowhere, forced himself to hold on to his seriously injured body, opened his hands and stood in front of Carla, and shouted in a weak but firm voice, "I won't let you hurt Carla." Happy gritted his teeth tightly and looked ferocious. He was like an enraged beast, standing in front of Carla full of hostility and aggression, blocking Ed Urza's path. His eyes burned with rage, as if he wanted to burn the damn enemy in front of him to ashes. His body was trembling slightly due to excessive emotion, but the determination in his eyes did not waver at all. "Happy." Carla was moved beyond words, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked at Happy's firm back, and something in a corner of her heart seemed to have been hit hard, and a warm feeling surged into her heart like a tide. However, Ed Urza turned a blind eye to all this. Her cold gaze still stayed on Happy, and there was even a contemptuous smile on her lips. She gently raised the weapon in her hand, preparing to attack Happy. "Advertisement, haha, since you want to protect her so much, let's start with you first," Ed Urza said mockingly, with a trace of cruelty flashing in his eyes. Before he finished speaking, the weapon in Ed Urza's hand hit Happy's head. Seeing that the fatal blow was about to fall on Happy, everyone's hearts were in their throats. "Ah!" snapped. At this critical moment, an unusual sound suddenly came from behind Urza. The sound sounded extremely weird, like someone's miserable scream, but also like the strange sound made by something breaking. When Happy and Carla heard the strange sounds, their faces immediately showed expressions of joy. They all cast their eyes behind Ed Urza in unison, their eyes full of expectation and curiosity. Ed Urza was also frightened by this sudden change. She trembled all over and felt a strong uneasiness in her heart. She turned around quickly, trying to figure out what was going on. Who will be there, enemy or friend? Countless questions were lingering in her mind. When she saw the scene in front of her clearly, her eyes widened with disbelief on her face. She saw a woman who looked exactly like her holding a sharp sword, pointing straight at her. Beside the mysterious woman, there were two men standing respectively. One of the men, Ed Urza recognized immediately. This man was one of the two dragon slayers who had just been captured. And in another man's arms, he was holding another dragon slayer tightly. At this moment, the atmosphere of the entire scene became extremely tense, as if a thrilling confrontation was about to break out. "Natsu, Raphael, and the Urza of our world." Happy and Carla covered their mouths in disbelief, tears flowing down uncontrollably, calling out their familiar names one by one. "Happy, thank you for your hard work." Natsu waved to Happy with a smile on his face. But then he clenched his fists angrily, stared at Ed Urza, and shouted angrily, "Damn you guys! How dare you attack Fairy Tail?" Urza held the extremely sharp sword tightly in her hand. Her eyes were firm and full of anger, as if she wanted to burn the Ed Urza in front of her to ashes. Her voice was as loud as thunder, with endless majesty and sense of justice, and she shouted angrily at Ed Urza. "Anyone who dares to harm guildmates will be punished in the harshest way. Damn it, you guys have become our sworn enemies." At the same time, Raphael hugged Wendy tightly, who had just suffered the pain of extracting magic power. His face was as solemn as an iceberg, and his originally clear eyes now became deep and dark, like an endless abyss. His face was filled with a dark haze like an ink fountain, which made people feel fearful. An invisible sense of oppression instantly spread over the entire royal capital, as if the entire world was enveloped by this force. As this powerful aura spread, except for those with the fairy tale crest, everyone else could not withstand the pressure and fell down one after another. Their bodies trembled, as if they were crushed by a huge mountain and could no longer stand up. The whole scene fell into chaos. People looked at the sky in horror, feeling the suffocating power. It's Fairy Tail's enemy. Chapter 120 Edalus 19. In the square of the royal capital, the unique treehouse stands tall and green, like a vibrant green tower, which is particularly eye-catching in the surrounding silence. The sun shines through the gaps in the leaves, casting mottled light and shadow, adding a bit of mystery and solemnity to the treehouse. Above the treehouse, a bright flag fluttered gently in the breeze. On that flag, the Edalus fairy tale logo is clearly visible, as if silently announcing that this place belongs to a group full of energy and courage. This logo is not just a simple symbol, but a symbol of their shared faith and glory. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. The door of the treehouse was suddenly pushed open, and a powerful momentum rushed towards him. Ed Lucy led Ed Fairy Tale's people and rushed out like tigers descending the mountain. Their faces were full of perseverance and fighting spirit, as if they were ready to fight the enemy to the death. However, when they stepped out of the door, what they saw shocked them. The soldiers of the royal capital who were supposed to be in a tight formation were all lying on the ground at this moment, motionless, as if they had lost the breath of life in an instant. The entire square was completely silent, with only the occasional sound of wind and flags waving. Beside them, a huge cat-shaped magic crystal lay quietly, its huge body occupying almost half of the square. It exudes a mysterious and powerful aura that makes people feel awe and curiosity. Everyone in Ed Fairy Tale looked at each other with doubts and surprise in their hearts. They never expected to see such a scene, it was completely beyond their expectations. Just then, Mira Jane came out with a smile. She looked at the confused people and explained, "No, they did not surrender because of you. In fact, they were frightened by Raphael's momentum and fell to the ground one after another. This also shows that Raphael is very angry at this moment." Hearing this, everyone in Ed Fairy Tale suddenly looked at Mira Jane in shock. Only then did they realize that all of this was caused by Raphael's power. The seemingly ordinary bald man actually possessed such terrifying strength, which made them full of awe and curiosity towards Raphael. They began to re-examine this seemingly ordinary companion, and their hearts were filled with respect and admiration. They know that with Raphael here, they can overcome any difficulties and challenges. Then why are we safe and sound? Someone asked in confusion. They wanted to know why they could stand here unscathed even in the face of Raphael's aura. Mira Jane smiled and pointed to the fairy tale logo on the wooden house and said, "Because we are fairy tale wizards and his companions, how can we hurt our companions?" Her words were full of pride and trust, as if the logo was their most solid backing. Ed Fairy Tale and everyone present immediately puffed up their chests, feeling proud that they were members of Fairy Tale. They understand that this symbol not only represents their identity and honor, but also represents a kind of strength and protection. At the same time, they were filled with pride deep in their hearts because Fairy Tale had such a brave and fearless general. They know that as long as Raphael is on the front line, they can move forward bravely and face any challenge without fear. At this moment, a familiar voice came from the alley not far away. Gajeel and Edalus Gajeel walked out of the alley, his face full of surprise and curiosity. "Mira Jane, what happened here? Wow, what a big cat." Advertisement Gajeel stared at the huge cat-shaped magic crystal in front of him and couldn't help but marvel. He seemed completely attracted to the giant cat, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Ah, it's you Gajeel. Where have you been? That person next to you must be you in this world." Mira Jane responded to Gajeel with a smile, while looking at the otherworld peer next to him with curiosity. Gajeel nodded, looking at the huge cat with curiosity. He seemed to be attracted by the charm of this cat, completely forgetting everything around him. "How deep is your obsession with cats?" Lucy, who recovered and came out from the side, looked at Gajeel like this and complained to him with narrowed eyes. At this moment, someone suddenly pointed at the soldiers lying on the ground and said, "Look, there are Captains Hughes and Shugboy of the demonic war force lying there. There is also Ponsalili of the Kingdom Guard." Everyone's eyes were instantly attracted, and they saw the enemies who had been chasing them lying on the ground unable to move. This surprised and angered them. "Kill them! Revenge for the lost comrades!" Someone shouted angrily. Their hearts are filled with hatred and anger against their enemies, and they want to avenge their dead companions. However, at this moment, Ed Lucy stopped them. She looked at the enemy in front of her, a complex emotion flashing in her eyes. She knew that although these enemies were damnable, they could not be killed at will. "Partners, if we just kill them like this, wouldn't it be an advantage for them? Let's go up and deal with them first." Before Lucy could finish her words, she was interrupted by Gajeel's exclamation. "Ah, it's a cat. It's such a strong cat." Gajeel suddenly rushed towards Ponsalili and hugged him with excitement on his face. His actions surprised and confused everyone, wondering what he wanted to do. I saw Gajeel running to Ponsalili's side like an unbridled husky and looking back and forth at Ponsalili. This strong figure and resolute expression are so tough. After Ponsalili was hugged by Gajeel, he looked at him in horror. He tried to struggle, but was unable to move due to the pressure of Raphael's momentum. Ponsalili turned his eyes with difficulty and glanced at Gajeel. Gajeel's passionate and excited eyes made him feel a little itchy on his butt. He struggled in panic to escape, but was unable to move due to the pressure of Raphael's momentum. He could only watch with fear as Gajeel stretched out his hands towards him and carried him away from the crowd. Advertisement. Why do I feel like that muscular cat is scared? Mirajan tilted her head and looked at Gajeel, who was carrying Punzalili away, and turned to ask Lucy uncertainly. Lucy looked at Gajeel's perverted expression and complained with twitching eyes, "You're right. Gajeel, it's too exaggerated, it's just a cat." Seeing Gajeel's saucy operation, Ed Fairy Tale's people were petrified for a while, and then Ed Lucy gave up mobilizing directly. With a wave of her hand, she directed everyone to come forward and vent all the grievances they had suffered for so long. "Come on, beat them into pig heads." Everyone roared angrily, and all went up and started punching and kicking the enemies. With experience, they directly took off all the magic props in the enemy's hands and threw them in front of their guild door. Then he thoughtfully took off all their armor, and then began to beat them crazily. Everyone lying on the ground was punched and kicked at least twice by Ed Fairy Tail. The two captains of the demonic war troops were their key targets, and their whole bodies were severely beaten and swollen. After a fierce battle, Ed's people from Fairy Tail finally subdued and tied all the kingdom's troops together. Seeing those enemies who were once arrogant and domineering but now with bruises, the anger and grief in their hearts gradually turned into a deep sense of relief. They thought of those comrades who had died heroically in the battle with the enemy, those comrades who had fought side by side with them and gone through hardships together. At this moment, their tears couldn't help but burst out of their eyes. They were tears of joy and tears of successful revenge. Mirajan and Lucy stood aside, watching everyone cry, and they also felt a throbbing in their hearts. They knew that this victory was hard won and was earned with sweat and blood. Their lips pursed hard, as if they wanted to keep all the joy and excitement in their hearts. Their shadows and grievances were finally vented today, and they are proud of their partners. We win. Lucy from Edalis shouted loudly, holding the flag high. Her voice was full of power and confidence, as if she wanted to convey this victory to everyone. Then, everyone in Ed's Fairy Tail bowed to Mirajan and Lucy to thank them. They know that without the help and support of Mirajan, Lucy and others, they would not be able to achieve this victory. Their guild may also be long gone. The gratitude was beyond words and they said loudly, "Thank you." When Mirajan and Lucy heard this, they jumped up in panic, waved their hands and said, "Don't be like this, we are all partners. No matter which world we are in, we are all Fairy Tail, we are all partners." Their words made everyone present. Everyone felt a warmth rush into their hearts. Ed and everyone in Fairy Tail looked at each other, then laughed heartily. They knew that this victory was not only revenge against their enemies, but also a testimony to the deep friendship between them. They hugged each other and slapped each other on the shoulders, celebrating this hard-won victory. "President, Laxus, and everyone, we have avenged you," one of them shouted excitedly. This sentence seemed to touch the heartstrings of everyone, and they all echoed, "Yes. We have avenged our partners. We will continue to work hard to protect our guild and partners." At this moment, their hearts were full of confidence and courage. They know that as long as they unite and work together, nothing can stop them from moving forward. We are the Wizards of Fairy Tail. Chapter 121 Edalis 20. As the cries of Ed Fairy Tail and others gradually gathered into a sea of grief, Raphael keenly sensed. The soldiers from the outside world were all defeated by Edalis Fairy Tail members like fallen leaves swept by the strong wind. The air is filled with smoke and the joy of victory, but it is also mixed with the endless sadness of everyone in Ed Fairy Tail. Raphael stood there, staring at Ed Urza in front of him with cold eyes. He slowly restrained his suffocating aura and pressure, as if a volcano about to erupt suddenly calmed down, preparing to kill this enemy that he hated so much in one fell swoop. However, at this moment, Urza suddenly stretched out a hand and stopped his actions. She stared at Raphael quietly, her bright eyes shining with determination and composure. Although her voice was soft, it revealed unquestionable determination. "Raphael, please leave the next matter to me." Raphael was slightly startled, he didn't expect Urza to step forward at this time. He looked at her deeply, as if he wanted to see through her inner thoughts. After a moment, he nodded and said softly, "Okay, Urza, I'll leave it to you." After saying that, he gently picked up Wendy, took Happy, Carla and Natsu with him, and turned away without hesitation, leaving only Ed Urza lying on the ground. Urza stood quietly, looking indifferently at the man in front of her who looked just like her but hurt her partner. At this moment, the entire battlefield seemed to fall into silence. Only Urza and Ed Urza became the only focus in this land. After Raphael and the others were gone, Urza jumped up from the ground in an instant. Her originally calm eyes now became cold and sharp, as if they could penetrate all hypocrisy and lies. She stared at Urza in front of her, her eyes mixed with a hint of surprise, a hint of anger, and a hint of complex emotions that were difficult to detect. After all, this situation is unprecedented for anyone. How could one not be surprised when a person who looked exactly like him, who existed as real as his reflection in a mirror, appeared in front of him without any warning? However, what makes Ed Urza feel even more humiliated is that this Urza from another world actually joined the guild she has always regarded as her enemy, Fairy Tail. When he thought of this, Ed Urza's anger was like a burning flame, spreading from the bottom of his heart to his whole body. She clenched her fists and dug her nails deeply into her flesh, as if this was the only way to alleviate the anger and humiliation in her heart. "You guy, you really look the same as me." Urza gritted his teeth and said, his voice full of anger and unwillingness, "But why did you join that damn Fairy Tail guild?" She couldn't understand or accept this fact. In her heart, Fairy Tail is her eternal enemy, the opponent she must defeat. And now, a person who looks exactly like herself has become a member of that guild. How can she tolerate this? Urza, her eyes seemed to be able to penetrate all illusions, and the long sword with cold light in her hand was pointed directly at Ed Urza. Her voice was cold and firm. "I am the one who finds it strange that you actually hunt Fairy Tail." Her words revealed deep confusion and determination. In her heart, no matter how similar the other party is in appearance, as long as it poses a threat to Fairy Tail and its companions, it must be an enemy. Advertisement. Ed Urza was angered by this accusation. The humiliation of being deceived and fallen to the ground was already boiling in her heart, but she was even more furious now. Her eyes widened, and the spear in her hand instantly turned into a silver lightning bolt, like a meteor streaking across the night sky, stabbing Urza quickly and violently. Urza was not afraid at all, Her expression was firm and her eyes shone with calmness. She gently waved the long sword in her hand and firmly blocked the swift attack. Urza's anger did not subside, but intensified. She gripped the spear tightly, concentrating all her strength on the tip of the spear, and launched an even more frenzied attack on Urza. For a moment, I saw the shadow of the gun flickering, like streaks of silver light dancing in the air, and every blow carried the force of thunder. However, Urza is like a towering mountain. No matter how fierce Urza's attack is, she can catch it steadily. The long sword flew in her hand, and each swing accurately blocked Urza's attack, and at the same time, it made crisp metal collision sounds from time to time. The duel between the two became more and more intense, and the surrounding air seemed to become tense due to their battle. The sounds of spears and swords colliding one after another, accompanied by the fierce breathing and footsteps of the two men, seemed to be playing a fierce war song. The movements of the two became faster and faster, and the trajectory of the weapon swings almost turned into afterimages, which was dazzling and could only barely capture their figures. As time went by, Urza's offensive gradually became insufficient. She found that no matter how hard she tried, she could not break through Urza's defense. Urza, on the other hand, becomes more courageous as she fights. Her sword seems to have become one with her, and every swing is full of power and skill. Finally, during a fierce confrontation, a small crack appeared on Urza's face. Blood oozed from the wound, staining her cheeks red. It turned out that in the previous battle, Urza's sword had quietly scratched her skin. Urza stretched out her fingers and gently touched the wound, and the anger in her eyes gradually calmed down. She took a deep look at Urza and knew in her heart that she was indeed inferior. This opponent who looks exactly like himself not only has similar appearance and strength to himself, but also has firmer faith and perseverance than himself. She took a deep breath, suppressed her anger, and said in a strange tone, I didn't expect that the person who hindered me the most was myself. Tell me your name. I am the captain of the second magic war force of the kingdom of Edalis, Urza. Twoka. Urza held the sword in both hands, looked at her seriously, and said firmly. I am Urza Scarlet, the mage of fairy tale. No matter what kind of enemy I face, I will persevere to the end and protect everything I hold dear. The two people's eyes met in the air, as if at this moment, they had become real opponents and the people who knew each other best. Ha, let me see what you are capable of, a slant. Sonic gun. Urza roared angrily, and the spear in his hand flashed with dazzling lightning, instantly transforming into a completely different weapon as if he had been reborn. Immediately afterwards, she rushed over like a violent storm, and she was close at hand in the blink of an eye. So fast. Urza's pupils shrank suddenly, and she felt an unprecedented sense of tension in her heart. She hurriedly raised the sword in her hand and tried her best to resist Urza's attack. However, Urza's attacks were as ferocious as a violent storm, and the continuous offensive gave Urza almost no chance to breathe. Every attack was hard for her to withstand, and the wounds on her body became more and more numerous. Urza gritted her teeth and tried her best to support Urza's attack. She knew clearly that she could never give up easily and must find her opponent's flaws as soon as possible. Advertisement. At this critical moment, she finally found a chance and put on the flying armor in an instant. The flying armor emits a mysterious light, as if it has become one with Urza. She felt a powerful force surge into her body, and her speed instantly increased greatly, making her as light and agile as a flying bird. Finally, she succeeded in keeping up with Urza's stormy attack rhythm. Urza skillfully used the power of the flying armor to easily withstand Urza's fierce attack. Not only that, she was actually able to fight back, which made Urza look a little surprised. Is it armor? Once you change the armor. However, Urza did not flinch. Her pace remained firm and she continued to launch violent attacks on Urza. The fierce battle between the two became more and more intense, and every confrontation was like lightning intersecting, dazzling. The attacks and counterattacks from both sides continued like flowing water, and it was almost impossible to catch their movements. However, Urza was obviously not satisfied with this. She suddenly jumped back and distanced herself from Urza. Immediately afterwards, the spear in her hand changed shape again, and the tip of the spear was like a giant blade. Vacuum gun. Urza roared angrily, and a dazzling energy cannon spurted out from the tip of the gun, rushing towards Urza at an alarming speed. Urza rolled awkwardly in the air, trying her best to stabilize her body. Changing clothes. No, the form of the weapon has changed. She widened her eyes and looked at Urza in shock. Only then did she realize that the opponent's strength was far from what she had imagined before. Urza's weapons can change forms at will, showing infinite power. Urza didn't give Urza a chance to breathe. She jumped up, raised her spear high and struck at Urza. This time, the shape of the spear changed again, becoming larger and heavier. Explosive spear. Urza shouted. When the spear fell, the fire element emerged from the tip of the spear and exploded the moment it touched Urza. Urza felt a powerful impact, but she did not flinch, but gritted her teeth and persisted. At the moment of the explosion, Urza quickly changed into the Flame Emperor's armor and successfully withstood Urza's attack. The two fell into a fierce battle again, with spears and swords constantly clashing and sparking. The entire dungeon became tattered in this battle, as if it had experienced a disaster. As the battle continues, the strength of the two men continues to rise. However, at this moment, a huge stone fell from above, temporarily separating them. Both of them were breathing heavily, looking at each other with determination shining in their eyes. They all know that this battle is not over yet, and the real winner has not yet been announced. Chapter 122 Edilus 21. Does your magic change the armor and sword? I didn't expect that our attack methods are similar. Ed Urza gasped and looked at Urza with a hint of surprise in his eyes. After the fierce confrontation just now, she had a rough understanding of the magical abilities used by Urza. Currently it seems that you can only change the shape of the weapon, but the principle seems to be exactly the same as Might Knight. Urza was also breathing rapidly and stared at Ed Urza with a serious expression, feeling a surge of admiration in her heart. She realized that Edilus had reached the pinnacle in the development of magic props. Ed Urza took a deep breath, trying to calm her rapid breathing. She began to re-examine the powerful opponent in front of her. The opponent was not only superior in strength, but also had unique insights into the use of magic. This similar but different feeling made Ed Urza both excited and nervous. Urza, on the other hand, stood quietly, adjusting her breathing rhythm. She knew that this battle had just begun, and there would be more challenges waiting for them. Although the two attack methods are similar, if they want to defeat each other, they must use their full strength. In this suffocatingly tense atmosphere, time seemed to have frozen. Ed Urza and Urza faced each other, neither one dared to take action easily, for fear of exposing flaws and giving the other an opportunity. Changing the form of a weapon can give powerful power to a user without any magic power. For a strong person like Ed Urza who has been training unremittingly for many years, this is undoubtedly the icing on the cake. HMPH. It's time to make a break, Scarlet. Ed Urza stood tall and straight, with blazing eyes, staring closely at the Urza in front of him. The spear in her hand began to shine brightly, as if it contained endless power. The shape of the spear began to change, from an ordinary weapon to gradually becoming more powerful and mysterious, which seemed to indicate that the upcoming battle would be extremely fierce. We should have come to an end long ago. Urza's voice was filled with anger and determination, and a bright light shone around her body. She knew that although the opponent in front of her was her alter ego, she had done something unforgivable to Fairy Tail. How dare you attack my friends? I will never let you escape easily today. As the two men finished speaking, the battle broke out again. Urza quickly put on the powerful Tianlin armor. Her armor shone with a dazzling light and seemed to be able to withstand all attacks. The spear in Ed Urza's hand has transformed into a more powerful form, and the tip of the spear is shining with a sharp light, as if it can penetrate all defenses. The attack speed of the two people is getting faster and faster, and every confrontation is accompanied by huge energy fluctuations. The surrounding air seemed to be distorted by this force, and the space seemed to become distorted. Both men tried their best, determined to determine the winner in this battle. This battle, only one Urza can survive. Ed Urza roared, swinging her spear even more fiercely, each attack filled with powerful power. And Urza was not to be outdone. She waved the sword in her hand and started a fierce confrontation with Ed Urza. After a fierce exchange, the two took a few steps back at the same time. Ed Urza took a deep breath, and then waved the spear in his hand again. Advertisement. This time, she used a more powerful move, Gravity Gun. A huge black ball appeared at the tip of the spear, and the space around the black ball seemed to be distorted. The black ball expanded rapidly, absorbing surrounding stones and debris, forming a huge rock ball. Ed Urza roared and slammed the giant rock ball towards Urza. Faced with this sudden attack, Urza did not panic. She quickly adjusted her posture, then waved the sword in her hand and used her unique move, Tianlin 3 Swords. I saw countless flying swords flying out from Urza's side, instantly forming a huge triangular sword formation. The sword array emitted a dazzling light, firmly blocking the giant rock ball from outside. With Urza's shout, the sword formation instantly burst out with a powerful energy, splitting the giant rock ball into 3 equal parts. The entire dungeon became a mess during the fierce battle between the two, but the two seemed not to notice and continued to attack each other crazily. Urza, who had been unable to attack for a long time, gradually found Urza's attacking rhythm in the continuous battles. She cleverly used the power of Urza's attack to take a few steps back lightly, buying herself precious time to adjust. Her hands were firmly placed on the spear, and a mysterious power began to gather in her body. Suddenly, a dazzling light flashed from her spear, illuminating the air around her. Ed Urza took a deep breath, and then rushed towards Urza again. Her movements were even faster than before, as if she was blessed by that mysterious power. When she approached Urza, she waved her hands and the spear in her hand split into 2, becoming 2 separate weapons. These 2 spears inspired the power of ice and fire respectively, and swept towards Urza like 2 giant dragons. Ice Flame Spear. Ed Urza shouted loudly, his voice full of confidence and determination. Her musket was wrapped in blazing fire and swept directly towards Urza. Seeing this, Urza quickly jumped back and skillfully dodged the blow. However, Ed Urza's ice spear followed closely behind, spinning towards Urza again. Urza had to retreat continuously and jump into the air to avoid this continuous attack. In the air, Urza quickly adjusted her posture to prepare for the next attack. As soon as she landed, she instantly changed into a brand new set of armor, which shone with dazzling light and looked even more powerful and domineering. She held 2 long swords, brought them together, and then fired a powerful energy cannon attack at Ed Urza. Star Light Particle Sword. Urza shouted loudly, and as she attacked, a dazzling light shot out from her sword, heading straight for Ed Urza. Advertisement. Although Ed Urza reacted quickly, he still couldn't dodge and was instantly bombarded by this huge light energy. Her figure disappeared in the attack of the energy cannon, as if she was completely swallowed by this power. However, Just when Urza thought victory was in sight, Urza's voice suddenly came from the energy cannon's attack, sealed spear. Along with this roar, a powerful energy surged out from the inside of the energy cannon, and Urza's attack was cut open by this force. Urza looked at Urza, who rushed out of the energy cannon with a surprised look on her face. Her heart was filled with doubts and uneasiness. Urza seized this rare opportunity and quickly transformed the spear in his hand into a sonic gun. She launched an attack at an astonishing speed towards Urza, who had not yet reacted. For a moment, Urza fell into Urza's fierce offensive. She suffered no less than 10 attacks, and each time she felt powerless. In the end, she was knocked out by Urza's attack and lost control of her body in the air. Urza followed closely behind, waving his spear and delivering the final fatal blow to Urza. Successful. Urza roared excitedly, her eyes shining with victory. At this moment, the armor on Urza's feet flashed with light, and she held the sword between her toes to block Urza's attack. What? Urza looked at Urza in shock, not expecting that she could still do this. Urza stood on the ground with one hand, held both swords with both feet and did a Thomas pirouette, forcing Urza to take a few steps back. Then he threw the sword upwards with both feet, and with a strong hand on the ground, he jumped up to catch the ball. Hold the two swords and strike hard at Urza. Natwaka. Scarlet. The two roared loudly, the sword and the gun collided again, and the huge energy impact instantly completely destroyed the entire dungeon to ashes. I didn't expect that we were evenly matched. Urza panted and looked at Ed. Urza looked at her with a serious face. On par. That's not true. The final form of my 10-ring spear hasn't been shown yet. Urza looked at Urza and sneered disdainfully. The spear began to change continuously, and finally settled in its final form. Holy spear and holy stone world. Urza smiled disdainfully and pointed the spear at Urza. This is the holy spear made by the best blacksmith in Edalis. Its strike can shake the earth. Urza stared at her seriously, her body suddenly burst into dazzling light, and as the light dissipated, she put on a pink armor. Fairy armor. You don't need me to tell you to understand why I gave this armor the name of the guild. Urza looked at Urza with a firm face, the magic power in her body began to surge, and she looked so confident and powerful. Ha, it seems that this is your strongest armor, so let's see which one is stronger, your strongest armor or my strongest holy spear. Urza roared and charged forward with a spear in hand. Urza's eyes narrowed and she also charged forward with a spear in hand. The final battle between Urza. Advent. Chapter 123 Edalis 22. Ah, two deafening roars were like thunder tearing through the night sky, shaking the entire space. Two Urzas, one from a local native and one from another dimension, were rushing towards each other at the same time, their eyes burning with determined fire, as if they were going to devour each other. The spear and sword in his hand drew a dazzling arc in the night sky, and then they intersected fiercely, making a deafening collision sound. Sparks flew everywhere, and the sound of metal colliding echoed above the ruins, as if even time had stopped at this moment. This is not just a battle between weapons, but also a fierce collision of the beliefs and ideas that two Urzas hold on to. Their powers come from different worlds, but are equally powerful and shocking. The two forces intertwined to form an unparalleled destructive force that instantly destroyed surrounding buildings. The members of Ed Fairy Tale were still immersed in the joy of victory, hugging each other and celebrating their hard-won victory. However, the scene in front of them suddenly woke them up from their joy. They watched the duel between the two Urzas in shock, filled with fear and uneasiness. Debris from the building was flying everywhere, dust was flying, and the entire space seemed to be shaking. Everyone in Ed Fairy Tale fled in panic. They wanted to escape from this terrifying place, but fear was like an invisible chain, tightly binding their hearts. It's terrible. These two guys are simply monsters. Let's run. Someone shouted in horror. However, just when everyone was panicking, Mirajan stepped forward. She took a deep breath, and a strong magical aura emanated from her body. Her body instantly became mysterious and powerful, transforming into the image of the powerful demon Satan. She flapped her wings and flew rapidly in midair, her eyes firm and sharp. She shouted loudly to her frightened companions, "Calm down. Now is not the time to panic." Her voice echoed in the night sky like thunder, instantly making everyone regain their composure. At the same time, Lucy on the ground was not idle either. She quickly summoned Leo Loki, and Loki appeared in a mighty manner, blocking everyone. He waved his huge fist and smashed the gravel flying towards everyone one by one. Mirajan and Loki worked closely together, with one intercepting in the air and the other guarding on the ground to ensure that no piece of gravel could harm everyone. Under their protection, everyone in Ed Fairy Tale gradually regained their composure and began to evacuate this dangerous place in an orderly manner. However, the duel between the two Urzas continued. Their powers constantly collided and intertwined, forming powerful energy fluctuations that made the entire space tremble. This duel seems to have no end, and it can only end when one of them falls. Boom. With a loud noise, the two fell into a fierce battle, with only one thought in each other's minds: knock the other party to the ground. Their attacks became more and more fierce, and the once prosperous royal capital was reduced to ruins, with rubble scattered everywhere. Each attack destroyed more areas. Ed Urza watched helplessly as the country he loved suffered so much destruction, and his heart burned with rage. Furious, she increased the speed and power of her attacks. At the same time, Urza noticed that everyone in Ed Fairy Tale in this world was terrified, and Mirajan, Lucy and Loki were fully protecting everyone. Encouraged by her companions, Urza further unleashes powerful magic. Advertisement. When the two of them used their last and strongest blow, a huge shock wave swept over instantly like an overwhelming mountain, as if it was going to swallow up the entire royal capital. Everyone in Ed Fairy Tale, the Tide Soldiers, and Mirajan, Lucy, and Loki flying in the air were all spared, and they were all violently thrown away by this suffocating force. However, at this thrilling moment, the two people who caused this earth-shattering shock wave looked at each other in shock, unable to believe what was happening in front of them. The equipment on their bodies has been changed beyond recognition and is in dilapidated condition. The holy spear in Urza's hand was only a pole covered with dense cracks. The spear that originally shone with divine light was now dim, as if it had lost its soul. Urza's extremely strong armor was shattered into pieces, falling down like raindrops and scattered around her feet. The holy stone world actually. Urza's eyes widened and he looked at the pole in his hand with disbelief. This pole is the most powerful magic prop carefully crafted by the world's top craftsmen. The armor is broken. Urza was also panting and staring at Ed. Urza never dreamed that it would end like this. The magic power has been used up. Urza was completely weak, half kneeling and gasping for breath, looking at the surrounding ruins with confused eyes, but a raging fire was ignited in her heart. At this moment, a surge of power from nowhere made Urza struggle to stand up. Like a ferocious beast, she rushed straight towards Urza and punched her hard face. I won't give up. I can't lose. For the king's plan. For the eternal magic. For this country. Naturally, Urza was not to be outdone, and without hesitation, she fought back in the same way, punching Urza hard on the head, knocking her staggering. Ah! Urza roared. She used all her strength to hug Urza's waist and threw her to the ground. Her hands held Urza tightly, as if to press her into the ground, and the huge force even caused several cracks to break in the floor. Urza showed no sign of weakness. She grabbed Urza's hand tightly, then quickly raised her other hand and punched Urza fiercely. This blow directly threw Urza to the ground, but Urza did not stop moving. She quickly turned over and sat on Urza's body, using her weight and strength to suppress her arms. Eternity. Kingdom. Just for these illusory things, how many innocent people are you going to sacrifice? What cruel methods are you going to use to destroy them? Isn't it enough harm to them? Urza's voice resounded through the entire space like thunder, filled with endless anger and grief. Her eyes flashed with strong condemnation of Urza's actions, as if she wanted to engulf the latter completely. Urza was furious, and her fists fell like raindrops, hitting Urza hard. However, just when she was concentrating on attacking, Urza suddenly stood up and gave her a violent headbutt at lightning speed. The blow caught Urza off guard and her body fell backwards instantly. Urza struggled on the ground, trying to stand up again. A low roar came from her mouth. This is human beings. All this is just to survive. You who grew up in Aslandan cannot understand this kind of pain at all. She used all her strength to finally stand up, and then rushed towards Urza without hesitation. Aren't we alive now? Urza stood up with the same effort and rushed forward to face Ed. The two Urzas were like enemies, holding each other's bodies tightly, refusing to give in to each other. They pressed their foreheads against each other, and Urza gritted her teeth and spoke word by word. Advertisement. Aren't we already exhausted of our magic power? But we are still alive and well. Look at ourselves. Urza's words were like a sharp sword, piercing Urza's heart, as if to completely penetrate her soul. Urza was stunned immediately, her eyes became empty, and she stared at Urza blankly, with a hesitant expression on her face. Does it mean that we must have magical powers to be called human beings? The evidence of our being human beings and our ability as living beings is to have a strong will to overcome all cowardice and fear. Urza's voice echoed in Urza's ears like thunder, and she became more and more excited, roaring and hugging Urza tightly. Urza felt Urza's power, but her resistance gradually weakened and she finally stopped struggling. Her eyes gradually became complicated, and she looked at Urza blankly, as if she was beginning to think about what the other person said. Urza was keenly aware of Urza's inner wavering, so she let go of her hand, grabbed her shoulders, came close to her, and said loudly. Listen, another me. You are just like me. We all have evil and weak sides, and this is nothing to be ashamed of. There is a dark corner in everyone's heart, but there must also be a kind and friendly side. Stop avoiding your true emotions and listen to your true inner voice. Stop being influenced by others and become a puppet of the kingdom. Quote. Urza's words were like a clear spring flowing into Urza's dry heart, making her begin to re-examine the meaning of her existence. Her eyes shone with a mixture of confusion and a glimmer of hope. After saying that, Urza's hand slowly slid down from Urza's body, as if she had lost all strength. At this moment, Urza had reached her limit. She could no longer support her body and fell heavily to the ground like a tree blown down by the wind. At the same time, Urza finally couldn't hold on any longer and also collapsed on the ground. Her eyes were still looking straight at the sky, her eyes full of confusion and helplessness. Suddenly, tears slowly flowed down from the corners of her eyes. She just lay weakly on the ground, crying silently, but a faint smile appeared on her face. You win. Scarlet, I can't defeat you, I lost. Urza lay on the cold ground, looked up at the white clouds in the sky with a smile, and spoke softly in a relaxed tone. There is no victory or defeat. We are all Urza, aren't we? Urza lay on the ground, looked at the white clouds in the sky and said with a smile. Hearing these words, Urza couldn't help but feel surprised. She quickly turned her head to look at Urza in disbelief, then back to staring at the vast blue sky with the same smile. Yeah, Urza murmured to himself, as if responding to Urza's words. At this moment, their moods seemed to reach some kind of resonance. At this moment, victory or defeat no longer matters, because they all understand that no matter what the outcome, they are the same person, Urza. Chapter 124 Edilus 23. At this moment, in a certain corner of the royal capital, Mistgun, who had disappeared for a long time, appeared here without any warning. His appearance was like a pebble thrown into a calm lake, causing ripples. Mr. Gang's expression was extremely complicated, as if he was experiencing a fierce struggle in his heart. His eyes were fixed on the mysterious device in front of him, with a complex light flashing in his eyes. That device seemed to have some kind of magical power, attracting his eyes and making him unable to look away. This is where the FCK is made, Mr. Gang whispered to himself, with an indescribable heaviness in his voice. His eyes wandered over the equipment, seeming to be searching for something, and seeming to be recalling something. Just as Mr. Gang was deep in thought, his expression suddenly changed, and he hurriedly turned his head and asked, "Who is it?" There was an unconcealable nervousness in his voice. Before he finished speaking, two burly figures slowly emerged from the darkness. Their appearance seemed to bring an inexplicable sense of depression to this corner. One of them slowly said, "It's me, Prince." Mr. Gang took a closer look and couldn't help being surprised. It turned out that the people standing in front of them were Ponsalili and Gajil. He never dreamed that he would meet them in this place, especially seeing that the relationship between the two seemed to be quite close, although Lily looked a little swollen. Ponsalili's appearance was indeed a bit strange at the moment. His body seemed to be larger than before, and he looked a bit bloated. Gajil, on the other hand, stood beside him with an indifferent expression, as if he had been accustomed to all this. Mr. Gang looked at the two people in front of him, and he couldn't help but feel an inexplicable emotion in his heart. He never imagined that he would meet them again in this place. What surprised him even more was how close their relationship had become. "Oh, Mistgun, it's you. Why did I smell a familiar smell? What are you doing here?" Gajil rubbed his fists and looked at Mistgun in confusion. He had just finally convinced Lily to be his cat and was in a good mood when he suddenly smelled a familiar smell and walked over looking for it. "Prince, isn't this where the FCK is?" Ponsalili looked at the equipment behind Mistgun and looked at him clearly. Although he was a little confused as to why Mistgun appeared here, he didn't ask too much. "Wait a minute, Lily, did you just call him a prince? Could it be that he is?" Gajil suddenly realized that Lily had always called Mistgun the prince, and looked at Mistgun in surprise. Advertisement. Lily nodded and said, "Yes, he is the prince of this country, Jello Anazar." "Oh, no wonder you and Jello look so similar, it turns out you are him." Gajil clapped his hands and said in sudden realization. "You just said this is FCK. Is it the one that absorbs the magic of our world?" Gajil, who finally joined the cat family, was in a great mood and started talking more. He walked closer to FCK, staring closely at this machine that seemed ordinary but contained huge magic power. His heart was full of doubts, and at the same time there was a trace of uneasiness, as if he could feel that this machine was constantly absorbing the magic power of their world. "Yes, Gajil." Ed Jalal's voice was low and firm. He turned around and looked directly at Gajil, as if he wanted to see through his heart. "This is FCK. It has been absorbing the magic power of Aslan's world and continuously transporting the power of our world there." His words were full of helplessness and determination, as if he had already connected with this machine. Machines are closely connected with the fate of this world. He slowly walked towards the FCK, each step seemed so heavy, as if he was carrying the weight of the whole world. His face became more and more solemn, and the light in his eyes became more and more determined. "I have been silently watching Aslandan. Although there is war there, it is simply a rich land compared to the world we live in." Ed Jalal's voice was full of envy and longing, and his eyes flashed with longing for the future. "Since I returned to this world, a brand new idea came to my mind: use that world as a container." His voice suddenly rose, full of passion and determination, as if he wanted to inject the magic of the entire world into that rich world. When Ponsalili heard this, his expression suddenly changed. He looked at Ed Jello in astonishment, as if he couldn't believe his ears. He had always been loyal to Ed Jello, but at this moment, he felt an unprecedented fear and uneasiness. "Your Highness the Prince, what are you going to do? This is too ridiculous. Besides," his voice trembled, as if he could not continue to say the following words. Ed Jello turned around, looked at him deeply, and then waved his hand to indicate that he should stop talking. His eyes were full of firmness and determination, as if he was ready for everything. He walked to the railing in front of the FCK and stopped. He stretched out his hands and grasped the railing tightly, as if he wanted to pour all his power into the machine. His fingers were tightly clasped on the railing, and the veins on his hands popped out, making him look extremely ferocious. His face was as dark as ink, but the light in his eyes was getting brighter and brighter, as if it was going to illuminate the darkness of the entire world. This world has suffered from magic for too long. Endless wars, endless plunder, and endless deception. Ed Jalal's voice was full of anger and pain, as if he wanted to vent all his resentment. Advertisement. And to eradicate all the conflicts in this world, this is the only way to do it. His voice suddenly became firm and powerful, as if he was pouring all his hope and determination into these words. He turned around and looked at Gajil and Ponsalili, his face showing firmness and determination that he had never seen before. Reversal, FCK. Transfer all the magic from this world to that world. Eliminate all the magic from this world. His voice was full of determination and courage, as if he was ready to face all difficulties and challenges. Ponsalili looked at him, filled with shock and worry. He knew that once Ed Jalal's decision was made, there would be no turning back. But, if you really do this, then, those people who are accustomed to the existence of magic. What should they do? How should they adapt? And Lily anxiously persuaded Ed Jalal. He didn't want anything to happen to Ed Jalal. In the end, he hesitated, and finally roared loudly. And if those people find out, you won't even be able to survive in this world. Ponsalili's words made Gajil look at Ed Jalal in shock. Only now did he know how much sacrifice Ed Jalal had to make. Ed Jalal lowered his head and was silent for a long time. Then he reversed the FCK without saying a word. Looking at the FCK who started to reverse, he raised his head and smiled. When Lily used your cover to let me go down to Aslandan, I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to having no one to serve me, and I wasn't used to not being able to eat fine meals. Ed Jalal looked at Ponsalili, then turned to look at Gajil. But I met a group of very good partners. They took me out of fear, allowing me to grow to where I am now. So I believe that with the company of their relatives and partners, they will definitely be able to get used to a life without magic in the future. As for me, Ed Jalal raised his head and seemed to be looking in a certain direction through the roof. Every change requires someone to sacrifice, someone must become the villain and hero. Lily's eyes lit up instantly. He looked at Ed Jalal happily and said. So your idea is to let Edalus be destroyed once, and then when the dragons are leaderless, you will stand up and become the king who leads them to happiness. I support you, your highness the prince. Ed Jalal shook his head and said. No, it's not me. I have never advanced or retreated with this world. I don't have the qualifications. I will be the villain, and you are the king of the new century. No, you should do it. As a traitor, I am not qualified, and as a transcendent, I should not become a king. Lily yelled at Ed Jalal angrily. That's enough. You too. What did you say about the villain hero king? Mistgun, you be ********D. Lily is my cat. If you want to be the king, you can be the king yourself. Aren't you the villain? I've decided to do it. Gajil instantly pointed angrily at Ed Jalal and roared, and then ran out before they could react.